Everyone, and welcome here to the JBL Quantum Cup. We are 2 regions deep already, and it is time for us once again to join into yet another region. As I said, JBL Quantum Cup is already started, but that means that we still have to get through a lot more of this weekend. My name is Fluke, and once again, I will be your host for this region of Fortnite here. JBL Quantum Cup, you guys might not know what it is, so let's go find out what JBL Quantum Cup is all about. Three games, 3 days, one big weekend. We've already gone through 2 of the regions and 1 of the games so far. We still have PUBG and Valorant to go. And speaking of 3s, that means we do need to keep and continue with our 3 theme here on the desk. That means I've got 2 more people on my left here. I've got Elfish Guy and I've got Aussie Antics towards the end. Lads, welcome here to the JBL Quantum Cup Fortnite in the Asia region.
Thank you, Luke. I was hoping that you were going to go with the hottest, because that was one of the key titles that we saw in the video just there. Hottest games, hottest titles, hottest casters. I would have appreciated, but I guess 3, that kind of works as well.
The 3 vibe kind of works. 3 games. We now got, what, 5 today. We'll stick to that. I think that's pretty good. I'm excited. It's going to be a good night of Fortnite all around. But yeah, I think definitely hands down hottest casters.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, I don't want to lie on broadcast here, Jordan. So you're definitely bringing the average down. But, you know, sometimes somebody has to bring down an average because we can't all be 10s.
That's fine. That's fine. Yeah. Fair enough, I guess. I'll take it if I'm going to be the punching bag today.
Well, you're in the middle, Jordan, so that's why you're the punching bag. But lads, let's go and have a look at how the JBL Quantum Cup is set up for us here. The event overview. We've already had a lot of our qualifiers here for Fortnite, and we've already pounded through 2 of the regions, Europe and NA, crossed off the list. And now we're into Asia. We've got 2 days left here. We've got Valorant group stages and PUBG Asia, which Jordan, I'm sure you're super excited for. And then Valorant at the end there to round out the JBL Quantum Cup.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to PUBG. I mean, I'm kind of keen to check out some of the Valorant as well. You know, I haven't had that much exposure to Valorant, but I will tune into a little bit of that because North American Valorant definitely popping off at the moment. PUBG Asia, though, that's my bread and butter, isn't it, really? It's going to be PCS, APAC, really all over again, and I'm super keen for that one because I do love to keep up with the PUBG and, you know, obviously Fortnite today, so that's where it's at for the moment.
Yeah, exactly. We see here, this is how the games have been broken up for the JBL Quantum Cup. Fortnite, the only one with qualifiers, and unfortunately for PUBG, they've only got their playoffs so far, so there's just all these invited teams coming in. And then Valorant, as you said, we've got group stages as well. So we've got a lot of games still ahead of us, lads. We've got a lot of exciting content left for the JBL Quantum Cup. So far, Aussie, how have you enjoyed the JBL Quantum Cup?
Been pretty awesome. I watched the EU games, I watched the NA games. I mean, tail end of EU, it was pretty early. I know you were awake for it, doing well, Fluke. But yeah, no, the games are phenomenal. I mean, with that prize money on the line and the format, which I'm sure we're going to talk about later, it does. It lends itself to some really, really good Fortnite.
Yeah, speaking of prize pool, this is what it is for the cup. We've got 200,000 total prize pool here. Fortnite is taking 90,000, PUBG 25,000, and Valorant 50,000. So far, with Fortnite as well, that is split up into the 3 regions as well. So $30,000 going to each of those. And that's a juicy little penny purse here, Jordan.
Certainly is. Yeah, I mean, obviously a fair bit of cash being thrown around at the moment, as is generally the case in Fortnite, and it's great to see a fair chunk of that going to the Asian region as well. I know normally the Asia region is a region that doesn't quite receive as much of a benefit from some of these games, not necessarily just Fortnite, but even other titles. But yeah, even split, 30%. Well, 33%, I suppose, going each way.
0.3 repeater, Jordan. Use your maths properly. You know, we don't try not to do it on broadcast, but now I'm trying to.
I was doing some quick maths on stream earlier today, and I got to say, Shio, he was very impressed with my addition and subtraction. So I'll just take that one. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm glad that you've used those fingers to the best of your ability here. But you know, this prize pool is it's pretty nice for the Fortnite guys, right?
It's very, very nice. And $30,000 going to OC in Asia. Usually, the prize pool is split up based on player base. So EU gets the majority, NA gets a big chunk, and then OC in Asia usually gets the little amount. So $30,000. That's a lot. The player who comes first place, or the team I should say, getting the same share as EU and NA first place, that's massive.
Yeah, it provides a bit more legitimacy across these players as well, meaning that they can vie for the right prize pools as well. But now, enough about the generalization of the JBL Quantum Cup. Now let's deep dive a little bit into the Asia format. Let's see how it has panned out for Fortnite so far. A little bit different to some of these other competitions that we've got for the Cup so far. We had qualifiers, 200 total duos. That dwindled all the way down to 50, where then the top 10 advance into the playoffs now. Now, we've also got a few invited duos as well. And I mean, Asia Fortnite, it's going to be intense. It's only 5 matches as well.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, look, 22 teams at the moment coming into the competition today. So to go down from 200 to 22 means it's quite cutthroat. If you're qualifying through, there aren't actually that many opportunities to make it in. So you've already had to work hard to get there. And then you've got to come into today and perform pretty nicely. Over the course of 5 games, it's not a huge amount of games to play with. We've seen that in EU and NA. 1 or 2 really, really good games can make a big difference.
Yeah, 1 or 2 games will be the big difference here, especially towards the end when we break down the prize pool, where how it does stand. You really do have to go those last few games. Even if you're in the lead, you need to hold on to it, because not everyone's getting prize money for this one, and people really do want to end up near the top. And yeah, it's going to create some pretty incredible games for sure.
Yeah, exactly. 5 matches, and let's go and have a look at how the points are going to be panning out for these matches as well. The lads talked on that every single one of these matches is going to be super important, and you can see already with the points distribution that these placement points are going to be super important.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when you're talking about Fortnite, you've always got to talk about eliminations to placement ratios. 4 points for elimination, but 90 points for first. That's massive. And when it comes to Fortnite, we see a whole bunch of different formats. This one, while being very placement heavy, it's top-end placement heavy. You've got to get inside that 10th place. Sometimes formats we've seen getting placement points as early as 75th place in solos. So this really does mean that you need to get towards that win, but you can have those pop-off games. I know we saw some in EU, right? There were some big games, Jordan.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's funny that you should talk about that as well, because that was kind of the storyline that I went into NA with, and I thought, look, if you're not getting at least a win out of this, you're probably not going to make it into first place. That actually ended up being not the case. We saw our victors going 2nd, 5th, 2nd, 10th, and 11th, I think was their placement.
Wow.
So it is a big amount of points coming out from first, but let's be real, you can still get it done with some seconds, and I think at the end of the day, consistent placements is always going to be converted into a good overall placing.
Exactly, and we saw that in the Europe region as well. We saw a few, like, Frey and Chris, they were getting these very high consistents, but they weren't getting the eliminations to pop it all off. And now when we saw the people who eventually won European region, Chasen and Thomas, they were the ones that were getting a lot of these eliminations and very consistent high placement points as well. So it feels like consistency is key across this, right?
Yeah, for sure. And as duos as well, so getting eliminations, it's a little bit easier in solos, but at the same time, it isn't full straight trios, so should be interesting to see how they can kind of jump up there and have those big games. But what it does mean, when there are 4 points for eliminations on the board, those last couple of games really do matter. You're going to go big or go home. So quite often with formats like this, you'll see a team jump out into the lead at the start, but it doesn't mean they're going to easily be able to hold it. All it takes is running into one of those teams that needs to have a big game early. They take you out, and it's all over from there.
Exactly. You touched on that it is duos here for the JBL Quantum Cup, so let's see which duos will be competing for us today. As Jordan said, it is 22 so far, so I'm sure Aussie are biting at the bit here to start talking about a few of these duos, so let's run through a bit of them.
There's some big names on here as well. So obviously we've got OC and Asia being represented. We do have Hood J duo there going from World Cup. We have an Asia World Cup team here as well. It is mostly OCE players on here as well, but a couple of those Asia guys are very, very scary. But I've got 100% eyes out on Jinx and Worthy there. They're looking very scary. Came off the back of Trio FNCS win, obviously with their counterpart Alec, their trio mate, still competing tonight with Pumpkin. Going to be exciting to see how they go, but there are some really big names here. And of course, we've got Fresh, Carry On, and we got a bit of variety in there. Swagger, Souls, and Toby.
I'm seeing Sync and Volks, Jarl Zore, Poppy's in there as well. You already mentioned Alec, Repulse. A lot of players from the ANZ region. Obviously, we're kind of a little bit biased in that respect. We might hope to see those guys having a good day today. But yeah, like you said, Luke, there's a huge number across the board here that could come away with a solid victory. I mean, I think there's a few that might be expected to perform a little bit better overall. But at the end of the day, when you do only have the 5 games, I think it can come down to 1 or 2 really good games, and if you just pop off in a couple, maybe as an underdog, maybe as a dark horse, you can actually make that that first place yours.
Yeah, exactly, and it is a very light lobby as well. The only 22 duos that we've got here out of the 50 potential that we could have in a 400-man lobby. But just seeing this now, as you said, Jordan, it could be one of those games where you just have a big pop-off. You know, you get towards those placement points towards the top, you get a few eliminations here and there, and that's where it starts feeling good for you as a duo, right?
Yeah, and there's going to be some teams. I mean, the one that I saw there, if we're going to talk about pop-off games, we're going to talk about people who go big or go home, Repulse and Stevo. That is, Repulse has been known to be the most aggressive player in OC across the board. His tournaments either finish insanely strong, start strong, or he dwindles off. There's no in between. He'll be in first place. He'll just need to get coast through to maybe a top 5. He'll still go for the first place with 10 eliminations. That's just how he plays. So it's going to be about, can some of those consistent teams, maybe like Worthy and Jinx, can they avoid those players, or can they hold them off if they need to. So, and again, you've got a bit of that Asia contingent in there. I haven't since World Cup seen Asia go against OCE, so how their playstyle plays into it could affect things massively. The different regions always have their different metas, like any esports.
Yeah, it really does feel like this first match is going to set the pace for us. But let's go and have a look to see what these players are playing for. We said a little bit earlier on, $30,000 per region, and this is how the breakdown goes. Only 5 duos get paid out here, Jordan. $15,000 for first, dwindles all the way down to $2,000.
Yeah, I think that's the key takeaway from this graphic, isn't it? You only get paid out down to 5th, and well, we will say it's a fairly light lobby in that we've got 22 duos, so you're actually looking at that as almost a quarter of the players do get paid out, but respectively, you've got to be in the top 5. It's not necessarily an easy task in a competition as strong as this one.
And it's top heavy too. First place,
Yeah.
$15,000. So even the difference between playing for second and first is insane. So when you have that mentality, not like, hey, I'll take my easy 4th, there's a good bit of the prize money. No, you're going for first, because even from 5th to first, that's $13,000 the difference. And quite a lot of Fortnite tournaments recently have been spread out where it's quite thin at the top. You need to get in the top to get the money, but once you're up there, as long as you place, you're okay. Right now, not the case. First and second, that jump alone is massive, which is awesome. It's exciting to see for tournaments. You want to reward the victors, right?
Do you think that that's going to start to play into the playstyle of some of these duos, right? Do you think that's going to influence them a lot more?
It's interesting that you should ask that, because again, if I was to draw back onto the experience that we saw in NA and EU, there was 2 different schools of thought, right? EU, very aggressive. They were happy to take those kinds of fights. For North America, it was quite a bit more of a passive playstyle, and as I understood, that was just generally something to do with the metas that we do tend to see in those 2 regions. But even still, it's quite interesting to note that even though you might think that in a format like this, you'd be looking for the placements very, very heavily compared to the elims, that wasn't necessarily the case so much in EU. And I wonder if we'll follow suit here in ANZ and Asia.
Well, you've also got the new season. The new season has just come out for Fortnite, so people are still figuring out the meta, which almost always will kind of lend itself to being more aggressive. If you don't exactly have the pieces together for how you're going to consistently place, maybe you don't know how you want to rotate with the new items, we have the Rift Fish back, it's going to make things differently. But in Fortnite, eliminations are pretty standard. They're the same as always, right? You still know how to fight, and so I think a lot of players lean on that, especially in EU. They do it best. NA, they have one of the best practice scenes, so even in this like week since we've had a new season, they've had a couple tournaments, they've had some practice. OCE hasn't really. So this is going to be one of the first major tournaments we've had in OCE or Asia on this new season. So I think lending to the playstyle, I don't actually know how they're going to go. I think they're still trying to figure it out as well.
Yeah, it seems like this tournament is going to be quite exciting, but what is quite exciting as well is the fact that JBL are constantly doing stuff across here. You guys, if you do want to check out their JBL headsets, you can check them out at amazon.com/JBL. We've got some sick ones here hovering around the desk, and I'm sure the rest of the talent as well will be rocking those for the entire weekend of the JBL Quantum Cup. They've been quite comfy, they've been quite nice as well. We tested out a few here in the studio. It's always nice. So amazon.com/JBL if you want to check them out. So we talked the fact that there is a brand new season here. Is this going to mean that we're going to be seeing them try and lean towards maybe like the North American playstyle because they have had that really good practice scene?
Yeah, I think it depends. I mean, most of the times, most regions have their eyes on NA when it comes to practice. How are the NA players playing? Are they going low ground? Are they going high ground? Are they rotating early? That's what they base it off. They VOD review. They go and see what they're doing as well. So it's going to be interesting to see, but the players that haven't done that research are going to be very much stuck in last season. Last season, the meta almost in every season, get high ground. You get high ground, you look down, you take everyone out. Not the case in the current season. You've got Rift Fish back in the game now, so you've got Rift-to-goes, you've still got shockwaves, and going for high ground right now without powerful shotguns just doesn't feel that strong. You get contested, you give it up. So I think it's going to be about who has learned that, who's done their homework, but who's going to adapt early, because it's a lighter lobby. They haven't played anything like this. When it comes to Storm Surge, they don't have to worry about Storm Surge for at least the first 2 thresholds. So that's going to change up how aggressive they play early. But OCE is always known for being super aggressive. Do they factor that in, or do they just stick to the gameplay they know? Like Repulse, for example, if he's not getting eliminations, I guarantee he's going to get bored, or he's not going to play his normal best Fortnite because he's going to be rusty. He's going to go to endgame. I haven't shot anything. What do I do now? So I don't know how it's going to play out.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty interesting. Well, so far, after what we've seen, Jordan, with the JBL Quantum Cup in Fortnite, we've had some very interesting matches, and now we are into our first interesting match. Number 1 is underway here, JBL Quantum Cup for Asia and Fortnite. I'll leave it with the boys, and we'll see you after.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to this one, Aussie. It's great to be back again for some Fortnite as well. And yeah, checking out some Asian Fortnite, which for me personally is a first. I've really only ever covered the ANZ stuff, although I guess there was that early year of AO, which might have had a couple of players there. Either way, look, I think there's a few questions that we have to answer straight off the bat here as we do get into game number one. A, is there going to be any contests off the drop? And my suspicion here would be probably unlikely, given that this is a lighter lobby. And the second question for me is, how passive is the early game actually going to be? Because again, taking some experience from the North American region, it was very, very passive in the early game. And I think we might get a similar kind of gameplay, considering there's just not that many players in the lobby, in the map at the moment, that the likelihood of them running into each other is already diminished. Yeah. And then from there, they're thinking, well, look, actually, there's so much space that we can take. Do we really need to be taking this fight?
I mean, based off this alone, we've seen Jalen and Zora flying in for Sweaty Sands. Obviously noticed that no one else is going Holly Hedges. So we now have Zora taking Sweaty Sands and Jalen taking Holly Hedges, where we have one of our Asian teams kind of sticking towards that far, far west side of the map, getting next to no loot. No one's at Coral Castle. No one's at Misty Meadows. Yet we have teams that are pushed up against each other on these little kind of positionings which don't have a lot of loot. So right now, it's really going to play into the hands of people who are confident enough to go one of those big POIs, because they're going to get a lot more loot, as I already see Carry On in the feed with Fresh getting elimination over there at Pleasant Park. And Retail Road, just, I've never watched a tournament where we have Salty Towers, Weeping Woods, Misty Meadows, and Steamy Stacks all uncontested.
I mean, that's something that if these teams are having a look back, and by the way, we did just see our first elim of the game, if these teams are looking back at the VOD, or if they've got someone watching, they might get the heads up there going into game 2, game 3, that these are actually areas of the map that are open that you might want to go and have a look at and see if you can maybe lock that down for the next few games.
Yeah, and coming into this new season as well, there's no mythic POIs, there's no insanely strong locations that give you loot that no one else gets. Almost all the mythics or exotics are out of the competitive playlist, so there's nothing like that. It's just getting a solid POI with a lot of loot to yourself. So right now, if Jalen and Zora don't perform this game, they have absolutely no excuse, as they have two major POIs that alone, each of them gives enough loot for duos. So I'm looking at teams like that as well, but we do have Toby on the telly, and then we do have Spaghetti Souls, obviously Swagger Souls, going up against Olive and Zapdos. Now, Olive and Zapdos aren't known for being incredible pros in OCE, haven't placed anything massively, but they definitely have their number matched when it comes against Toby and Swag, because Toby and Swag, they don't play a lot of Fortnite.
Well, I think that might be ringing just a little bit true. It's a very, very quick elim for those two. I got to say, this has been a little bit more interesting in the early game than what we saw from North America, because dead set, didn't see an elim for like 20 minutes in the first game of North America. It took that long for us. It was like circle 4 or 5 before we actually started to, start seeing some fights going on. But this has worked out a little bit better in our favor, at least as far as viewers are concerned. For Toby and Swagger, maybe not exactly what they were hoping for.
It's going to be hard. And at the same time, honestly, in the current season, in Fortnite as well, it's not a game that you can come into from playing other games and do well. Right now, we do have Zapdos flexing one of the newer modes that just came out with the Halo collaboration. But yeah, honestly, Toby and Swagger, they didn't drop the best location as well. That gas station particularly doesn't have a lot of loot, especially for 2 players, especially if you're going to go up against players that have your number matched and then some on skill level. You need a bit of loot to equal that out, and Zapdos clearly, enjoying the spotlight right now. And it's going to be interesting to see how the rest of this plays out, because, like you said, NA, they didn't run into each other too much. It's because they practice day in, day out. They know where everyone drops. They know where the scary players are. OCE doesn't really have that, especially when you combine Asia, as we're seeing now, Hoodjay right now. This is a very, very Asian drop, if I had to pick one. It looks like a very weak drop, but it's incredibly smart if you want to play kind of passive, you wanted to get your loot, because fishing right now in the new season is incredibly, incredibly strong.
Yeah, you can get those rift fish, obviously. Big factor. Mobility, rotation, that's always something that's important, not only in Fortnite, but other Battle Royales as well. So if you can lock that down, that's what you're going to be looking for, and I'd say Hoodjay isn't going to be particularly contested in the meanwhile, right? It's a very, very light lobby, not going to be seeing too much going on here, so should have all the time in the world to grab as many fish as you can and see what you can pick up.
The only fear of that being in a light lobby as well is the rift fish's kind of strength actually diminishes. The lower the lobby, the less people running around, the more you are a target if you do hit the skies. If you rift and there's 6 other people with you, fantastic. But if you rift, there's only 1 other person with you and it's your teammate, one of you is most likely going to get beamed. So we'll have to see how that plays into it. But rift fish in any way, though, very strong. You really only have 2 forms of mobility now. Rift fish and shockwaves. That's it.
Yeah, and that was a key factor, a key talking point in North America. We were just always going into the late game game, into the end game, looking at who's got the Rift Fish, who's got the Shockwaves, how many of them have they got, and you could almost make an informed prediction or estimation as to who might come away with the win just based on those items. So definitely going to be something that we'll be keeping an eye on as we go throughout the Asian games here as well.
Definitely something you have to look out for always as well. And in these lobbies, it is going to matter as much. And again, there's a lot of different things that are going to change as unfortunately Sinnoh catching the shark here, not really wanting to go for that one too much. But Hujay needs to be careful too, though. They're free on the island, but I did see Sorif over at Craggy, and that's obviously Sorif and Luda. Luda been going Craggy for seasons upon seasons now, knows the drop, knows the rotations. And the thing is, like we said with the replay mode, figuring out where drops are that are uncontested, you know these OCE players are going to try and figure out where the Asia players are going as well, and if they're looking for an elimination or an aggressive push, that's going to be one they're looking for. Not saying Asian players are worse by any means, but the way they play their fights is a lot more defensive, and they really just want to make it to endgame. If you can find them early and pressure them, that's where you might get a few of those eliminations. One duo on spawn is 8 points.
Speaking to Hujay and Sinnoh, what do you think the expectation is actually for them coming into this? Because as you've mentioned, they are one of the few Asian teams coming through, but they've got a pretty big org, they're pretty well known, so theoretically they must be coming into this one expecting to place highly at the very least.
Yeah, it's World Cup players as well, and they performed well at World Cup, represented their country well, and they've been very consistent since then. Obviously, playing against OCE players, they're going to be aware of the change in play style, so I think that's going to make already passive players play even more passive. They're really going to want to avoid those fights, but Asia excels in the end game. They're so smart at rotating. They know how to play safe, usually manage their Storm Surge, which isn't going to be a factor. Haven't talked about that too much. With this light of a lobby, Storm Surge, if you guys are tuning in home, you don't really know the function of Storm Surge. Very simply put, you have to deal damage throughout the lobby, so you're not the team with the least amount of damage done, but it's based on players alive. The first threshold needs 70 players alive going into second zone. We don't have that to start with, so that's not going to be a problem. So they can play safe, even safer than they usually do, and not be aggressed on Olive right now, though, pushing a fight right now, and this is not a team you want to fight. I mean, we're talking about the confidence of versing Toby and Swagger. Basil and Vortex, not the same caliber.
Yeah, you're talking about playing safe. There is anything but that happening, at least from this duo. Olive going to try and get in there. Basil definitely not too keen on seeing how this one's going to play out. Down on the low ground at the moment, so we'll just slow things down.
I can't actually pick who has the advantage here. Sorry, I said Vortex. I thought Vortex playing with someone else. Basil and Swirl, either way, still very, very scary fighting team. Olive as well, very scary pushing this one in. I don't know how Zapdos is going to go with this fight, though, but green tack right now. I can hear the tack burst charge coming out right now. Getting inside the box with the charge for Olive is never going to end well, and just like that, Zapdos and Olive go too aggressive. I don't think Basil and Swirl even had to use any of their meds on that one, and look at all the loot they've been brought, and that's one of the things you're going to see. I'm sure you saw it when watching EU and NA as well. The shotgun meta right now, if you have the charge, you've got to land a big charge shot. If you fall in someone's box, they have the tack, you have the charge. If you don't get a big shot first, you are going to lose every single time.
Now, I mean, and speaking of that loot, I think from memory, Olive had a Rift and 2 Shockwaves. So that's a nice couple of things just getting picked up. I mean, it's almost a hand delivery of the 2 best items, the ones that you want at least into the late game. So you can't complain about that at all.
Here it is, we did. So Vortex is in this playing with Jace as well. Now, Papi and Skids, this is an interesting one. I haven't seen Papi and Skids play too much recently. Skids, another player, very aggressive. Player now known for coming off the console track, actually. Stepping into PC recently, a few seasons ago, and already making massive, massive waves, which is just so fantastic to see. Coming off console, proving you can still go toe-to-toe with the PC guys as Jinx and Worthy. This is very, very scary for Lettuce and Hamapi right now. I think they're down there hiding out. They don't want to take this fight, and if they knew who was above them, they'd be even less likely to want to take this fight. This is, in my opinion, the best duo here today. In most people's opinion, the 2 best players in OCE ever playing together on the same team, coming off the back of a trio FNCS victory. That is not the team you want to run into.
Do Jinx and Worthy actually know that they're there, though? Because it doesn't seem like it.
Yeah. There's a good chance they don't actually right now. And again, with the sand right now, this has only been re-enabled the last couple of days. You can really hide out and hold this one. This is scary as well. Papi pushing forward now with Skids, trying to get some shots off here. Haven't got any tags, but showing how Papi's playing this one. Not too aggressive, but it's interesting to see, right? You would have thought, again, you talked about NA, almost no one got eliminated at the start of the game when you had a full lobby. These players don't need anything. They don't need Surge. They don't need the eliminations. They can just wait for endgame, and they still choose to go around, take some tags, kind of suss out what opponents are like, and that's what they're going to be trying to do, feeling out who's around them and how strong of the opponents they are. And a lot of the times, these guys are going to know each other based on skins, but also playstyle. You will definitely know if someone running at you is Repulse compared to an Asian player. It's going to be very different, and they're going to be able to tell.
I suppose now that we have had those early couple of elims, things might start to slow down a little bit. Teams are at the moment looking more like they want to just rotate in safely. AJ Power and Shora Dog, the ones that are actually quite far out, from the zone. They've got the Storm pushing out their back for the moment. And there is the shift over toward the west. It's interesting to note, and look, I don't know if this is anything to necessarily touch on, but I think in EU they had 5 western shifts. In NA we had something like 3 or 4. So it's been a very heavy western bias. Not sure what's going on with that at the moment, but it seems like that's going to follow suit again here in ANZ.
Yeah, okay, and the one thing I'm noticing from this map shot as well that looks a bit interesting is going to play out as we have Zora and Jarlan, who I said got a ridiculous amount of loot between Sweaty and Holly now pushing in, but they do have Repulse and Stevo coming in behind them, and you have Carry On and Fresh coming out of Pleasant. So if it does start lending itself towards these western zones, you have 3 or 4 of the best teams, I think, here today to win, all coming in on that western to northwestern edge, which means that if they don't go further into zone, which hopefully Jarlan and Zora do here, it means they're going to get set up near each other, and that's going to play out very poorly for them coming into endgame. It looks like the west part of the map is the one you don't want, as Zora going a little bit awry here in the car.
Yeah, we'll have to give them another couple of years before the driver's license gets approved. Either way, yeah, it looks like they're going to keep driving and going for a little bit more of a center position. Jinx and Worthy, on the other hand, looking pretty damn good for themselves. A couple of shockwaves there for Worthy. I didn't quite catch what Jinx had. I don't think he had any, nor any rifts, but at the end of the day, that's not too bad. Lots of shields available for the late game.
A lot of bounce pads as well, which when it comes to duos is a great form of mobility. Shockwaves you can use together, but they're still meant as solo mobility. You can still use them. They're kind of hard. A team that's this good will know how, but it's those bounce pads that are actually so underrated, and it's going to be interesting to see how these teams play. It's going to be either a tale of taking high ground early and somehow being able to hold it, but I honestly think the teams that are going to perform in the end game are those that can play the low and the mid ground and then maybe take height at the end. So I'm not looking too much at the rifts and shockwaves in these lobbies compared to maybe those of NA and EU, but we'll just have to see, because I know they're going to have eyes on height, and you don't want to be the one that's getting contested by 6 people trying to take it off you.
Yeah, on that topic, we were talking to the winners of NA, and they were saying that they weren't actually too sure about how the height contest timing should look. They'd been doing it a little bit earlier yesterday in the DreamHack Grand Finals, and coming into today, they actually started doing it a little bit later, just as the zone started to move, as opposed to prior to it moving. And they sort of felt like that actually worked out a little bit better for them. So I think that sort of ties in with what you're saying, that maybe a late contest for height is better than having the height from the outset and then being the one to get contested.
Height is always going to be the best way to win a game. It's just whether you can hold it. If you take it too early, you're going to have lots of teams going for you. They're going to use all their shockwaves on you. They're going to riff. They're going to try and take it. So if you can take it as late as possible, have it for that final closeout, that's when you really want it. And just as we saw there as we tuned in, interesting to note, Volk's having the Dragon shotgun in the inventory. Now, that's not playing out too much in many people's kind of competitive textbooks right now. We do have 3 shotguns in the game. You have the tack, you have the charge, but the Dragon shotgun isn't talked about a lot. It has 4 bullets in the chamber, but it uses all of them in the one shot. It's the only shotgun right now that without a charge up, like the charge, can one shot. Volks, by running that, is clearly showing that endgame he wants to play aggressive, he wants to get eliminations, as Vortex just misses the snipe there that would have opened that one up. So already showing that as much as Volks knows there's placement points on the line, I think endgame's when he's really going to try and rack up those eliminations.
I think that's fair enough, at least for the first couple of games of today. You know, you don't want to be going too hard in game number 1, getting knocked out early on in the piece and sitting there at 0 or maybe 10, 20 points. And 10, 20 points doesn't sound too bad, but when you think about the context of first place getting 90, we've seen games up to about 160, 170 points in one instance. Now, that's a huge game, let's be real. It was more on average around 100 to 130, but thinking about how far of a deficit you can actually fall to if you just have one bad game can be quite a scary prospect.
It's up there as well, and like I said, when we come towards these end games right now, as I'm pretty sure we see from this panning view, Jinx and Worthy are definitely dropping on squad. I think it's squad Z right now, trying to get that elimination. I don't see a teammate backing them up, and I can't imagine someone holding off Jinx and Worthy who's going after them right now. There it is, Worthy in the box with the blue tack, gets the clean up there. They get their second elimination on the board for Worthy, so I have to think Worthy took down the first teammate and then managed to find the second. So much loot here on a good part of zone, but interesting to see that everyone's going center of this zone, which is the way to play it, and it's on Holly. So right now they can go center, they can find a building, farm it out and sit in it, and this means the end game for how light the lobby was to start is probably going to stay quite stacked, because once you get to that point, you can't take a fight like Worthy just did. If you go in the box, you're going to get third party, you're going to get focused. Inside Holly with that many eyes on it, you don't want to be taking those kind of fights. So they need to get their eliminations now before coming in, then they need to settle.
Well, it seems like most of the duos are actually fairly settled. You've still got a couple moving in a little slower, Jinx and Worthy being a couple of those. But to be fair, there's not a whole lot of ground to cover, and there's also not a whole lot of teams actually looking at them at the moment. So they're making quite a nice, easy rotation, not having to really invest too many of their mats, nor any of their util items either. And they'll be getting into Holly fairly comfortably. I can see just on the edge of the map there, the orange arrows, they're starting to make their way in quite comfortably. So they're very happy.
A bit of a box fight here, though. This is interesting. Sorif right now. Sorif teeing off what looks like, I'm pretty sure it's Carry On and Fresh that's next to them, and that would be interesting to see. There's so many teams coming off trios right now who are on top of each other, who used to play together, and are going to have a bit of that kind of, I don't want to say bad blood, but it'll be very interesting to see. Maybe Worthy fight Alec. We might have Carry On go down to Luda. It should be very interesting to see here, as it is a big family affair right now. When you go from trios to duos, you have to leave some players out of that, but a lot of the top-tier trios either were invited or qualified outright as well. So they're all playing here today, and there will be a lot of love lost if they take them out in a tournament with $30,000 up for grabs.
I do always wonder how that feels, you know, if you're the odd man out, right? If you're the third wheel in the trio, it's just got to be a bad feeling.
Yep.
I almost feel like there needs to be a system where you go, okay, well, I'll duo with this guy. Like A duos with B for tournament 1, and then B duos with C for tournament 2, and then A duos with C. There's always that rotating one man out, but I guess that doesn't necessarily help you get into a duo rhythm so much, unfortunately.
Well, it's interesting when you look at other esports compared to Fortnite, you would think that players would stick together for a long period of time, and in Fortnite we do. We have our legends, you have Saf and Zayt, you have Mega and Dubs, but you don't have it as much as other esports, right? Because you get set as a team and you have to stick with them. But with Fortnite now announcing that all of 2021's competitive schedule for Fortnite Championship Series will be trios, it means that a lot of people can actually pick a team and know they can stay with them for a year, where quite often in Fortnite you see the current kind of meta of just reactionary. Oh, that guy's the best now, I'll go play with him. You don't build up that chemistry as much, so it does lead to some awkward situations, and Fortnite has coined the term snake season, which comes around at the start of every tournament season. Everyone starts a month out looking for their teams, and then one day before the tournament, 9 of them shift because one good player wants to play with someone else, and it breaks everything down.
We used to have a term for that as well in a bunch of other titles. It used to be called the OCE Shuffle, because in the Oceanic region, that used to happen a lot more than likes of NA and EU, where there was a little bit more structure and there was a lot more tournaments to play in, etc., etc. But you would get in a situation where one team would be the best, and they would win the tournament, and then they would pick up a player from the second best team, and as a result, the second best team would pick up a player from the third best team, and vice versa, all the way down. And eventually, every year you'd have this OCE shuffle. Doesn't happen quite so much anymore because there's a bit more infrastructure available and a lot more for the teams to play in, which means that they obviously don't want to be shuffling their rosters quite as much. But I kind of like it, you know, obviously coming from a bit more of an outsider's perspective when it comes to Fortnite. I think that should theoretically help to build a lot of cool storylines. You might get a bit more dominance. And again, looking from the outside in, I've never really felt like there's been just one player or team that has really dominated Fortnite to the same extent that some other titles have been dominated by one team. And I think that if you do actually have to stick with the same team for a whole year, you might actually start to see some recurring victors over and over and over again. And that kind of builds a bit of a lockdown on the region or on the scene totally. But anyway, that's beside the point. We're sort of waffling on a little bit because we are obviously in a fairly light lobby. There's not a whole lot going on. We're still waiting for a whole lot to sort of kick off. We've actually only seen the 8 eliminations that we saw earlier on. Nothing's really happened in that respect.
Yeah, they're going to relax now, and only one team getting the half-half zone. This is interesting now as well. It's pulling out of Holly now. Everyone needs to make that rotate. We've seen plenty of shockwaves, plenty of rift fish, but now is not the time to use the rift fish. So I'm looking for shockwaves to come out, maybe a bouncer shockwave, but in a light lobby, they have to play differently because it leaves them so open. As you can see now, look at these sight lines. Because it goes out into the open towards that wood section, it's all in the open. It's just nice rolling hills. There's no buildings other than those made by players. So if you try to make this rotate and you miss time it or you don't use your items properly, you're going to get stuck and you're going to get held. And that's going to be pretty ugly. So we have to see how teams like Jinx and Worthy may be going to do this. I see Zora just went for a shockwave play. So right now you have a really, really big congestion of quite a few good teams on top of each other. Papi, Skits, Jarl, Zora, and then we have Sync and Volks all on top of each other. And that is very scary. Those guys are all very good friends. So if that fight breaks down, it'll be interesting, as I think I just saw Jinx and Worthy try to establish an early high ground. I don't think they'll try to hold that into rotating zones, but it's a safer spot to be on if you can take it early and hold it up there.
Well, that big rotate starts to come in, and I think we're going to start to see a little bit of action kicking off now as we're getting close to the zone. Shrinking again. Sigma quite happy to be boxed up at the moment. Seems like most teams are actually in. Most teams are happy. You can not really hear too much shooting going on. No fighting just yet. Jinx and Worthy are actually up there on the high ground still, although you're not necessarily being contested too much for it.
I think they'll try to take it early now, maybe get some shots down, control it, but as soon as rotating zones come out, I'd be very surprised to see them try and hold it too heavily. If they can maybe jump onto someone else's high ground, as you see Repulse and Stevo have one build, that's what Shockwaves are great for. Worthy's got eyes on it right now. They'll be talking, hey, if zone pulls north, we need to get on top of that, or we have to go beneath it. They'll already have those decisions made, but no, Jinx and Worthy are the lucky ones. They get first rotating, and this is the crucial decision. So far, there was actually a statistic out of EU and NA, I heard Baller talking about it, that the teams that didn't get first rotating and didn't get half-half did better. Because the tendency is, hey, we've got high ground already. Maybe we should just try and hold it. Those old kind of mentalities where the meta come in, when really that's when you start having, 4 or 5 people Shockwave on you, Rift on you. You do have to just give it up and try and take it later. But let's see if Jinx and Worthy have done their homework. I don't know. They're a great team, but even they might not be able to hold this. As now you see the Rifts come out, it lends them to go for high ground. Look how many people are in the sky.
I love it that as soon as one person starts to go for it, everyone's like, all right, now's our chance. We want to be up in the air when everyone else is there.
Yep.
Making sure that we are, birds of the feather flocking together in a sense so that we're a little bit safer.
And now it's where did you go for it? Are you the first one that lands on it? Because if you land first on high ground now, maybe get a shot onto Worthy, does the other team that was further above you land on you as well? But then you don't want this situation. Cambo being held right now, Sorif getting the knock. That's 4 points that'll go over to that team. As we hear a bit of the Riftfish coming out, the bounce pads, like I talked about, are great mobility right now. As Stevo landing up there for it, and I talked about it, Stevo and Repulse. If anyone's going to go aggressive in this lobby, if anyone's going to try and go massive, it's going to be these two, as they're going to have eyes on it. You see Repulse editing the stairs, getting a sight line above them, has the Shockwave, they're breaking up, finding a Vortex gets dropped down, but it is your FNCS champs, Worthy and Jinx on high ground, but Jinx goes down. Like I talked about, you can't hold it. Sync taking out Jinx, and now Sync has eyes for high ground, and Volks is coming up with that Dragon shotgun, and I'd called it. I don't get to call things often. Worthy has to give it up. Jinx has gone down, and high ground was not the play.
Yeah, well, Volks and Syncfish are going to be hanging on to that for the moment. They'll have to rotate off, though, because the circle's moving again. Down on the low ground, Sorif and ZX. Quite happy to just chill out. They've got plenty of mats to play with, so they're not really under too much pressure at the moment. Again, another Rift. Just a couple up in the air for the moment, but Sync not too interested in what's going on for the moment. Above him, keeping a bit more of an eye on what's happening below, but does definitely need to be aware of Jarlan and Zore, because that's going to be the team that'll contest them next. They're getting a little bit closer than they might like.
And Papi took down Worthy, so Worthy and Jinx, the definite favorites here today, are out of this one. Volks and Sync, a newly formed team. As I mentioned that, Volks, a new signing to Spray and Pray Gaming, a big pickup for them as we now tune into Carry On. Another signing for that team, playing with Fresh, goes down to Hoodjay right now. No, sorry, that was Sin. And Hoodjay took down Fresh, so the Asia contingent here performing really, really well as Hoodjay gets another elimination. So Asia really turning up here today, but it's going to be the story. Can Sync and Volks hold the high ground as Papi goes on to front side and Jarlan has eyes on it? If Jarlan's on second height, it means he wants to take high ground. He would not be sitting there if he didn't want to go up.
They're still going to have to deal with Sync. Volks, who are hanging on to the high ground, although a contest starting to come in. Jarlan and Zore right up on top above them.
Jumping down, the Riftfish comes out, so they're going to try and re-establish high ground as now we have Zore and Jarlan taking out Hoodjay. Jarlan dropping down. Don't know if they noticed the rift above them. They need to look up right now, though. Sync will be wanting to land on them. Sync and Volks would have done that to try and land on them, and they're still up in the sky. I can't see them down. I haven't seen them in the feed, so I have to imagine they're in the sky somewhere, but then Zore and Jarlan will be looking at them. Maybe they did go down. I don't know here as Papi has fallen. Skits has to hold on here and needs to do something massive as we're pushing towards the final zones here. This might even go to closeout. We have 15 teams alive. Sorry, 15 teams, 10 players. 10 players. This is going to be interesting. Sync goes to high ground again. They had so many Riftfish.
Well, that's exactly it, right? We talk about that all the time. How many have you got going into the late game? Because that's going to be how many times, essentially, you're going to be able to contest the high ground, unless, of course, there's some shockwaves involved as well. Well, it looks like they're going to go perhaps straight past. Volks in trouble there. Just gets wrecked out of the sky, and so too does Sync. Knocked down by Lettuce. So, Jarlan...
Are they going to be able to hold from the high ground? Jarlan and Zora need to do something big, but the thing is they've got plenty of shield. They don't have a lot of white meds, and this will go to a heal off as Vortex finds a nice angle there, but then goes down to Sorif. So Sorif is holding on to this one here. Volks has gone down. Sync has gone down. This is going to be the story of Zora and Jarlan. What can they do to work from top down? Because Sorif and Luda are down there. So just because Jarlan and Zora have control of the high ground, they have a full duo on low ground as Zora drops down now to get eliminations. No one I can see has white meds. No one has the heals if this comes down to a heal off, unless it is potentially Basil. We haven't seen his loadout just yet.
Surely not a heal off at this point. You can jump down, look for some siphons as well. Zori under a bit of pressure from Basil. Now they've dropped onto the floor. The shot's missed.
The 2 slurpfish. He dropped the 2 slurpfish. That is huge for the heal off. And no, it doesn't end up going down to the heal off. It does. Sorif and Luda win this one from the low ground. High ground was not the play. I was able to call that one early. High ground just didn't work. They got contested. They lost it. It was a low ground team. Sorif and Luda, a brand new duo, and they popped off.
I mean, we've seen that time and time again across a lot of this JBL Quantum Cup. Sometimes that high ground really does not pay off for you. And, you know, a little bit of a passive game there towards the end, and then it started to pop off, right? We've seen that with these lighter lobbies, but I mean, so far, this match has looked pretty good towards the end there. And I mean, I'm super excited for the rest of these matches, right?
Yeah, to be honest, to me, Luke, that sort of felt a little bit more like the North America games that we got to watch a bit earlier on today, where the early game was a little bit passive. There wasn't a whole lot going on. Most of that was by virtue of the fact that there just isn't that many players in this lobby at the moment. But when we did see teams running into each other, I mean, I guess it depended on which teams they were, but some of the top teams were able to farm some of the weaker teams, I suppose, get some early points on the board. Once the, I'd say, weaker teams started to get sort of fleshed out a little bit, removed from the server, we started to see a little bit more of that standard gameplay where teams were just happy to rotate in, wait for those circles to start moving, and that's where things started to heat up. So, to be honest, Ozzy, I think that's probably what we're going to be seeing over the course of the day today. It's going to be slow early games, passive stuff, farming up, looking for those fish, and past that point, when we get into the late game, into the end game, we'll start seeing the fights.
The only thing I'm worried about is once you start dropping down, you start getting outside of that top 5, does that shift? Do you start looking for the teams? Do you go into the replay modes not to find where no one is, but to find where everyone is and start rushing them? Because there was a lot of POIs that didn't have anyone at it, and that's where we kind of saw a lot of loot go to waste at the start. But if you're landing really far on the edge, no one's around you, and you need to start getting those elimination points, where are you going to find them? So Jinx and Worthy found a few of theirs early, went for high ground early, and didn't get to hold it. So they now need to have bigger games. The pressure's on. They're going to look at the top with Luda and Sorif and think, how do we match this now?
Yeah, exactly. And that's something you touched on a little bit earlier, right, Ozzy? The fact that these guys haven't been practicing as much as the North Americans have, so they don't really understand all these spawn points and stuff. And so maybe after a first couple of these matches, everyone's going to figure out this is where we need to get these fights going. We're going to start running at these POIs and really trying to put the pressure on these guys that are at the front runners. Yeah,
I think you'll be very, very surprised to see Jinx and Worthy make the same mistake twice. They will learn from that. They will notice, hey, that team that won it on low ground, they won it from low ground. They definitely didn't play high ground at all at that point. We saw high ground be dominated by 3 different teams. Jarl and Zora did the best in the end to hold it the longest, but ultimately all of them gave it up at some point and didn't even get that many eliminations to show for it. Right now, if you're up on the high ground, it's a nice, safe position, but when everyone's flying around with them shockwaving, you don't get to beam out players as much as in the mid and low. It's going to be a lot more consistent to play from the mid and low grounds, and I'm sure Jinx and Worthy have placed in so many tournaments, they're going to have learned that already.
Yeah, it really does feel like a little bit of a learning curve going into a lot of these matches so far. We've seen it time and time again. Yes, that high ground is a contention point, but it's not really working out for a lot of these teams. Jordan, do we see any underperformers in this match that you're looking to try and improve across, you know, the rest of these matches? There's still 4 to go, still plenty of points on offer.
Oh, look, I mean, I'm not necessarily the expert here, Luke. I don't want to go ahead and call out any pro players.
Do it, Jordan. That's why I gave it to you. I wanted you to shoot your shot, Jordan.
All I'm going to say is we've been talking a lot about Jinx and Worthy, and they weren't at the top end of things at the end of that one. They got knocked out a little bit earlier on than we thought that they might, Ozzy. So for me, I don't want to say underperformance per se, but I think that's a team that we're probably expecting to see a little bit more from.
It's fair to say, but I mean, at the same time, I think what broke down there, I didn't get to see it. I saw Jinx go from 200 to 0, I'm pretty sure, instantly, and it was at the hand of Sync, and Sync is known as one of the best snipers in OCE, so I wouldn't have been surprised to see maybe an endgame snipe there, which is really rough for them to lose it. In duos, when you're on high ground, you had Jinx top out, he had the front side, Worthy held the back side, and then as soon as Jinx got taken out, Worthy had to give it up. So at the same time, if it did come on the back of a snipe, or maybe a ridiculously good bloom battle that Sync just won, you can't hold it too much against them, but they're still going to learn from it. There's a big learning curve in this, and if Jinx and Worthy need to start playing aggressive, they're capable of doing that.
And that's where we can see some of these mechanical players really start to shine in these lower lobbies, right? Where it gets to that position where, yeah, everyone's still vying for those placement points because it is only top 10 that get those placement points. That's where you can see some of those battles really starting to go the way of these higher tier players, right? And you can see that if they do try and play a little bit more aggressive.
Yeah, definitely. I also want to sort of keep an eye on some of the Asian teams as well, right? We've been predominantly talking about ANZ. No caster bias coming through here, that's fine. But Sino and Hoodjay, we saw them earlier on doing a bit of fishing. You know, we didn't really get to see too much from them later on in the game, though.
They got a couple of eliminations and onto some of the mechanical players in OC, so they showed they can do it. And in endgame, that's what it matters. Mechanics don't come down as much as just peeking at the right time, being smart, and positioning. And Hoodjay, known to have some of the best positioning in Fortnite, took down, I think it was Vortex at one point, which is a very, very good OC mechanical player. So they definitely have it in them. The issue is going to be in those early fights. If things start to get really scrappy early, that is where they're going to struggle, because that is where it's going to come down to pure mechanics, not just placement and positioning.
And that's where we circle back to what we've been saying at the top of the show, where it is a lighter lobby, so it can get towards that position where you might need to get a few more of those eliminations very early on, try and get those front runners out of the competition. But let's change gears for a little bit here, lads. I talked to the European guys a little bit more. Charge shotgun versus tactical. Aussie, this is something that I want you to try and answer for me here. Where are we sitting in the meta so far? New season has been changed up a little bit. So, you know, charge versus tactical, where are we at?
I think tac shotgun is held as more consistent. It also follows the style that most of them are used to. So if you're used to using the pump, the tac feels quite natural. So you just naturally gravitate towards it. But if you can start to adapt to the charge, change your mindset, and learn the new skill base you need, it is actually technically the stronger weapon. But at the same time, endgame, if you miss that one shot, you really are going to struggle. So I feel like tac is the way to go. I think tac shotgun will be the one you stick to. But we even saw a bit of the dragon shotgun in play there, Jordan.
It's going to be an interesting one to see whether or not these shotguns do come into play, because we've seen it quite a lot. But now, let's have a look at our post-match results. For everyone playing along at home, this will be exactly the same as our standings. This is how, you know, the first match does play out. Total points sitting at the top there. We do see 110 points. So not a massive lead for the boys at the top so far, but it still is a big set of juicy points to get off the bat.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a huge game, especially in comparison to what we've seen from EU and NA. I think in NA, we were seeing a little bit more consistently towards 120, 130 as the top placing for that particular game. But for EU, you were telling me early on, it was something like 160, 170 points out of one game.
It was the lads who won Europe. It was Tayson as well as Thomas HC. I think they had 15 eliminations and a first place. So that's just a ridiculous amount of points these guys are able to accrue. And, you know, maybe that might be something that these Ocean Asian guys can look at as well. Just being like, maybe if we have that one big pop-off game, 110 points isn't too hard to chase down.
Yeah, and you're going to see, obviously, you can very clearly tell even from this leaderboard that it's a top 10 gets placement kind of scenario, right? Because even after 10, it starts to dwindle so much compared to the top. So if you are getting that top 5 amount of placements where it starts to ramp up with a few eliminations, it's going to tend to land around that 100. So even though I think with a lighter lobby, they can't get that big 160-point game, they should be able to consistently get closer to 100, though. So it's going to be about who can stop them, because that's going to make it a lot harder for top-tier teams that I expected to do well, like Jinx and Worthy, to have their big jump. There's not as much position for eliminations. So unless they actually start going for those top teams at the start to try and get them out, they're going to struggle.
And we've seen that here just across what you guys are touching on. Jinx and Worthy, unfortunately, only getting 8 points out of that first map there. Unfortunately, no placement points for them, but it feels like this team can easily get in towards that top 10 if they just, you know, make a few more better decisions for them again, right?
Yeah, look, the thing is, like, again, going into NA, we had that whole storyline of if you don't win a game, you probably aren't going to win the competition, and that was shattered, right? There were situations where we saw teams, they didn't get a win, they got second places, they got fifth places. That's fine, that's enough, as long as you're doing it on a consistent basis. And it was acceptable as well, by the way, for them to have games where they didn't even get placement points. There was 2 games out of the 5 where they didn't even get a single placement point. So even despite this format being heavily weighted towards placement points, if you can have at least 3 out of 5 decent games, you're putting yourself in with a good chance. But obviously that does depend on how good those 5 games are potentially going to be, right? If they're going to be like, okay, 5 games with 3 or 4 elims in there as well in the games that we don't necessarily place, then you're giving yourself some sort of shout. But you know, if it's a couple of games where you're just getting dead 0 points, then you're starting to struggle a little bit.
Do you think this starts to play into their mentalities, Aussie, the fact that they see that they've only got 8 points here? You know, maybe first place, 110 points, that's chaseable, right? But, you know, if you're sitting on 8 points after the first match, you might just, you know, try and get that mental reset, right?
Yeah, and I think normally we would talk about, okay, so you start going more aggressive early game. You try and find those POIs, you try and drop the mythic locations like other seasons to get a bunch of eliminations. With this lighter lobby, it means they're going to have to shift their mentality towards a win's not good enough, but they're going to have to find their eliminations end game. And that should actually lead to some of the most exciting Fortnite. When someone has to play aggressive in the end game, they have to leave it all out there on the line. That's some of the most fun Fortnite. Jumping between layers, jumping between boxes, finding people. And that is technically the easiest time to find eliminations is end game, but it's also the easiest to be punished. So I think it will play into their mentality. Jinx and Worthy, they've played so many tournaments, they've played so highly. We've got World Cup champions here. They've dealt with the pressure before, but this tournament's very different.
Yeah. Well, Jordan, this is something that we touched on a little bit with EU, and I believe North America was a little different to this. Is it better to be chasing these points or to have points on the board? In Europe, it was the guys who were chasing the points that came out on top, and I believe in North America, there was lads who started out quite consistently towards the top who were able to close it out, right?
Yeah, if you want to talk about going into that final game, it was the team that was at the top that actually got away with the win. It wasn't a huge discrepancy, though. It was like 45 points, which was, you think that's pretty easy to overturn. It's like half a game's worth of points if you have a really good game. But it was enough because the teams that were right below them just sort of didn't quite manage to get that last game rolling, even though that team didn't come away with a particularly good final game either. Look, if you have to go with the Captain Obvious answer, it is better to be starting off with the points, right?
Yeah.
You obviously want to be going in with that kind of advantage. Does it lead you to go into that game a little bit lackadaisical, maybe a little bit more relaxed? Perhaps that's an argument that you could make, but I think every day of the week, if you can have a points lead heading into the final couple of games, that would be ideal. So, for the teams that are starting off well, we've already seen that happen for a couple here in our first one. They'll be quite happy. But the thing is, they're going to have to do it a couple of times to actually accrue that point lead. You can't have the first game be a good one and then completely bomb out in your second one, because we've seen how quickly that point lead can be overturned. In the space of one game, you can get up to 150 points on a fairly regular, consistent basis. So even if you got 110 points out of that first game, you're thinking, great, I got 110 points. Sounds like a big lead over 20. Well, all of a sudden, if you lose that next game and that team that got 20 points gets 150, then you're 60, 70 points behind. You're thinking, oh, goddamn, where did that all go?
Yeah, and I think the volatility comes from the fact that, again, it's not only it's a new tournament, new format, they don't know where they're dropping. NA, even EU as well, even though they don't have as much practice, EU, there's a lot bigger names, they follow each other more. Quite often, a lot of them were posting on Twitter, I'm dropping here, I'm dropping there. That doesn't happen on OC as much. So the volatility of drop spots is crazy. You could even have Jinx and Worthy now be like, wait, no one went retail, let's go there. But then all of a sudden you have Volks maybe make the same decision, and now you have a very scary early game fight. So it's going to be quite scary if you don't get the lead, because things will change massively towards the end.
All right, lads. Well, let's touch on something a little bit more hypothetical here. What do we feel like is a point lead that is insurmountable so far? We talked about a lot of volatility. You know, I'm throwing some pretty hard questions at you guys right now. We saw a big swing in Europe of over 150 points in one game. So what do we feel like is a good enough lead where you can kind of rest back and be like, all right, this is fine, especially with such a smaller lobby as well?
Where we did have a bit of a chat about this in North America.
This is where your maths is going to come in, Jordan.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking, like, is 44 points enough? That was the maths there, by the way. I was figuring out points difference between first and second. Humble brag, by the way. I can do maths on stream.
I can subtract.
Look, it turns out, actually, 44 points was enough, although I'm not sure that actually is the figure that would make you feel too comfortable. In my mind, when I did that sort of little quick math, I was sort of thinking about 100, 110 points might be enough, considering you... Again, if you were to have a really good game, let's say, 150 points probably is the max that you're going to be hitting out of that game.
Somewhere around there.
So you have to factor in the possibility for your opponent who is ahead of you to be getting an okay game, let's say 20, 30, 40 points. So in that respect, probably about 100, 110 points. If you have 110 points deficit, you can still feel like you're in the fight, you're in the battle. Anything beyond that, it just becomes a little bit too insurmountable. That is, of course, just for the one game, right? If we're talking about over the course of 2 or 3 games, you can multiply that, maybe 300 points if you're going into the third game of the day. You can still come back from that.
Yeah, I'd say about 100. I can definitely see it being a bit more than it has been in the other regions as well. Just without that volatility of many players, you can be a bit more consistent. Right now, without Storm Surge, having a bit of mobility, if I see a team going into their last game, they've even got maybe a 30, 40 point lead, but they have a good loadout, that will be enough. But with the ability to go down early and someone jump up massively, it's going to have to be about 100 points. I have to agree.
So it seems like there's triple digits for the boys here in the lobby. We're heading in towards game number 2, lads, getting very, very close to that. Are we going to see much changes from game number 1 into game number 2? We're going to see more change in the drop spots, a little bit more aggression. What's going to happen?
I definitely think there is a possibility we will see a change up in the drop spots. I'm sure we'll be keeping an eye on that when we get out of the into the game and see whether or not some of those uncontested POIs are now, in fact, contested. So that, I think, is something that we should look out for. As far as the gameplay is concerned, I would be surprised to see much of a change up from that one. I think a few of the teams, you know, obviously the ones that got knocked out a little bit earlier on, might change up their rotation paths and whatnot, try and be a bit safer. But in general, Luke, I wouldn't be expecting too much of a change until we get into games 4 and 5.
Exactly. Well, it looks like our theory crafting should be able to get answered here. Match number 2 is underway for the JBL Quantum Cup. Take it away, boys.
Oh, well, indeed. Into game number 2. Looking forward to seeing how this one pans on out. And got a couple of front runners going into this game, but there'll certainly be a fair bit to talk about.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot to talk about here, and I was also talking about how they might be able to even just, again, like the information's open to anyone. When we talk about checking replay mode, and we talk about even coming and checking the VOD of this stream, they could just be able to check out where people are going and where they aren't. It's very easy information to figure out. As we see now, again, Misty Meadows, that had no one dropping at it, now has someone. Retail Row, that had no one dropping at it, now has someone. Salty Towers, that had no one dropping at it. Maybe Zora is going towards... This is interesting. Looks like Zora's going towards towards Holly to maybe try and hold it down, but I don't think Jarlan realizes this time Sweaty isn't uncontested. There's another team looking and know they're pulling out. So Salty Tower is still uncontested, and you get a lot of information from the sky, where already now we're seeing Stevo and Repulse kind of have a different drop spot. This is not what we saw before. We saw the Asian team holding down what would be called Flopper Island, and now Repulse and Stevo are going for it. Maybe wanting to have eyes on the Riftfish, but it's interesting that Hoodjay is not here. Maybe saw them flying in and had to go somewhere else. So already this game has changed massively on where teams are going.
Yeah, I would be quite interested actually to see where Sinnoh and Hoodjay did end up dropping. I'm sure we'll be able to head over in their direction fairly shortly. And just to touch on where Sinnoh and Hoodjay actually ended up, because we didn't really talk about them, they did only manage to get 8 points out of that first game. So they're sitting in 11th place at the moment, which is a little bit difficult. So maybe they've just changed things up off the back of that.
Yeah, so I think it might have to change things up. I'm not really sure. Sorif and Luda in the lead right now. Going to have to try and hold on to that one. I'm not exactly sure where they were dropping early. I think it was that Craggy situation. I don't see them leaving there. Like I said, Luda has been comfortable at Craggy for such a long time now, being able to hold that one down. But Sweaty Sands having two teams at it, Jarlan and Zora being one of them. Very, very scary fighters right now. You have two absolute veterans of the scene. Two of the only players in OCE that have really made a name for themselves internationally, traveling over in the original FNCS to NA and performing incredibly well. We have Volks and Sync still at Slurpee uncontested, so already the drop spots have changed up massively. The only major POI that is now uncontested is Salty Towers, and there's our answer, Jordan. We do have Hoodjay and Sinnoh going Sweaty Sands and, sorry, not Sweaty, going into the Steamy Stacks and having the triple houses to that northeast section, and that is a lot of loot. That is so much more loot than they would have had last game, and it's amazing to see Repulse and Stevo taking such a small chunk of the map for a team that I know to be incredibly aggressive and just very dominant with the way they play and the way they position themselves.
Well, I mean, to be honest, it hasn't worked out too poorly for them with that first circle shift. They're not going to have too far to move, so maybe they can spend a bit of extra time looting, whatnot. I don't know, but we'll see how it turns out for them. A couple of teams here in Sweaty Sands, which, to be honest, is the kind of place where you can normally have a couple of teams. There's a lot of buildings here, although of aggression early on in the piece, maybe from one of these teams. Yeah, this is going to be the fight over Sweaty Sands. When I saw two teams here with a reduced chest spawn now not being 100%, you don't have enough loot. You have to fight for it, and fight for it 6 is he goes down here. Jarlan and Zora will not lose this fight. I'm going to put good money on it right now. This team is already so dominant. Player trying to get in. Jarlan going for the pinch. The shockwave comes out though. As I say that though, the pressure being put onto Zora and that shockwave in was very, very good. But right now, only the flopper to the name here for Sin. Sin's got to do something big, versing two very, very scary opponents right now. Zora's been able to drop back, has time to get the med kit and the big pot offs. This will be a full heal situation as Jarlan just using that suppressed SMG. Now the harpoon, anything possible to just stop the shields here right now, because Sin's going to get a big pot off, but no. There we go. Jarlan's going to interrupt it again. Zora's almost going to be full healed now. Zora's had enough time. The fight's going to come out here, fighting back and doing an incredibly good job, but now it's 2v1. Zora's popped the minis, the big pod, and the med kit. You are not going to be able to beat these players on 200 health. I couldn't imagine. Yeah, well, that's just what it comes down to at the end of the day. 2-on-1. There's so much more pressure that can be applied. We will see Sin dropping out. That's our first duo out of the picture for game number 2, and I suppose you can say that battle for Sweaty Sands is well and truly won by Jarlan and Zora. But yeah, I mean, look, 2-on-1, not very fair fight. You're going to have the ability to just cover off, heal back up. If one person goes dropping it low again, default back to that. Whereas the guy that's solo, just so much pressure on you, and there's really not a whole lot you can do about it. They're important eliminations, though. Jarlan and Zora came into this game in second place. They're on 87 points, chasing down a 110-point lead. So 2 eliminations, getting 8 points on the board there. I'm going to try and do my math on stream as well. 95 points now towards the 110. So those eliminations early are really going to matter, because not every team's even able to actually find those eliminations, because there's not that many people on the map around them. So now we see Sorif and Luda kind of still sticking around this craggy area, and they're looking pretty good out of here. They have plenty of room to get fish, and this is going to be one of the stronger drops on the map. You have the slurp barrels inside the main building at Craggy, and if they're uncontested, they use them together. So you get all the shield without having to use any that you loot. You then have fishing holes, so that means you get to keep all the shields you have, as you see Sorif, as I say that, juggling between having max minis, max bigs, and a stack of chug splashes. So just has everything they need to hold on to their first place lead right now. Well, they're going to be sitting pretty, aren't they? But there are quite a few teams that are a little keen to pick up on some points. I think we talked a bit about Jinx and Worthy on the desk there. They'll be a team that's quite happy to try and come back from a deficit like that. I guess happy might not be the right word to use there, but they'll be capable, I should say, might be the name of the game. It is difficult to come into Game 2 and make a really accurate prediction as to what you might expect, unless you've been focusing more on the eye test rather than the points that actually came out of Game 1. But even eye test wise, there isn't a whole lot of a data set for you to really take a look at. So I think once we get into Game 2, Game 3, we get a bit of a better understanding of maybe who's consistently performing today, who's on form, and how things are looking as far as the lobby towards the end of things is going to look. But either way, for now, I think we just have to reserve on our predictions or hold back on our predictions and wait and see what we get out of Game 2 so that we get a bit more of an informed data set to take a look at. Zink's just having a bit of a fish here, not finding too much interesting in the end there. And we'll move on. Player 1, this is another one of the teams from Asia. I think they're from Thailand, actually. So they were one of the teams that actually qualified, if I'm not incorrect. So it's nice to see them jumping in, having a crack as well.
It'll be interesting to see how split the Carry-On and Fresh is right now. I guess because maybe Carry-On identified that Salty Towers was completely uncontested. So much loot in there. One of the best drops at the moment. Bit of a throwback to the Tilted Towers. It's nice. It gives you that big nostalgia hit, but it also gives you a big hit of loot as well. And it does have the Slurp Trucks nearby, but Fresh quite split. So if Carry-On has secured that, that means right now between Fresh and Carry-On, they have Pleasant Park and they have Salty Towers, which looks amazing for them. As you see Pumpkin and Alec kind of pushing.
A little bit about Alec earlier on in our rematch, and it'll be the first engagement that we get to see him and Pumpkin getting into. Missing that first shot though onto player 1.
One of the biggest indicators you're going to have to look here right now is the strength of the shotguns, because with no upgrade ability right now, if you guys didn't know, we do have NPCs disabled right now. So that means the only way you were able to get an upgrade these days, changed in this season, was previously you spent materials at an upgrade station. Now you spend gold at the NPCs, the quest givers, but that's not in the game right now. So currently you can get all the loot in the world. You can get 4 uncontested POIs. If you don't find a good shotgun, no amount of time is going to let you get one, as it looks like Jinx or Worthy, I think, gets a bit of a snipe there onto Hood J. So I'm not sure how they're going to have to play this one, because if you don't find a good one, you're not going to find it endgame. So if I see anyone who has an epic or legendary variant coming into those endgames where, like I said, that's where you get your big eliminations, it's going to matter a lot, because I just saw the Pumpkin there had a grey tack, and if you get into a fight, grey tack versus blue tack, it's going to be quite ugly, especially coming into the endgame, because no amount of time gets you a better shotgun now. There's nothing you can do with this lighter lobby to find one if it's not at your drop spot.
Well, I guess they're going to have to work hard maybe in the early game, find some elims on a bit of a weaker opponent, see if they can pick something up there that way, if it's as important as you say. But look, either way, they're going to have to make do with what they've got. Jinx has seen Hood J and Sinnoh. Again, we've spoken about them a fair bit today. We'll have to hope that they can actually deliver with the amount of broadcast time that they're getting. But into that fight, 2-on-1 at the moment, though Jinx looks to be getting some help from his duo from the side.
This would be a massive upset if Jinx or Worthy go down here. I'll happily put my name on it. I'll say I will never let Jinx or Worthy hear the end of it if they go down. It's nothing against Sinnoh or Hood J. It's just this fight right now. They have the server advantage as well. This has been playing on OC right now. They have the ping advantage against 2 players who are phenomenal players but not known for their early game fighting. So Jinx and Worthy, 2 of the best players in OCE, especially when it comes down to Worthy's aim. But I talk about ping advantage. Worthy is one of the few players in OCE to not have the greatest ping. Playing out of Western Australia, the servers of course being in Sydney, does give him about 60 to 70 ping, and if you play Fortnite, you know how big of a deal that is. You can't take walls, you can't hold walls, but from having watched Worthy play, you'd never expect it. He's just that dominant. But as I say that, looks like Jinx and Worthy are going to try and drop back here. Worthy pre-firing the snipes on the angle, seeing if they maybe get a bit of a headshot, but happy to disengage this one. And we talked about how is the pressure going to be on them after a struggling game 1? Clearly not. If they felt the pressure, they would have taken that fight and tried to capitalize on it. And that's the kind of fight I expect we'll see in game 4 or 5. But right now, Jinx and Worthy, they're not stressed. One bad game, let's have 4 good ones.
I have to agree with you. I don't think that there's any reason to throw away your second game with an early aggression either, because that just then puts you into that position where, I mean, mathematically, you might still be able to come back from that. We talked about it being like maybe 300 points deficit, still overcomable, but it's more of the mental aspect at that point. If you see yourself down 200, 300 points, you'll be thinking, oh no, like this is just not doable. And if you aren't confident, I think that goes for any esport really, you're probably not going to be performing at your best. Confidence is going to be key, especially in those late game circles. And Checking in with a couple of the other teams, Papi and Skit. They're going to be rotating their way in alongside Splasher and Bink.
Little decent loadout here for Splasher and Binks. Interesting to see that the Coliseum has no teams at it right now, and I guess it's a drop that is quite strong, but uncontested. It's kind of interesting to see it going to waste here, because in these kind of lobbies where you don't need to look for Storm Surge, I'd imagine these kind of starting POIs, the ones that are near the middle of the map, are going to be great because they're pretty set. Doesn't matter where the zone pulls. In this instance, a far north zone, if you're landing middle of the map, it doesn't really matter. You can always find your way there. No one's going to be going too aggressive, as we see the bridge being held off here as Volks and Sync try to make their way forward, and unfortunately get stopped right there on the edge.
Reminds me of another title that I cast a little bit. Bridge camping, definitely something that happens a lot in that one, but not so much in Fortnite.
Yeah, you don't normally go around it.
We've got a bush camp coming on here from Toby and Spaghetti.
Ooh, it's looking like a good spot as well. So as much as it's interesting to see, obviously you have your pros, you have your big egos, and I can take fights, and I can do this, and I can do that, and Fortnite kind of loses that Battle Royale-esque kind of feel to it. Like you said, obviously the titles that you talk about as well, where bridge camping, bush camping, door camping are all a lot stronger, where Fortnite is all about kind of guns blazing, builds, and all that kind of fancy stuff. But if you're someone like Toby and Swagger in this situation, that's a really smart position. They're not too far central, but they're in the next zone, they're in the bush, and they might be able to catch someone off guard with that, because a lot of the pros, they have too big of an ego to even think to play like that.
Yeah, they've got a nice little setup for themselves. Haven't been spotted. A lot of info for them as well. So they'll be seeing these two teams in front of them. There's actually a couple of teams behind them as well that they'll need to be aware of. Look, I don't necessarily disagree with your analysis there, but I do feel if they are stuck in that position when the zone starts to push in, there's going to be a few teams all around them, and they are going to be finding themselves in a bit of a problematic situation as soon as they fire their shots, or they are forced to move out of those bushes. So I certainly hope they've got a plan B. I think that's my main takeaway. It looks good for now, but as soon as they have to move, things are going to get a little bit more worrisome. Fresh, you can see down on the ground at the moment, below Papi and Skits. Carry-On's going to keep walking his way past the bush.
And good trigger discipline right here from Toby and Swagger. As I hear that, though, Swagger charges up the charge and lets it rip, and holding two shotguns. I'm not sure whether Swagger is aware of the fact that that does give you a shotgun delay, and right here, Fresh is kind of sussing out where they are, and Fresh and Carry-On, not a team that you want in front of them, but whether this fight goes for Toby or Swagger or not, no, the tack comes out, Fresh takes them both down. That is a really, really good elimination, but Cambo gets one of them, so Fresh only gets one of those eliminations, 4 points on the board, and yeah, unfortunately, I'm pretty sure that came on. I talked about the trigger discipline. Maybe I cast a curse them. As I say that, Swagger just lets go of the charge, and one of the loudest sounds in the game. You got what's called the pressure cooker. You charge up the shot, you release it. It's very, very loud, and everyone knew they were then in the bush. It's like in the horror movie when they cough when they're behind the door. You can't do that.
Live and learn, I suppose. We've seen them go from game 1 to game 2, having survived a little bit longer. Hopefully that will continue into game 3, game 4, game 5. Maybe even a W later on down in the track. I suppose that would be wishful thinking maybe, but it would be good to see it from them. Either way, keep an eye on some of the other teams. We've got Shora and AJ Power being put under a little bit of pressure at the moment. Vortex going to start to rotate his way in alongside Jace God. Both of them having a good time in the car as well.
It's very scary right now, and this is going to be the lobby that's going to really decide for Sorif and Luda. They're dropping Craggy, they're dropping very north, and now we have a very north zone, so they need to perform here. This is going to be their chance as Carry-On is getting fired down here, which is interesting. Again, Sorif and Carry-On coming off the back of a great trio FNCS performance together. Now, unfortunately, Carry-On finding himself on the other end of his ex-teammates. Very, very good aim here, taking shots down. Fresh is down beneath, kind of sitting a lot prettier. Carry-On can go down there if he really needs to, get behind that terrain and make sure they're covered off as Fresh pushes up here, and Sorif and Luda would have heard that one and found a positioning, and this is very scary. I talked about superior shotguns. Fresh has some of the best tack aim when it comes to anyone in OCE or anyone in Fortnite in general, so an epic tack in the hands of Fresh. If they play the low and the mid ground in this endgame very well, I could see a considerable point jump for them, because that is a big win condition if I've ever seen one for a team.
Yeah, I mean, you look at that and you think sometimes, oh, you know, Fresh, just an influencer, etc., but he's one of the guys that can actually sort of tussle with the top.
Yeah.
I've seen him in a few tournaments here in Oceania, and he's always been actually up towards the top end of things, even in contention to win a few of them that we've cast. So I think he's definitely someone to keep an eye on, and alongside Carry-On as well, who's definitely a very solid player. So I wouldn't be counting those two out, although they didn't actually have the greatest of game ones. I'm just having a bit of a look down the current standings, and they are also only able to get 2 elims last game and didn't get any placement points. So not the start that you would like. Obviously, you'd want to be playing from the front. Can't always have what we want, though, can we? So they'll have to do a bit of hard work in game 2. Game 3 probably starts to become the cutoff. Like, if you haven't worked out, you know, a decent lead at least out of the games, game 1 and 2. By game 3, it's like, okay, well, this is do or die for us.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be that situation here. As this zone just kind of keeps pulling more towards the middle, but a bridge zone. It's quite exciting to see. You don't see too many of them. If you get rotating zones going across the bridge, I think in all the Fortnite I've casted, I've only ever casted one, and it's that memorable to me because it is quite an exciting end game. We'll have to see how this one plays out, and it's really going into the favor of those northern teams. So you talk about Fresh and Carry On dropping out of Pleasant. They need to make this game count. Because if they can't make it count when they get the zone, when they don't have to go through all these other players, it's going to be a lot worse for them. So Papi and Skid setting up now as well. We have really only lost, 2 teams, 4 players so far right now. So of the 17 teams remaining, they are all duos, I believe. I haven't seen 2 solos running around, so I'm pretty sure we've just seen the 2 duos be wiped right now. So This is anyone's chance going into this. No one has to solo clutch. As we see, Jinx and Worthy, unfortunately, not in the best positioning on that side of zone. Unless they get zone, they're going to be very open with really big sightlines. So unless they're going to get a good bounce of Shockwave, which will still leave them open for situations like this, Jason Vortex can set up and use those open sightlines to get some big beams on them.
I mean, open sightlines is one thing, but they do have a team right next to them, sort of keeping Worthy and Jinx a little bit safer, actually. As I say that, again, speaking of Cast a Curse, maybe Jinx not too happy to cop those shots from Basil and Swirlgod, but Jinx and Worthy have actually managed to get across the river. So that's already mission successful, at least in that respect. They'll have a little bit more of a rotate to go. Jarlin actually gets knocked down by Repulse, and you have spoken about the aggression from Repulse. He's alongside Steve-O right now. It looks like that might well be the end of Jarlin.
Oh, this is not a good situation. Steve-O's actually even confident enough to go for the shakedown. So they're trying to find right now where Zora is, which just shows how aggressive this duo is. I talked about it on the top of the show with good reason. They could have just gone for that easy elimination, but no. Let's find out where the solo is, because we want to find them as well. Repulse and Steve-O picking up the pace, and that's big because right now, Jarlin and Zora were your second place team coming into this game, and they are now 1 down. They've got 2 eliminations on the board. They took that phenomenal fight at Sweaty, and they are not going to be happy. Jarlin has played with Repulse a number of times, and I guarantee, like I said, with these guys knowing each other's playstyle, when there was someone knocking on their wall when they didn't need to, it's going to be Repulse every time.
Yeah, you got to know. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
Yep.
I think that works in both respects this time. But let's have a look and see how this next one does sort of change things up. GW, another one of those teams that's come through from Asia. They did pretty well for themselves. They're sitting in 4th place on the standings at the moment, 67 points. So, about 50 points or 40, 50 points behind the top dogs. That being Luda and Sorif at the moment.
You're covered right now. Look, they've got a big bases, and that's the thing. You can kind of invest all of those materials because you need to. You need to invest a lot of your material now to make sure that you're not going to get sprayed and focused too much later. Because right now in these end games, when it's going to be harder to kind of conserve your mats, but you can still find those big refreshes on the players that are around. As we have the zone pool pretty far away from Worthy and Jinx. This is not what I wanted to see for them, but it's very, very good for players like Repulse that was set up there with Steve-O in a great spot. And they have the loot from Jarlin too, as now we have Sync and Volks trying to rotate around in the car, and it shows how scared they are of using their Riftfish. They have 2 of them, but we talked about it in the pre-show. If you don't use them when other people are, you make yourself a giant target in the sky. I remember when Riftigos used to be in the game, way back in World Cup meta, you popped one of those bad boys, you felt the safest in the whole lobby. Now, with how good everyone's aim's gotten, how smart everyone's gotten, you go down as quickly as you possibly can. You want to get out of the sky as fast as possible.
Yeah, I think it's also something that's nice to keep in the back pocket as well for contesting high ground a little bit later on. So it's not necessarily something that you want to be throwing away for a rotation like that if you don't have to. And in that instance, they're pretty comfortable, they're confident, they know that they're going to be able to make that rotation regardless. So let's just keep that bit of extra utility available to us.
Splash and Blink right now. A rotation we haven't seen too much of. We talk about, the Riftfish, we talk about the Shockwaves, but we had some Peppers in there as well. Pop the Peppers, you get an increased movement speed bonus. It's very, very strong in the end game, especially if you're going to play more aggressively because you can keep up with players. It's right now Pumpkin on the wall. I said if Splash wants to play aggressive, Pumpkin playing aggressive here on the team of Alec, and I don't know where Alec is. Alec needs to come through and back this up. Does arrive there in time, but looks like they want to pull off from that one now, and you kind of take those shots and feel people out. With the pumps being removed for the game, there is only one way you can get fully finished in this game, and it is the charge, or I guess the Dragon Shotgun, but most players carrying the charge, but with that very, very distinct loud audio cue of what we call the pressure cooker, it cooking up, you almost can be confident going on anyone's wall knowing they can't one-shot you, and that does mean a lot in Fortnite, because you have time to back up, hold build your walls and use your meds. As right now we have Squadsy and Player One trying to get the car in here, so I'm not sure whether they want to use this or why they're trying to move it so much. Or they're making a big effort to try and get it maybe out of the base. I'm not sure. I guess they do get sprayed and they do get detonated.
Oh, that's a nice double setup from Repulse and Stevo. Already Cambo goes down to about half HP. We saw much the same situation for Cambo in the last game, where he was one of the ones later to the rotation. Here's a rift for Repulse and Stevo, who were actually probably requiring that because the Storm was pushing at their back. So they'll be up in the air for the moment.
I just wonder whether they're going to go for high ground. They're playing this game very aggressive, and in any other season, any other meta, I would have thought, yes, Repulse and Stevo is going to take the high ground and they're going to go big or go home. But right now, I think they've got Fresh and Carry On very well set up. Here we go. This will answer my question. Do they go for it? Fresh is up there. Fresh obviously having played with Repulse as well. They want to hold it. Bounces Shockwave to front side. Repulse is going for it. This build fight right now will decide this game. Fresh and Carry On going up. Repulse going up for it with Stevo as well. I think Fresh and Carry On have lost it. Carry On has to drop down, and Repulse and Stevo look like they have this high ground under control, but Fresh still has 6 Shockwaves in the back pocket. That is more than enough to take it off them.
Well, it's definitely something you can keep available to him. It doesn't look like the contest is going to come through just yet. Fresh happy to just sit down there and give Carry On a little bit of extra time to heal on up.
All I'm noticing in the feed right now is a story of Asia. It's just the Asia teams dropping elimination after elimination right now. So we've been doing a lot of the focus on A and Z. I've seen it, and we do. We have Hoodjay and Sinnoh on the high ground. This is a story of Asia's. Hoodjay falls, though, gets sprayed out there. And I don't know who it was. It was Fresh that took down Hoodjay there. So again, I'm talking about the story of Asia now. OCE firing back, but Fresh is a solo, has 6 Shockwaves, has that epic tack, so do not count him out. But Stevo and Repulse fighting for the high ground, and then Fresh goes up for it, comes up with that tack, puts it to use against Stevo, but at that range it won't do a lot. But honestly, the play from Fresh right now is trying to Shockwave up and potentially Shockwave off Stevo, because Repulse and Stevo are playing this one very, very high.
Yeah, definitely not going to be counting Fresh out. He's someone that I've seen multiple times, even as the solo, in duos, even in squads, doing some pretty crazy stuff in the late game, and that well could be a factor here too. Squadsy and Player One from Thailand are a little bit of work in as well, but Repulse now starting to have a contest. It's Volks up there on the high ground with him.
This is an exciting one. Repulse and Volks, 2 of the best mechanical players in the region, in any region. 2 of the best fighters right now going up for it. Repulse using those bounce pads, trying to get up a bit of height on Volks. Volks gets the good shots off. Repulse goes over the top, and the beautiful shot. Repulse, not disappointing when I tell you why he is one of the best mechanical players, not just in OC, but in the world, taking down Volks and making it look easy, which is no small feat by any means. Trying to do it to Fresh now as well. Gets in the box, but Fresh with the epic tack, it is enough, but unfortunately, I think Fresh goes down to the Storm as that happens. Stevo is up to help Repulse, but Fresh is down, and Repulse and Stevo are doing exactly what I said they'd do at the start of today's show.
This is just so comical seeing Repulse's body go flying across the high ground. He'll be getting picked back up though by Stevo, so never mind. He won't be. Not quite. I thought that he might, but seems like he's just run out of time.
I think trying to keep the loot close as well. Pass the body forward. Let it go down in Storm where you can get the loot. Stevo goes up now. Now Stevo has 5 of the floppers right now. So that is 5 amounts of white meds right now. They give 40 each. That is big, big heals. So Stevo can try to play this one as a solo. Go for the heal off as Papi and Skits go for the late high ground retake like we talked about. But so far, unless I can see it from Skits, they don't have the white heals. They don't have the meds. You can have all the shields you want, but if Storm closes out, it's not going for your shield. It's going for your health, and that's where floppers are king.
Yeah, well, at least they have the option to jump down. Swirl gets one, then he gets taken down himself. Papi and Skits, though, looking in a good spot to play this one on their own terms.
Skits
even if
has
they
the floppers. He does have 4 floppers as well, so they have the firepower and they have the heal-off potential.
Sure, well, that's exactly what you want. Papi can drop down if need be. Skits can just stay up on the high ground, playing for the heal-off. And Stevo looks like he's going to be going for some heals out there in the Storm. Not sure that's going to work out, because Skits, as you say, 4 floppers should be okay. Alec doesn't have anything to his name, and so I think we know our victors already.
I think Stevo went for it a little bit early. Here it is. Going to be Skits on the high ground with those 4 floppers. That is going to be the story right now. But Skits ended up... No, Skits, he goes for it, gets the flopper as well. Stevo got the 3rd place, but can't clinch up the 2nd. Alec is going to go down here, and Papi and Skits are your victors in game number 2. Great performance from Alec, though, but some of our big names, I didn't see Luda or Sorif at all, and I only saw Jarlan Zora to see Jarlan go down. So huge shake-up on the leaderboard.
Yeah, a little bit unfortunate. The big names aren't getting the points on the board here, but luckily enough there for Skits was able to win the heal off towards the end. We saw where Papi was able to drop down, try to get a little bit more damage onto those players before he did eventually go down, and we've seen that time and time again. It gets towards that final zone, you need to make sure you have those white heals.
You say unfortunate, Luke. I say great, because that's going to give us a bit of a closer, tighter finish, and that's really what you want at the end of the day as a viewer. You know, I'm not going to say so much for the players. I think they'll want to be leading from the front, but for us as a viewer, we want to be going into that final game with maybe a 30, 40-point deficit for first and second, and then we can have a bit of a discussion about who might be able to come away with the win off of the back of this game.
I mean, Fortnite's been notorious for having those moments, right? Everyone knows Solo World Cup, the Booger moment. He got the lead in game 1 and did not lose it for the whole tournament. Great for him, fantastic, awesome. But as a viewer, last game was kind of like a victory lap. You never want to see that. I want to see it go close. I love Luda, I love Sorab, Jarlan, Zora, good friends, but kind of want him to go down as well.
And that's where this kind of volatile format that we've got here with the massive amount of points that you can get for a Victory Royale in combination with those eliminations can make these storylines, right? We've seen different victors across match 1 and match 2, and now with only 3 matches left, there still is a lot of points up for offer for a lot of these players as well, and it doesn't feel like it's going to be closed out until we do have that final match in the books.
Yeah, I'm actually quite interested to see where the standings do end up after this game, because there was a few teams that we didn't actually see too much from in game 1 being able to put in good games here for game 2. And that's obviously going to do that bit of a topsy-turvy. The tables are going to turn as we go over the course of the day. Carry On and Fresh, I don't know if they necessarily did enough to get themselves up into the top 5, into the money, but I think they've obviously done better than that first game, because they were doing a fair bit of work in the late game there as well. So they were a team to touch on. Repulse and Stevo, we also saw having some elims early on in the piece and took that up into the late game as well. But again, I'm just not sure that they had enough in terms of the placement points to really be leapfrogging up into the top 5. So I'm not really sure what the top 5 is going to end up looking like, but I think at least the 3, 4, and 5 placements are going to change up fairly substantially.
I think what scares me is the fact that we saw Jinx and Worthy not have a great game 1 on a high ground, and then obviously they weren't there, they went for something else. It also didn't work though. They got a pretty bad zone, I'll give them that, but at the same time, whatever they tried game 2 didn't work and game 1 didn't work, and that scares me a little bit. We talk about the learning curve, but you know, you mentioned it as well, Jordan. You got to start figuring that out early. You can't try and come into this end game. You can't come into game 4 and be like, I've got the magic formula now, because it's too late. Where again, Repulse and Stevo played how Repulse and Stevo do. They played aggressive Fortnite, and they still got a third, but they got a few more of those eliminations up there. But ultimately, I'm thinking as they feel like these lobbies and they feel them out, the fish and the heal off is going to become massive. Because if you store those in your back pocket, if you can heal off those last few seconds, it's what's going to bring you the wins. That's what got the win in game number 2.
And there's even a big jump between 3rd and 2nd, right? There's a lot of points on offer in those very final points there, and you can see where that heal off does play in a factor. You know, maybe if a Repulse was able to, and Stevo were able to get into that 2nd spot, that's a little bit more points on the board in combination with a lot of their eliminations. So, I mean, this is going to be an insanely volatile tournament for the rest of these final matches as well. And I'm super excited to see where we're going to stand and where we're going to end up as well. We've seen Fresh try to kind of pop off towards there a little bit at the end. Unfortunately, didn't have his duo partner there, so he couldn't finish it off. But we've seen a lot more of these mechanical players in OS really starting to put it to some of these other players as well. And I'm interested to see whether or not this aggressive kind of style will play into their pockets towards the end there.
Yeah, I mean, just to touch on Papi and Skits, they were actually in 5th place going into that game, right? So they've just picked themselves up a win. Yeah. Very good chance they actually leapfrog up into 1st place. So you said you're interested in seeing how the standings do pan out. I think they might be actually at the top at the moment.
And I'd love to see as well, I talked about early, Skits coming off the console track as well, a player that hasn't really made a name for himself, playing with an ex-World Cup champion as well. Yeah. Papi has qualified for World Cup, a great player, a player that is well respected in OC, where I feel like Skits hasn't really had his chance to have that big moment in the sunlight. So I want to see if he can do that here today, because $30,000 up for grabs. As far as OCE goes, that is massive. That is a huge chunk of the prize pool. If you get 15,000 for first, that would do wonders for Skits, not just obviously monetarily, but just reputation-wise. That's what they build it off. We have a whole season coming up, or a whole year of trios. He wants to say, hey, OC, I'm a great player. Look out for me. Play with me. I'm phenomenal. So I'm really excited to see if Papi and Skits can jump up there and maybe hold it.
Especially with some of the names that are floating around this lobby as well, right? We touched on it at the start with some of those duos. There's some big names in Fortnite that are sitting in this lobby right now, and if you're able to get on top of some of those guys, maybe outplay them every so often, there's still a couple matches for him to do that. And that's where he can really start to put his name on top of it. But it's getting to that point now where, you know, 2 matches deep, this is where we start to kind of cut everybody out here. We're going to be able to carve out that top 10. There will be, you know, this next match, this 3rd match will kind of determine whether or not teams are in the running for even that, you know, that top 5 slot.
Yeah, I think you can give the first 2 games, you can sort of be like, okay, that's fair enough. But it's at that point on game 3, if you've not performed in game 1 and game 2, and again, you don't perform in game 3, where you start to think, I just don't have enough time to catch up anymore. We were doing the maths a little bit earlier, 300 points or so, maybe deficit after the first couple of games. I don't think we're going to have that quite so much. I think we're probably going to be sitting around 150 to 200 points for the top end of things. So going into game 3, you think 150, 200 points out of 3 games, that's definitely salvageable, but we need to be having 3 good games in a row. And look, I know that is very much a possibility, but doing that off the back of 2 rougher games when the mental is low, when the confidence might not be quite there, and maybe the momentum's not there for you either, is going to be tough. So it means that 3rd game has to be a big one that really lifts the spirits and makes you believe.
Well, if you look at the eliminations, right, in game number 1, the most we saw was 5. So you talked about these massive 160-point games out of EU and stuff. It's just not happening here on OCE. So really, it does make it harder. You need to get those consistent placement points because it's not going to be a story of eliminations. I think even that game, we saw Repulse and Skits playing so aggressive. We saw them going on the box, taking on Jarlan early. They still, I don't think, even got more than 5 eliminations. So the eliminations just aren't there no matter how aggressively you play, especially into the end game. You need to get the placements. That's going to be the story. So I'm bringing my prediction on the points down a lot. If a team can get even top 10, I think, or every single game, they're probably going to be the ones that win this.
And that's where it feels like we're going to be starting to lean more towards in that heel off towards the end. You know, we talked about the fact that there's not many eliminations in the European region. That's what it kind of came down to. It came to those last couple of fights. Whereas now in Asia, we see a lot more of these heel offs. So maybe teams are going to be leaning more towards fishing a lot more, try and make sure they have those floppers towards the end, try and divvy it out a little bit more so they can win that heel off towards the end, right?
Yeah, very much a possibility. I mean, we've seen a few teams actually adapt and change their playstyle going from game 1 to game 2. It was interesting to note that Sinnoh and Hoodjay were actually moving away from that kind of playstyle. So I guess that goes contrary to your point, Luke, but to be fair to them, they actually haven't really been able to place too highly. So maybe they need to go back to that initial strategy, see what they can do there.
And that's the thing, when you have scary teams like Repulse that start going for that island, I talked about it. I even put it out there like, wow, it's interesting to see a team that's so dominant and so aggressive go to such a passive drop, but then they used it to then play aggressively. So if you are players like Hoodjay and Sinnoh and you're flying in and you're thinking, wait, there's 2 guys going here, what do we do? They pull off and they go somewhere else.
Yeah, having a look at the post-match results here, lads. Not very many points do separate number 1 and number 2. Only 100 and actually, what is it? What, 9 points?
Yeah,
Love
quick maths on
here.
stream. Look, if that was me, I would have got it without even thinking.
Of course. It would have been so much
Jordan.
faster.
Of course, Jordan. But Papi and Skits, they were the ones that got the victory royale, but only 1 elimination. We see here at the top, Alec and Pumpkin were the guys who got 7 eliminations in combination with that 2nd point. So we see now these eliminations are starting to be a little bit more important.
Unfortunately for Alec and Pumpkin, they actually got 0 points out of game 1 though. So they might as well consider JBL Quantum Cup a 4-match tournament for them, right? They've started it off in game 2. Look, that's great news. That's exactly what you need to do when you have a rough start. But you'll see overall in the standings, it actually only gets them up into 6th. And it is indeed Papi and Skits. Great prediction, by the way. Up in first place overall on the standings. It's not by a huge margin, though, right? They've still got a bit of catching up to do in terms of, I guess, it's weird to say that, right? Catching up to do. But I think if they're going to feel comfortable going into these later games, they're going to have a little bit of a look towards more of a lead than maybe 9 points, I'd say. Yeah,
and it's very interesting to see, though. So Papi and Skits up there right now as well. Basil and Swirl having a very good performance, and it's quite a tight leaderboard. So again, as far as what we wanted, it's definitely there right now. That top 3 is very, very close. Even top 4, then it starts to kind of clear off a little bit towards those players. And again, it becomes a story of, like you said just then, Jordan, 5, 6, and well, not 7 so much, but I guess it's 7. They had big games. They've had 1 big game. So 5, 6, 7th, 8th really have had 1 big game. They haven't had 2 good games to link it all together.
And we can see here towards the lower end of the standings, a few single-digit points for a lot of these teams. You guys touched on it, Jinx and Worthy. Fortunately, they got 0 points in that last match as well. And they started off with an 8th. So, you know, you talked about, Jordan, the fact that this feels like a 4-match tournament for some of these teams. Right now, Jinx and Worthy, they've only got 3 matches left to go. And they've got a lot of points they've got to catch up.
Definitely. I mean, you were asking me last game, after the last game, who I thought needed to sort of step up a little bit. And I think that storyline now is reinforced, actually, for Jinx and Worthy. Because they're down in 14th place. And if you come in saying they're supposed to be one of the strongest teams in the lobby, then they definitely aren't quite there at the moment.
Jinx is the only player in the world that has 3 FNCS championship titles. Like, it's not like a lot of people debate in every esports title, right? Who's the best? What's the best? Jinx is the best player in OCE, hands down, just because of that facet alone, let alone the best player potentially in the world with that. Again, you talk about how hard it is on different regions, but severely underperforming here today, and I'm happy to say that. They would not disagree either. But again, we'll see. Maybe they're trying to figure it out. I don't really know how they're going to play it.
Yeah, well, we still got 3 matches left here for the Asian region of Fortnite in the JBL Quantum Cup, but it's break time for us here in the studio. That means about 5 minutes until we head into match number 3 here for the JBL Quantum Cup.
The sounds of victory. JBL Quantum Gaming headsets.
The first time you sit down, it is loud. There are fans screaming and chanting, drowning out the call-outs from your teammates. I mean, you are not in Kansas anymore. We're in the finals, trying to find the last player, finally take him out. People are screaming, but I can't hear a word you're saying. I felt like I'm underwater. All this self-doubt that I had just seemed like it was washed away by the tide. Listening to myself, I feel like it's a soundtrack in my head through every step of my career.
What's up, guys? It's your boy Yanis, and this is my JBL pregame ritual. Catch Z's so you don't catch L's. Crisp count, make everything sound better. Knock knock. Pre-game hype is key. Set the vibes and get your game face on. Let's get it.
Hi everyone, it's Brooke AB and I'm super excited to be partnering with JBL this year as part of the launch for their JBL Quantum Gaming headsets. I've been using this pair of JBL Quantum ones since about April, and the active noise cancellation is super impressive, especially with Nadeshot next door yelling all day long. The JBL Quantum Cup is just the beginning for JBL, so keep an eye out for more, and good luck to all the amazing competitors from around the world.
Welcome back everybody here to the JBL Quantum Cup. Fortnite in the Asia region, and we are 2 matches down. We've got 3 to go here, and it is anybody's game so far. And as I welcome back everybody here onto the desk for the Asia region, we're getting ourselves prepped and ready for match number 3. Lads, we've talked about 2 of the matches so far. We've seen kind of similar stuff so far, but there's still a few of these viewers that need to step up a little bit in match number 3.
Oh yeah, definitely. Look, let's be real. There's more than a few that need to step it up. I mean, I think we've seen a couple that are starting to build themselves a bit of an advantage, Aussie. But aside from that, the teams that haven't really been able to pop off in Game 1 and Game 2, this is kind of the last chance for them.
Yeah, like I feel bad that we're just putting all the focus onto Jinx and Worthy right now, because there's big teams in right now. I'm looking at, we have Sync and Volks down the leaderboard, we have Carrion and Fresh down the leaderboard, Vortex and Jace. So there's a lot of teams that really need to step up. I'm quite impressed so far of seeing quite a few Asian teams that are really high up there that are doing quite well, because right now it's the top tier OCE players that I'm really expecting to step up here in these last few games.
Yeah, it really does feel like that match 3 is kind of the cutoff, right? If you haven't performed in the first 2, all right, you've still got 3 more to go. You've got the majority of it to go. But if this third one works out the same way it has for Jinx and Worthy, then I'd imagine that's basically quits for them right now. You know, they can't finish off the tournament getting so many points unless they do have a big, you know, pop-off game where we've seen a lot of those points do come through. You know, it is doable, but it goes into that situation where mentally you might have checked out at that point.
Yeah, and it's really scary because if you're a top-tier team at that point, if you're in your first, second place, you have to avoid them because you're going to very quickly know who are the good teams who haven't really done the best in the games before it, and they are hunting eliminations. They're going to force them so much more than we've already seen.
All right, Lance, we are getting ready for match number 3 here. Let's see if the hunt is on for Jinx and Worthy or whether or not they're going to go out with another big donut.
Well, it's not just Jinx and Worthy that we're going to be keeping an eye on. I think you can go down probably to 10th place if you're going to cut things off. Carrion and Mr. Fresh Asian below, they're the ones that are going to be needing to have a big game right here, right now. They are the ones that are more than 120 points behind first place, right? If you're going from 9th above, there's maybe still a bit of an argument that 2 games might be enough. So if that's where we're splitting things on the lobby at the moment, I think you can type leaderboard in chat and have a bit of a look at how things are going if you're wondering what I'm talking about. But yeah, definitely 10 downwards need to have a pretty good game here, and they need to be popping off and getting themselves 100+ points to be able to stay in the running.
And the hard point normally is you can talk about drop spots or loot, or maybe they didn't have this, but that's not an excuse for any of these teams right now. They've all got good drop spots. They're going into endgame with good loot, so you can't hope on a little bit of that RNG that those things will change. As I see Hoodjay take down Raptor, and I think potentially Will there. That is insanely massive. That is, again, an Asian team that has just taken down 2 phenomenally good OCE fighters very, very early on in the competition.
I wonder if we can get a replay of that. I know that we do have replays available, but we'll see whether or not we did catch it and see what actually happened there, Aussie, because that was extraordinarily fast.
That was very fast. That's almost, to me, like got a good maybe assault rifle on spawn and then just went for a beam out of the sky or as they landed, because that wasn't like a get a couple guns and run at each other. That was genuinely just maybe a bit of good loot on spawn. And again, the Asian players just renowned for their phenomenal aim. I would not have been surprised to see Hoodjay hit some really good shots there. The 2 eliminations on the board, you talk about, that's 8 points already right now. That's going to jump them right now from their 12th place right up there. They're going to be getting so many more points out of that one right now. So that pushes them potentially towards that top 10 and into the top 10.
Yeah, look, it's not just going to come down to elims at this point anymore, though, for Sinnoh and Hoodjay. Like, they did have a couple of rough games to start things off. Let's not sugarcoat it. 2 elims per game out of the first 2 games is just not enough to win a tournament like this. So, getting into placement points, very, very important. And another contest over Sweaty, but this time it's a different team.
This is very scary right now. Zora and Jarlan took this fight last time against 2 pro players, and again, Swagger Souls and Toby. I like it though. They've decided that yes, the way we're playing right now, we're not getting enough loot from our more shambles drop spots. Let's go somewhere a bit more aggressive, but Sweaty Sands was not the play. Zora and Jarlan will chase them down. They will take this fight. They know that they're up there, and they know they need eliminations right now. They're in 7th place, so they're not mentally checked out. They're definitely mentally checked in, and they're checked in on eliminations. Toby's farming this one. Zora's going to see that little angle and is going to get some big beams off very soon right now. And the beautiful play here, Jarlan drives past, which takes Toby and Swagger Soul's attention and just gets beamed up in the back right now. Jarlan walks up and even hits the emote. He's that confident, but Swagger getting some good shots in onto Jarlan. It's a bit of payback, really but unfortunate you see Jarlan hit a bit of the BM on Toby, and she just didn't deserve that.
Yeah, look, they're not having a good time at the moment, Swagger and Toby, unfortunately. They are getting a little bit wrecked. It's okay. It would be me as well. I'm not going to go ahead and, you know, stand on the high ground or anything like that when I don't deserve to. I understand, by the way, Aussie, you know, I don't really watch too many of your streams. You know, I'm not like a big fanboy or anything like that. But when I do tune in, I understand you're not exactly the greatest player yourself.
I'm not. Okay, that's the thing. I would like to point out that I am far above average, which still puts me so incredibly below these guys, though. And that's what it is. Every time I do events where, you know, there's some invited players, maybe some celebrities and stuff, I always hear the same thing. Oh, no, I play all the time. I play during the week. I get some dubs here and there. I think I stand a chance. They are lucky if they get a single point on the board by the end of the tournament. It's always the story. These guys are an entirely other level, and until you play against them, until you verse them, you really don't understand how big of a difference it is. I feel like my confidence gets raised a little bit. I'm doing okay, and then I get invited to one of these tournaments, or I try and give it a go, and I just get absolutely destroyed.
That's what I love about some of those tournaments where we see sports players and real-life celebrities getting involved as well, because they're the ones that come in like high and mighty, and they have all the banter and the BM and the talk and that. And then you see them, you're like, mate, you don't even know how to play this game on a casual level. It's hilarious sometimes. But anyways, back to the game at hand, and Coliseum still not contested, which is, you know, one of those drops that you would have probably thought someone would be at. Not today, though.
Yeah, you can push your way into it late. Again, I talk about these central drops being probably very, very strong to rotate out of, but I'm pretty sure Carrion and Fresh here have figured out the winning formula. They don't split up between Pleasant and Salty Towers because they're concerned that maybe someone would split up and drop on them. No, Carrion just rotates there and gets the loot anyway right now. So Fresh and Carrion, again, have no excuse in this game to not perform with the amount of loot they're getting. As when I talk about loot, here we have Looter and Sorif right now, still sticking to their Craggy. Don't change things that are working. They're in the top 3 right now. They're really only less than 12 points behind first, so they can really jump up here and have a big game. Game 1 winners. Game 2 went well for them, but not as well, as now we see Hoodjay and Sinnoh having really good loot here, but it brings them towards Looter right now if they go into that position.
Nothing too crazy going on at the moment. It's interesting that Sinnoh and Hoodjay have been rotating their drop locations a little bit, but look, they've got to make it work. They've got to make it work here in game number 3. I'd like to keep an eye on Hoodjay, and you know, there's a few other teams that are sort of sitting around that mark. We've talked about Zink and Volks a little bit today. We've talked about Jinx and Worthy, certainly a lot. Cambo and Jesse. I mean, you just go down the list and you think any one of these teams at the moment has to have one of those big games right here, right now. It needs to be something like 100 plus, even up to 130. I think I would be a little bit more conservative in my estimates, and as we see this lobby starting to play out a little bit more, it seems like that the top end in terms of points from an individual game might now be like 100 to 110 points as opposed to 130, just because there's less eliminations to go around in general, so you're not being able to pick up quite as many points that way. So that will have to probably factor into our discussions a little bit later on when we're thinking about which teams we will cut off from the list and say, well, there's just no chance they're coming back anymore.
And there's a lack of mobility in this season to try and move around in the early and mid game too, to try and find those eliminations. Everyone's spread out really, really far. You can't just have that insane game where, you know, you leave it all out there and you charge at everyone you can see, because they're also spread out. Jinx and Worthy might be in that mindset right now. Okay, let's push at everyone we can see right now. There's no one. There's no one anywhere near them on the map, not even close to them in a few of those POIs. As Fresh, not having used this shield yet, I'm guessing maybe trying to hold on to that to find a slurp truck. There now are 3 of them near Salty Towers. One of the biggest strengths of Salty Towers right now are these slurp trucks, which means instead of using 2 of those big pots or potentially all of the chug splashes, now gets to hold on to all of them. And just that confident, again, like I said, there's not that many people around you. He can rotate with no shield to this point, feeling comfortable.
Yeah, it can definitely put you in an interesting mindset, can't it? You know, particularly if you start going and doing that kind of thing in bigger tournaments as well, you will potentially run into a bit of trouble. So you've got to make sure you don't fall into bad habits. It might be a good decision right here, right now in JBL Quantum Cup, but looking into the future for those guys as well, it's definitely something to just, you know, keep in check here and there. Speaking of shields, AJ Power and Shura Dog looking quite happy in that respect as well. They've got themselves a couple of shockwave nades, even for those late game high ground contests. And I think they're probably another one of those teams that we do want to be seeing have a pretty good game here. I'm just having a look down the list to see where exactly they've ended up. And they're in 16th at the moment, so they do actually only have the 1 elim to their name, which I'm a bit surprised by. I thought that we would have seen a little bit more from them just based on the eye test, but I guess I'm wrong.
I'll have to see how they have to see how they go into this one. It's been a hard one to pick because, again, everyone's got some very solid loot. I don't think Jinx or Worthy have ever been this low on a leaderboard ever in anything. Ever. It's just incredible right now. But coming into the show, I feel like, again, we were able to see a lot of the trends we knew would play out. I knew high ground wasn't going to go that well. I knew it was going to be harder to find these eliminations. So I have to imagine that Jinx and Worthy knew that as well. They are smart players. I'm not going to try and pretend just because I watch this much Fortnite that I know more about them than them. They're phenomenal players as Splash and Blink go up for this fight right now. And it is Carrion and Fresh, a very scary team to be fighting in this situation. And right there, they go down. Fresh is at full health. Carrion with this finish is going to go back up to 174. And this is very, very scary scary for this team, but we have a third party coming in, we have squads in, we have player one taking the shots. Our Thailand contingent, as you touched on earlier, and Splash gets the shockwave out, but do you go straight back into the path of the opponent, straight into the path of the boat? And I think they're leaving, but no, they hit white tags there. They know this player is in dire straits right now. Fresh and carry on push in as well. Splasher goes down here, so they trade one apiece, and let's see if they're comfortable splitting. I don't think they're going to take this fight. They're both in Storm. They're setting up, watching each other, figuring it out, but no, they're both going to rotate, and they're happy with their 4 points each.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough as well. Get yourself out of that rougher situation. It was looking really good for Carry On and Fresh, and to be honest, they would have picked that up, let's be real. 2-on-1, they're definitely picking that up and getting those extra points on the board. But that third party comes through, means they do miss out on some points, but at least it doesn't end up with them getting knocked out. Because right now, what I was going to say is those were some nice points to pick up for Carry On and Fresh. To be fair, they were. Could have been some more. Disappointingly, not the case. But definitely need to be getting those points on the board and converting that into a big game. You know what I mean? Like, they can get the 1 point, one elim, and then, you know, try and bring it up to 4 or 5, get themselves a win here.
I think worth noting on as well, you talked about EU and NA kind of had their zone trends. It looks like Asia not having really any of that. We've had a far west zone, we did have a far north zone, and now we're having kind of a northeast far zone. So I'm guessing right now it is a situation of kind of spreading it around the map, I guess, but we haven't seen any of those south zones, which is really going to affect those teams that are dropping on the south side of the map right now, where north is feeling really good right now. As you see, Repulse and Stevo really split. I guess Stevo trying to find something out there, maybe fishing for a little bit longer, getting as many of, I guess, the Rift fish as possible. Carry On and Fresh now making that rotate as we now hearing the beams come out right now. Shots are being taken and players are finding each other. I'm seeing on the map right now we have Jinx and Worthy very close to, again, a team that you talked about that was quite low on the leaderboard. So that is going to be a 14th versus 16th place, but it's Jinx and Worthy. You really can't count them out in those fights.
Most definitely, and another one of the teams that I would like to talk about is GW. They're still sitting up in 4th place. I think they were in 4th after game 1, which is, you know, actually pretty good for them because, like, look, you know, I was just having a quick look down at the standings here, and they've had a 4th placement in both game 1 and 2. Yeah. So it kind of stands to reason that they would be in 4th place overall. I suppose that's kind of how it works. But that consistent placement, if they can keep that going and, you know, maybe just edge that up into a 3rd or a 2nd, get a few more elims on the board, they'll be able to jump themselves right up into 1st place, or, you know, even 2nd or 3rd is definitely a step up. But look, they're not that many points away, and I think that's the important thing. It's like, yeah, you might not be getting wins on the board, but at least go into that final game with only 1 game's worth of points in the deficit. Give yourself that room to work with and just have that one pop-off game to come back from behind. That's totally acceptable. That's one way you can go about things to ensure that you don't end up in a situation where, you know, you throw your tournament away a little bit earlier than you might like to.
Yeah, and one of the scary things that I see for our team in the lead, Papi and Skits, you could say it's a strength or a weakness. They have only 5 eliminations where all the other teams inside the top 6 all have more than that. So they're showing they can get the placements, they can get the win, the heal off, but are they going to be able to handle themselves in some of the fights that matter? And now Papi and Skits are very good fighters, but you're seeing, like those teams you talk about, we talk about Basil and Swirl, they have 9 eliminations, almost double Papi and Skits, so they can hold their own when it comes to those fights. Maybe Papi and Skits get in 1 fight too many and they go down, and that's going to really affect their placements. So as much as they're in the lead and everyone's gunning for them, it's off the back of a few really good placement games, but not having to get too many eliminations. If they start getting pressed endgame, do they drop down too early? Do they go for height when they shouldn't have as the beam comes out here? Jinx and Worthy saying, hey mate, kind of peek that head down. We don't want you looking up at us for too long. We're happy up here.
Yeah, I think that's something that I always look at as well as far as the eye test is concerned. If you're getting a lot of placement points, that's well and good, but I also want to know that you can win fights on a consistent basis. And if you're seeing people have a lot of elims, then it sort of goes hand in hand with winning fights. Obviously, you don't want to go too far on the other end of the spectrum, in that if you're taking too many fights, there's a very good chance that you end up just dropping early on in the piece by nature of getting in more fights and having more risk. So it's kind of a risk versus reward sort of a balance thing. But either way, have to keep an eye on that as we go through the rest of this afternoon. This evening, I suppose it is now.
It's looking a bit scary right now. Stevo and Repulse have come in late, and again, they're the players that I'm looking at to make situations like this. They're going to start sussing people out. I always talked about, when it comes to Fortnite, I've always said, I don't know why there's certain players that shoot at everyone they see, and it was actually Repulse himself who countered me saying, hey, well, why would I not shoot at everyone? Because I can gauge them. Do I find out how much health they have? Do they react slowly? Do they build weirdly? It gives you more information than if you don't. He said it's the other players that are stupidly aggressive that push everyone that shoots at them. So he defended the fact that Repulse is known known for being one of the most aggressive players, and that often kind of gets people to talk about the mindset of, oh, they're just stupid aggressive. They just take every fight. And he's like, no, I'm aggressive, but I'm smart aggressive, and that's what we're seeing here today. He's taking good fights in the mid game that are getting in those extra bit of points and setting them up for end game to then kind of close out the games.
I think that's a good way of looking at it, isn't it? It is a bit of a risk versus reward thing again, right? Because yes, you may also be getting some information out of shooting at people, but they are getting information from the fact that you're shooting at them. So, you know, it kind of goes hand in hand. It's a question of what you see as a little bit more valuable. And obviously for him, he sees that the information that he gathers is more valuable than the information that he gives away. But it might not always necessarily be the case. Speaking to that point, Jinx and Worthy, well, they're quite comfortable up there on the high ground, so they're happy to fire a few pot shots across.
How are they going to get in? I'm scared for that one. They can't take the zip line. It's going to leave them way too exposed. They've got the rift in the back pocket, but again, we've talked about rifting this early and this exposed. I guess there it is. I think they hit a bouncer shockwave, or it looks like just a bouncer to get off there. And now they're going to push forward, and maybe that's why Worthy was taking these shots, these pot shots again, like you said, just kind of feeling out who's in front of them, because here we do have our Short Dog team, and Jinx and Worthy going aggressive. They're looking for a box fire now. They've felt out this team, and I think they've identified they're not very strong. Tried to take the wall here, and again, if Worthy can take your wall on his 60 ping, I think he's identified this is an Asian team right now and he wants to push forward into it. So we'll see how they play this one. And again, you look on the minimap in the bottom right, there's not too many eyes on them. This is actually a really good spot to take that fight, as there it is. Worthy missing more shots than Worthy actually normally does. With the bouncer shockwave coming out, that leaves you very exposed as you go through the sky, as now Worthy and Jinx might keep pushing that team. I'm not really sure. They've definitely felt them out and found out that team is lacking.
It certainly seems that they are on the hunt, so to speak. We talked about them perhaps needing to be on the hunt, and they can get themselves some extra points early on here. Just get a couple of elims. Get the blood flowing, so to speak, and get a little bit more comfortable, a bit more confident. That could be big news. Do slow things down, but they, you know, it doesn't scream that they're going to bunker down to me. This setup that they've got at the moment, they are more than happy to just keep putting a bit of that pressure back onto Shora and AJ Power.
Uppy and Skid's in a really good situation. That's your first place team. So again, if you just tune in, you don't know what's going on, this is match number 3. We have Papi and Skids in first place, we have Basil and Swirl in second, and we have Luta and Sorif in third. Those are the names you're looking out for right now. So that panning shot gave us a great idea of the situation that our first place team, Papi and Skids, are in, and they're looking very, very good. As right now we see a team that hasn't been doing too well up there right now, as Hood J takes down Will and... Didn't we see them take down Will and Raptor earlier this game? Maybe only took down one of them, and then the other one went on as Raptor now trades with Sinnoh. I swear that's the 2 eliminations we saw on early. I don't know what's happening here, as unfortunately AJ Power goes down, Carry-On goes down, and this game is breaking up and getting a lot more action than we're used to seeing.
Yeah, well, that's where we do tend to actually go, at least in this format, from what we've seen in EU and NA. First few games are a little bit more passive, but the further we get through the tournament, the later we get into these games, the more there's going to be going on, and teams starting to feel like either A, we're out of the running, so we're just going to have a bit of fun, get a bit more aggressive and see what we can do, or B, we need more points right now and we need to go for them right now, basically. So they're going to start getting aggressive off the back of that. And it's only the teams that are sitting towards the top end of things, which, for example, like Papi and Skits, are going to be a little bit more happy to just chill out and sit around in their builds and wait for those circles to move in. They're on the high ground, but they'll have to move eventually, one would imagine. So they won't be really putting all their eggs in that basket just at the moment.
And this is your best chance to get your eliminations. When you look around, you really have to get your eliminations before 4th zone or before 4th zone closes, and then into rotating zones. As I say that though, Pumpkin takes down Stevo here, and that wasn't a knock, that was a finish. So Repulse and Stevo, after a fantastic game 2, are out of this in game 3. I was just going to say, taking fights at this point in the game are a lot scarier because there's so many players close together, but you can't really have that clean box fight, that clean fight you want, but they're not so close like rotating zones where you can pick them off. So this is where you do have to calm down a little bit. So I think people taking their last chance to have a fight, to get their extra points on the board before they have to calm down. But that was another kind of spurt of energy there. And again, we see our good fighting team in 5th place go down. Repulse and Stevo are out of this one, and that's not easy to do.
Yeah, for the rest of the players in the lobby that have been really tracking the standings, as I'm sure most would be, that's going to be good news, because you can start to headhunt for a top 5 spot, knowing that Repulse and Stevo aren't going to be getting too many points out of this game. Jinx and Worthy, again, are quite happy to move in next to another team. This time it's a different one, but they're certainly not scared of taking some real estate nearby. Not afraid of neighbors, let's say. Alec and Pumpkin also on the move.
a 6th place team. They're looking very good right now. Alec, again, coming off the back of his trio FNCS victory. I've been talking a bunch about Jinx and Worthy because they're playing together. We talked a little bit earlier as well about, the third wheel. Alec was the third wheel in that one, left behind, but playing very well with Pumpkin, which again is a player, hasn't really built up that massive top tier reputation. So maybe a chance to do so here as well. As we see right now, 6 and I think Sin it is has built a really nice place here and looks like they really like the Hispanic llama there.
Yeah, gotta love it. Nice spruce the place up, I suppose.
It's a beautiful base now. The only problem is when you edit the walls and you reset them, it's all gone. All your hard work is out of here right now, as that was a dragon shotgun there. So player 1, the Thailand contingent has to be very careful, because up on that wall, that dragon shotgun rings out. And not only is it ring out, you can see it. It leaves flame. It is the one gun in the game that actually leaves a flame trail behind and will light wood builds on fire, which is a very underrated effect that it has, because when a wood wall's on fire, you can't edit it. You lose the ability to be able to edit that wall. So if someone pushes in your box, they pressure you with it, you can't get out of the box. So not only are you taking 10 damage a second from the fire, you can't edit out either, but it means that player is one of few players in the lobby that can one-shot you with no build-up time on a charged shotgun. So got to be really scary when players like that are around you.
I kind of like that. Just gives you a bit of an extra option, even if you're not using it to eliminate your opponents. You can use it just for a sense of utility.
Yep.
Carry on and Fresh up onto the high ground early on in the piece. And if everything we've learned about JBL Quantum Cup so far is to be believed, early high ground is not the way to go.
Not at all. That scares me as well. As a team where Fresh, again, we've talked about it, gets that kind of title of content creator versus pro, phenomenal player, has his strengths like I talked about earlier, great tack aim, really good shotgun aim. One of his definite weaknesses, and this comes from coaching him personally, is high ground. I really don't like to see Fresh and Worthy up there on the, Fresh and Carry On up on the high ground. We'll have to see. Maybe they're holding it for now. They're going to give it up later, but I feel like they're going to be too tempted to try and hold on to it, and it could spell disaster for them here, but they could prove me wrong. Maybe this is the day where they figure it out, as we see Worthy got an elimination in the feed, so they're jumping up there, but eyes are on this high ground. Let's see where zone goes, and they get zone, which again, I don't want to see. No, they're going to build up and they're going to try to hold it. They could do something with this. They have 4 shockwaves in the back pocket for Carry On, so if someone takes it, they can take it back off them, but I can see this going poorly. We'll have to see. I hope I'm proven wrong.
Well, hopefully you can reverse cast a curse. You know,
Yep.
we've been talking all about that in a negative light.
Ooh.
Maybe it'll go really well for them.
Yep.
Sorif on the ground. I don't know if he's going to be getting picked up at this point. That was actually a knock from Worthy.
Yep.
So that'll be some important points on the board if that does end up getting confirmed.
It'll have to be confirmed. Luda's a phenomenal player, but I don't think there's much he can do here. He's picking up the body, he's throwing the edits, the builds, but they're hunting it down. He does. No way. He could even throw a splash on this to keep it alive. There's no way he pulls this off. He does. No way.
What?
Luda with the absolute god teammate play, but no, he has to cancel it, and there it is. That canceling for 1 millisecond was enough. The only way I was going to hold on to that one, but never mind. Luda jumps back in and says, hey, mate, you took him down. I stopped the reboot, but I'm coming after you now. I'm back on the front foot, and this is a scary position to be in when it's Luda against you. He is a very phenomenal fighter.
Yeah, certainly not looking too happy at the moment. Gets himself a bounce pad, though, and just gets out of dodge, which is kind of needed at that point because he did have the storm pushing at his back. You can see the rifts have been used now. There's a lot of players up in the air. Unlikely to see any of them dropping like flies because there's just plenty of targets, and focusing down one might not be quite so easy. Fresh is going to have his crack, and he's doing a pretty good job of some early on damage, but this, end of the day, not going to result in an elim.
This was a good zone actually, Fresh and Karen to take high ground. I was scared of them taking high ground, but you see how it's gone up this mountain, so the high ground isn't that high. It's not that scary. Everyone's making their way from beneath, and now Carry On doing a good job to jump up on top of the mountain. I've changed my opinion now because this zone going up the mountain has played very well into Carry On and Fresh's hands because no one's had the time and the breathing room to try to go for high ground. They haven't been able to shockwave up and take it because they've been so focused on just getting on top of this mountain. So I take it all back. Fresh and Carry On in a great position now, but it looks like everything's high and dry. Everything's clear. There are still 14 teams alive, 23 players. No one has gained placement yet. So if someone in this lobby wants to take high ground, they can play spoiler. But at this point, there it is. Volks lands on it. This is where it's going to matter. And there it is. Volks beams up Fresh. Now I take it back. Again, this is looking scary, but Volks is on the high ground. Sync jumps on Carry On's head. The damage comes out. And again, I don't know if I've cursed them. I reverse cursed them. They could potentially be going down here without placements. And Volks and Sync have taken the high ground.
Yeah, you can see Fresh desperately trying to get back up. A couple of times he's tried to get back up onto that high ground to try and help Carry On out, but he eventually does give out. He says, Carry On, you're on your own, mate. Luckily, in the end, Carry On actually gets down. I guess you look at that and you say, that's actually not a bad result for Carry On and Fresh. Considering how low Carry On is, you would have thought there was a good chance one or two of them or both of them really just get knocked out of this game. But they're still alive. They're on the low ground now, but they can still play the game out.
If they need to get a big impact very soon, they need a refresh right now. Here we go. We have Basil on the wall right now, trying to get onto Luda, who he knows a solo. Good edit, but only a 22 tag with that green tag. The fight's breaking out here. We're following the mid-ground and low-ground teams, and I love it for this action right now as Worthy takes down Fresh. Fresh didn't get inside the placement points, but I don't know whether Carry On did. High ground did spell disaster for that team, and unfortunately, they needed a big performance as right now we have Luda needing to hold on because his team is in third place. He needs to hold on to this. He needs to stay in the lead and get big points for his team.
Well, it was Sink and Fish that actually knocked them off of the high ground, and they are the ones that are still maintaining control of that. Volk's a little bit more down towards the mid-ground, taking those fights, whereas Sink's quite happy to sit up the top and pepper a few shots down, pot shots more than anything else. Now, Volks will rejoin him. They'll set themselves up, and we're into the end game, and Jason, W Park.
They're going to have to do something. Volks, this is a scary team up. Use Volks and Sink on top of your head is not going to go very well. He also, again, he has the slow fish, he has the floppers. Sink probably not going to have to go for the heal off. And you talked about the utility, Jordan. There it is. The Dragon Shotgun being used to put all those wood builds on fire. Most players often use their hard mats early, down to fire in the end. Sink does not lose these. He has the Rift Fish. We could even see, I don't think we'll see it, but I'd love to see, never mind. I was going to say a bit of Katowice moment. Drop down with the Rift Fish, the Zayt special, but nah, Volks says, I'm going to go for the Volks special. The Dragon Shotgun to finish it off, and what a spectacular game for them. And they went into that game not too far down the list, so they could potentially have had a big jump up.
Yeah, with a few of those eliminations towards the end as well, that does buff up a lot of their placement points so they got here towards the end. But something interesting coming out of match number 3, lads, is that didn't go all the way towards the end for a heal-off.
Yeah.
That was a little bit more aggressive from a lot of these teams, so seeing a little bit more of those eliminations coming in and playing towards, you know, those earlier circles.
Yeah, it could be a factor having to go up the hill. We know that's always a difficult task on the rotates and tends to see a few people dropping off earlier on than otherwise might be the case. I think that's a great win, though, by the way, for Sink and Volks. Absolutely what they needed. Going into that third game, we had the storyline. We said teams sitting in 10th place or lower desperately need these big points, and, well, one team's definitely going to go away with some points. The question was going to be whether it was a team that was still requiring the points to catch up or a team looking to improve on their lead. But for Sink and Volks, who, like we said, came in 11th place, they were only on about 40 points coming into that one. It was much required. It's obviously not going to be enough to get them up into first place, I would suggest, but either way, it'll be enough to get them into the discussion for our 2 remaining games.
Yeah, it really does feel like across a lot of these matches, there's a lot of volatility when it comes to those leaderboards, and we can see even now when these results do come in for us, we talked about anywhere between that first towards 12 spot to have a shot for the title, and as we just saw now, getting a new victory out in match number 3 means that match number 4 and 5, if they just place consistently, these guys can continue to put points on the board.
Yeah, and at the same time, it's also those teams and players that are figuring out how this tournament goes. It's not just a new season meta, it's a new tournament meta. It's adapting as we go along, and again, I don't want to say I told you so, but high ground early is not the play. I kind of want to message these guys. I want them to tune in and listen, because it's not just the story of tonight's tournament, it's every region. You talked about coming into it, guys. You watched EU, you watched NA. Height early is not the play anymore, and I'm so scared to see Fresh and Carry On get that zone and then think, oh, we have it, because any other season, that is an absolute blessing. You get first rotating, you're on high ground, let's go, but no, it goes against them at this exact moment. Volks jumped onto high ground, got some good shots onto Fresh. At the exact same time, you'll now see Sink land on Carry On. Maybe miscommunication. Fresh didn't actually call out that Volks and Sinks were coming up, or at least Carry On wasn't listening, because he gets blindsided by Sink. They lose their high grounds, and they lose their grip on the game.
Yeah, we saw all the way towards the end there, they had Volks on the low ground there. They eventually were able to change it up, and they got the victory royale towards the end. We said a lot of points are on offer here across a lot of these matches. A lot of those eliminations with that 90 points for first place does rocket them up there. And again, lads, we're going to talk about this for the rest of the tournament as well. Every single one of these matches is super important. And going into match 4 and 5, they are still as important as ever, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's arguably more important. I guess there's 2 schools of thoughts. The first 2 games are more important because you get yourself that lead, you get yourself that momentum, or there's the school of thought where the final couple of games are the most important ones, because in theory, those are the ones where if you don't actually make it happen, you think, oh, what if I would have just gotten 10 or 15 extra points in game 4, game 5? That last game, I might have just gotten a little bit more. I got over the line, but it's, I think, a bit more of a mental aspect in that respect, where you can obviously get those points over the course of the tournament, but you don't really think about that. It's more, a recency bias if you don't quite make it, that you're thinking of what you could have done in those final few games.
That kind of touches on what you were saying a little bit earlier, right, Ozzy? The fact that these guys are still trying to figure out what's really how this tournament is supposed to be played out. And we can see now towards a lot of these matches where we are seeing a little bit of a change in play style coming in towards it. And maybe this is where these teams have finally figured it out. Took them 3 matches to get there, but they've still got 2 more to go.
But that's the thing, as they figure it out now, people change. We even saw in that game, things started to get a little bit more aggressive before it even got to those rotating zones. We were talking about it. So now you've got game in 4 and 5, you're leaving everything out there. You've figured it out, but it could completely change right now. You could have teams trying to just go through low and mid ground, being like, hey, there's only one team on high ground. We keep contesting that for the placement. I need the eliminations and the win. So low ground's where I'm going to go. And again, it changes. So it's hard to know. I feel like in Fortnite, you want to have the lead early because when things start to get volatile, it's always at the end of tournaments.
Yeah, it's always having, you know, those points in the bank, right, that you can rest on if you do have one of those poor games. You know, 4 and 5, we said they're extremely important, but if you've got 200 points on the board heading in towards match number 4, if you only get 10 to 20 points, you're still feeling kind of okay with the lead that you've got, right, Jordan? So heading towards the end here, we said around about that 11th mark was where it starts to feel good for a lot of these teams. Do we start to compress that a little bit more heading towards match 4 and 5?
I mean, definitely. I think we'll have to wait and see when we do get the overall placings as to what point we're going to be cutting things off here at. But in my opinion, as far as I'm concerned, I think that there is going to be a few more teams that we'll see dropping out of the contention. Again, if we're going off the maths there, it's probably 200 points, maybe the deficit that's potentially workable going into these final couple of games. But even that is like probably a little bit too much, right? You need to probably give yourself a buffer and say like, okay, maybe 150, 130 is what we're going to be able to overcome. So we'll have to wait and see, obviously, Luke, until we get to see the overall standings.
Especially when it comes into that situation where, you know, maybe that 150-point buffer is 150 points between you and them, and that means they have to get 0 points. And in a lot of these lobbies, it gets to a point where if they're placing high consistently, they're probably not going to end up with another, 0-point game.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like, if you're looking at it from 200 points total, like you can probably get 100 points. If you have 2 wins in a row, you're probably getting about 200, maybe just about 220 points, something like that. So that's where the 150 points then factors in, because you're arguing, okay, well, our opponents are still going to get some points. Don't know how many, but let's give ourselves, a buffer of a decent enough game to sort of make that discrepancy up. So yeah, it's like, okay, 200 points, probably too much. 150, that's the buffer point.
Well, the format also lends into that as well, because we talked about how heavy the top end placement is. You can come 11th and get nothing. So it's not just about playing consistent right now. You've got to be insanely consistent. There's other formats where you start getting the placement points early. As I say that, let's talk about some of these points. Sync and Volks, obviously on the back of that win, 102 right now, but Jinx and Worthy have their redemption. They're up there on the 69 points, but a few other teams, again, I just want to say, I feel like second and third, haven't seen too much from them here until now.
Yeah, exactly. Just scrolling through some of the how the standings were before this match, we had Papi and Skits all the way at the top, and they've only racked themselves up 33 points. And now you see teams like Luda and Sorov, who were in that third slot as well, they got themselves a little bit. Jinx as well as Worthy were also able to finally get a lot of points on the board for them.
Yeah, I'm keeping an eye on Basil and Swirl as well, who came in second place, and they actually only picked up 15 points. So, you talk about Papi and Skits, quote-unquote, only getting 33. Yeah. Well, they've increased their lead at least over second place. The question is going to be, has anyone else caught up in that respect? And Luda and Sorov have managed to, by a fairly considerable margin, I will say. They were down... Where even were they?
They were in third slot.
They were in third. They had our first game victory, and they've come back there with another consistent game. So as you see, again, not surprising in 3 games so far, the Victory Royales, 2 of them going at the top, but showing that 1 Victory Royale isn't enough. We have Sync and Volks, our winner of last game, in 7th place. So we've talked so much about this kind of point margin, but 1 win just really isn't enough right now.
But you see the massive amount of points they got from that one win. It was about 110 points, and they only had 136. So you can see how these players do rocket up the standings when they do get that Victory Royale. So even towards the bottom end of these standings here, these teams can try and make that vie for that 5th slot if they have, a good Victory Royale in match 4, and then even a consistent spot in match number 5. So it's still extremely up in the air, lads, and I'm super excited to see how these final matches do go.
It is interesting, isn't it, right? Because I was sort of throwing out that number about 200 points. I mean, but that might be a bit ambitious, right? Because like we're seeing out of 3 games, no one's even breached 200 points. So those would have to be 2 pretty damn good final games. I think I'm going to recalculate that. Say 150 is like the max. And maybe 100 points deficit is kind of the buffer mark where you're still sort of feeling like, okay, maybe we're just about in this. So that cuts a few more off.
When we get that map view at the start as well, these players aren't really contested. We saw a couple of early eliminations go down there, so it's just going to lend itself to consistency for them. No one's going to take them down early. It's going to see some weird play of someone getting dropped on where they're in the top, and that's caused some big issues. We saw FNCS last season out of EU. We had our first place team land on second place teams. They're like, hey, if we just take them out, then we're guaranteed the win. And people got a bit funny about that, but in Battle Royales, it's open, it's out there. The information of where people dropping is there, and that's how you can play it. So unless we start seeing some of the top tier teams try to take each other out, it's a lot more consistent. They're going to at least make it off spawn, and at that point, when you're as good of a player as that and you get out of that early spawn RNG, they're going to be able to smash it.
Exactly, and that's kind of what leans towards the fact that our settings haven't really blown out all too much, is because these early eliminations aren't going the way of some of these teams. They are playing more towards those placement points at the end. There's only getting a few eliminations when they do eventually get it, so we're not getting these 160, 170 point games out of these duos. We're more getting that 110 where they get that 90 point for the victory. They get a few eliminations on top. So what do you think now these teams are going to be thinking more about those eliminations in regards to the placement points as well? There is that risk versus reward, right, Jordan?
Yeah, there certainly is. We've spoken a lot about that extensively over the course of the day. I think the reason we're not really seeing quite as much of a blowout as we have in other regions is just the factor of consistency hasn't quite been there to the same extent, right? We saw multiple duos in other regions getting consistent top 5 placings. It hasn't quite been to that same margin. You know, we had like a couple of teams that were like first, second. We're just not getting that today at the moment from the Asian region. So that's part of the thing. Elims are definitely going to be a factor, but like it's just such a discrepancy between placement points and elims, especially when there aren't as many elims on offer, that I don't think that can be factoring into your equation. And at the end of the day, you do give yourself just as much opportunity to get those elims if you're surviving into the late game versus if you're going for early elims anyway, right? Just time in the server gives you more of an opportunity to get more points on the board. So I think that's going to be the thing that everyone's thinking about.
Yeah, well, let's see if that thought process does come to fruition here for a lot of these duos. Match number 4, there's only one left after this, so we'll leave it with the boys, the JBL Quantum Cup Asia region.
Tuning in at a drop spot we haven't actually, I think, even seen contested here. Number 4, I haven't seen anyone go here. Coral Castle, a great drop spot with a lot of loot, but no one really going there right now as there's so many jobs up for offer right now. Seeing a fights over, I guess, Steamy Stacks right now seems to be the one drop that's getting the most contested. We have our Asian contingent there. We wanted to see a replay what happened last game. I still want to go back and see that because I have no idea how they got eliminations on the board that quickly. But it looks like everything else for the players that we're keeping an eye out is going normal, except for now we have Toby and Swagger Souls taking on AJ Power and Shuradog. Again, teams that are both not doing too fantastic up there on the leaderboard right now, but at the same time, we've seen Swagger Souls and Toby really kind of play spoiler in some of these situations, opening up fights that otherwise wouldn't be here. And wait a second, Stevo goes down to Stevo.
How's that happen?
Fall damage, but I don't understand how or why. Stevo going to the Flopper Island, possibly one of the most flat areas on the map, with lots of water to fall in, mind you, as well. So I don't really know how that's going on.
Well, hopefully we'll get to have a look at that. Yeah, and... Well, look, I think if we're going to stay on this quote-unquote fight over at Catty Corner, I don't know that we're going to be seeing too much of an engagement. Toby is kind of keeping an eye on the opponents over there, but certainly no aggressive moves being made by either duo just yet.
It's a hard one as well. Catty Corners is kind of like Misty Meadows in that spot where it's a drop spot that's very lineated between, now it's north and south, and right now they're setting up and, ooh, Toby getting the good shots out right now. It's going to come down to a battle of the AKs though. They don't really only have the heavy ARs in the back pocket right now. Kind of getting those shots out, and Toby and Swagger going down here. The big shots come out. 16, come on Toby. What can Toby do? What can she do in this situation? The shots coming out right now. AJ Power coming around with the charge. The shots coming out, and there's it. Toby goes down, and that is it in the feed right now. That's our one team. 3 players down because one of them is Stevo. I'm having to think potentially, Jordan, I think Stevo may have disconnected.
Maybe. I mean, I guess that's always a factor,
because
isn't it?
Repulse hasn't gotten him back up at this point. So that's the only thing I can imagine that would have happened there to lead to that situation.
Yeah, Stevo's out of here. So that's unfortunate for Repulse and for Stevo, obviously, as well, who are actually very much in the running for this game. They're in 9th. They did have a bit of a rougher game in game number 3, but finishing off strong in 4 and 5 would actually give them, you know, another 100 points, 150 points. Again, we talk about those margins, and that would be enough to win, depending on how some of the other teams above them go. But it's all onto Repulse now, and definitely a tough ask to be doing it solo. But it's possible to get into those placement points, and I think that's really what he's going to have to be gunning for at this point. Odie and Jinx over at Dirty Docks.
I have to say really as well, I'm going to put out there, we talked about some of the ANZ bias, and coming into this, there's a lot of these Asian players that I have not heard of, and I'll be happy to admit that as someone who casts a lot of Fortnite, watches a lot of Fortnite, and I think they've done incredibly well and made me pay attention to them right now. We have some really good teams up there. I'm probably going to butcher the name, but yeah, we have LZQM and WPuck as well. We have Hamapi and Lettuce. They're doing really well up there, and they're not the names I was looking out for. Not only are they doing well out of Asia, they're doing better than players like Hoodjay and Sinnoh, who are some of the best players out of Asia. So doing a really good job to make a name for themselves. And again, in case you were curious, these games are being played on OCE servers right now. Obviously, we haven't been able to get them together in one room for a LAN event, so they're playing at a big ping disadvantage and still doing really, really well here against some of OCE's best.
That's impressive, isn't it? It is. I love to kind of see that, though, to be honest with you. I'm not sure what the general sentiment is within Fortnite, but I kind of like to see the inter-regional gameplay between OCE and Asia, just because, at least in OCE, we tend to have quite a bit of a smaller player base. So I think that actually gives the opportunity for our local players to have a better level of competition. As I understand, within Fortnite, I guess it doesn't improve all that much, but traditionally in other esports, you actually look to Asia as like probably the best region in the world sometimes. So if you can actually open up that opportunity for our players to play in, then that makes things, you know, a little bit easier to improve, right? They say you don't improve if you don't play against people that are better than you, and you learn the most from your losses. So that's always going to be, it's difficult. Being the big fish in the little pond is kind of what I'm trying to say. So maybe it's better to be the little fish in the big pond.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a situation you want to be in as well there. And you come in and it's crazy to think. You look at Asia for a lot of these situations. Asia and OCE both not performing phenomenally well when it came to World Cup, which is the only time we've seen a lot of these players on the world stage.
Yeah.
I don't know about Asia, but a lot of OCE players did end up going to DreamHack Anaheim, one of the last major events we had before we went into, obviously, the current global state. And we had players do phenomenally well there. Jinx, Repulse, and Alec all coming inside the top 16. Repulse actually coming fourth, which I hoped was going to be the tournament that put OC on the map and really made people start respecting us. It didn't quite happen, but I still have eyes on those players to continue to do that in the future. But it's great to see tournaments like this that bring them together. Yeah,
I agree. And, you know, to your point, there's been plenty of times I've seen Aussie players go overseas and they've done well, and I've thought, great, this is the time. This is the one that really just starts things off on the right foot. But unfortunately, that very rarely is the case, even if those performances are consistent. You know, so hopefully that'll be the case for Fortnite, but we'll have to keep an eye on things. And that's why I kind of feel it is so important to have a little bit more of that international representation when you do get to see the likes of Aussie teams playing against Asians on a consistent basis. This is not something that we see all that often, though, obviously, in Fortnite. Anyway, there's a heavy snipe, no bolt snipe, but it doesn't look like Volks is too interested in that one, and he's going to be investing early in the rift. So just doing a bit of scouting, I'd say, here for Volks. Not a whole lot to see on this side of the map. You can have a look at the mini-map there, and there's really not a whole lot going on there at all.
Not a whole lot happening there, and this has been the section of the map that hasn't had a whole lot happening the whole time. Southwest section of the map has been very, very free, and it's interesting to see Volks and Sync go out and loot a little bit more of it because they've mostly been sticking inside the Slurpee Swamps area. They don't really have anyone around them, but again, it's been the kind of the western side of the map that's been so important. The southwest and the northwest have been very, very important right now. And it's interesting to see, even with massive POIs uncontested like Retail Row, we still have teams that are dropping in kind of far west, really shamble loot routes, not kind of pushing into any of those major POIs as we get our first southern zone, which could really shake things up and change things for some of those teams that haven't been getting zones before this. We've had a lot of northern zones. Doesn't matter, they've been north, northeast, northwest. We haven't seen a far south zone until now.
Definitely could be a welcome change. We talk about that a lot. It's like, if you haven't been going well, it isn't necessarily as big of a factor as we might make it out to be as casters, but in any case, even that small change might be enough of a mental change to make you feel a little bit more comfortable in this game. And it's going to be required for quite a few teams. Just having a look down the standings list here at the moment and seeing who do I want to cut off. We were talking about 100-point deficit maybe being something that you can overcome, so I'm going to keep 1 to 11 in the mix. I think that's actually pretty respectable at this point. You know, 2 games to go, you've still got 11 teams potentially in the runnings. You might even be able to make an argument for Jinx and Worthy. I know you've been banging on about them all day. So look, if they pop off in these last 2 games, 111 points behind Papi and Skids, it's unrealistic, I'll say.
Yeah, it is.
But
If any team can do it, it's them.
Yeah.
But even then, I don't think they'll be able to either as well. But just looking at that leaderboard, you would never expect to see that. Carry On and Fresh down there as well. Jalen and Zora. There's a lot of names that have just struggled here today. And it's a different format. It's a new season. There's a lot about today that is very different. They just didn't put the pieces together. And we talked about it earlier. They only had 5 games. So it's not surprising they couldn't put the pieces together because they didn't have that much time to try and figure it out, as Repulse is incredibly far away right now. If you're not attuned to the new map, Stealthy Stronghold is the most further northwestern section of the map right now, and we have a very far south zone. So I don't know if he's going to use that Rift Fish to try and maybe use that and then rotate. You can use the Rift Fish and pick up an item, maybe using up the Rift Fish and picking up this big pot. No. Just wants to run it in, I guess. Okay, there's a very far rotate, as you can see I was just talking about. That is not a glitch on your map. That is where Repulse is right now.
I mean, can he even get in at this point without any heals?
He's got the floppers, and it's going to be a one-tick zone for quite a while longer, but it's ideally not the situation you want to be in.
Look at that as well.
Yeah, the way the zones feel right now, we're told there's no real consistency to the zones, but a lot of pro players will tell you it definitely feels like you get constant south zones. Here it is, going to pop the one, gets the assault rifle, and there it is. Repulse is making the very long journey.
Yeah, we are probably going to have to check in with him in another couple of minutes, and he's probably still going to be running, but, well, in this case, flying. Yeah, that's interesting how he's got himself in that situation. He had the campfire, luckily, to keep him topped up as much as possible. But look, it's not going to be a fun game for him. Although, you know, sometimes coming in late could actually prove to be not a bad thing. Not a lot of people are going to be checking behind them later on in the game. They're going to be expecting there won't be anyone coming out from the zone, and so could get the drop on 1 or 2.
Maybe being able to get a drop on someone, and if anyone's going to drop on someone, and even if their back's against the wall, that is not what you want. You don't want a Repulse that's been pinned up against the wall, up against your wall, because he will make you pay for it, and even if he can't eliminate you, he's going to do a lot of damage before he goes down, and that's the good thing about the new season right now. You do have a lot of rotation around the center of the map. You do have these crystals. You have the 0-point crystal effect, where you can pretty much keep almost like teleporting, as you can see now, by just double pressing space. You can also rotate through the sand very quickly, but I do believe the 0 point's faster, and also allows you to do this as you go. Repulse trying to fish up some extra meds. Gonna have to use that flopper pretty soon. And 4, 3, and ooh, he just gets in right now. But Zone's gonna start moving another 30 seconds. I don't know what he's waiting for. Maybe bandages, like as we see, or maybe gonna try and find that med kit. And it's going to be a rough one for Repulse, but he might be able to do it. That's why Duos is such a fun game mode, though, because Trios, it's so hard to solo clutch up. Duos, it's possible. It's just very hard.
It's funny you say Duos, because for Repulse, it's not a Duos at the moment. He's lost Stevo, which was unfortunate at the start of the game. I think we'd be seeing a very different kind of rotate coming in from them if Stevo was still there. So I'd say Repulse has just changed up his strategies, adapting to the fact that he is a solo, trying to fly under the radar a little bit here into game number 4, and hoping that he'll be able to just keep those points ticking over. I'd say you get yourself 20, 30 points out of this one here, Repulse, and you've probably done well enough to go into that final game, assuming we get Stevo back in, and be able to at least still challenge for first place. I think that's what's going to be really important.
It's going to be important. I think you touched on the perfect wording there as well, flying under the radar. Because when you're a solo, that's what you need to do. You need to stay under the radar. If you're trying to kind of make that rotate, you're going to get caught out. People are going to see you, and they're going to know you're a solo. And right now, coming into the final few games, when people need their eliminations, you're going to be seen as an easy one, and they're going to come after you. As we have a lot of teams taking really good positions up here, and this is going to be the first end game we see that might have a really difficult mountain. We saw that last one. Fresh and Carry On took the high ground. It went up like a bit of a mountain. I want to call it a hill in comparison to this area of the map. That southeastern section around Misty, around Caddy Corners, has some of the most unforgiving mountains. If any of you guys have watched any of the official broadcasts, you know as Sundown coins that Old Man Mountain will take his toll. And in these areas of the map, that is definitely what happens.
Saw a little bit of that last game as well, right, with that end rotation. This is an interesting team to keep an eye on, Luda and Sorif, because they are only 6 points behind first place. It's nice to see them fairly happy, comfortable in the center. Volks and Sync, well, they're one of the teams that did a very good job last game, coming in first place. They started off with an 8th place as well, so they've had an okay start to the tournament. But it's these last 2 games that are really going to make or break the finish for them. 7th place at the moment. They got themselves into that position with their good first place win, but they need a bit more of that consistency. And that's the kind of thing where you are at a deficit. You need to start thinking about the long game and making sure that you're able to turn it on right at the end.
And they're a newly formed duo as well. Sync and Volk's been good friends for a while, known each other for a very long time, haven't played together too much before, so going to see if they can maybe build up that chemistry. And again, this is the start of a new season, the start of a tournament schedule. We don't have that many tournaments coming up right now. We don't really know what's going on, so any chance to build up that chemistry, play together, and kind of, you know, get to that point where you can be a top tier duo now, and they have the capability on paper. But right now, what I'm noticing is the capability of the loadout. They both have epic tac shotguns. That is very, very rare. In the current meta right now, it is not easy without upgrade ability to get your hands on such good shotguns. As Sync is opening this one up right now, Volk's going to drive the truck in, and this is looking great for them. They have everything they need as we tune back in with Repulse, and he has made it, but he is not looking good. He's on far side of zone, trying to make sure that no one sees him as a solo. He has no more rotation items, has plenty of meds, has the 3 floppers, has the 3 shield fish, but if he gets beamed up, they're not going to stop until he goes down.
Yeah, he's got a decent amount of mats to play with as well. I think that's one thing that you have to keep an eye on coming in late into the zone. There's an opportunity for him if he just starts to get boxed up, maybe to survive long enough to get into the placement points. And that'll be the aim of the game for him. Volks, not doing a whole lot at the moment. AJ Power and Shora Dog a little bit lower down the hill, and Repulse has been spotted. I think he's aware of it now that Jarlin's fired that shot off, and this is where life gets a bit difficult. Repulse, he's just been happy doing his thing for, 20 minutes or so, it feels like. But now he's going to actually start having to think about what everyone else is doing as well. So important to be getting these mats farmed up as much as possible. Did have to use a few there to keep Jarlin from beaming him down.
With these kind of lobbies, 15 teams alive, 29 players. He's got to be careful because if he finds himself out in the open, we talked about sight lines, this zone isn't too bad if he can get through this next little bit of the rotate, because that's where the mounds will start to give him some cover. Misty Meadows has the houses, but he has to get in there. He can't be playing out here on the edges because he'll get noticed. All the sight lines will be opened up, and if there's more than one team, even potentially just one team who has eyes on him, they can just keep spraying until he goes down. And interestingly, he still has not chosen to use the floppers. Maybe again, hoping he finds some bandages, maybe some med kits inside Misty here. Could be kind of pushing for a campfire. There's not too many around here in this location, but he's still choosing to hold on to those floppers right now, even though he's only on 17 health. They would potentially get him up to 100 and 100, but the main thing in Fortnite is keep your shield topped up, because when someone hears or sees a shield crack, that's when they're going to focus you. Yep. They're going to assume that if he has shield, he has health too, because it's very rare that someone's been rotating in zone for 10 minutes of the game.
I guess there is a certain point where you do just have to play that risk versus reward play style, right? The reward of keeping those floppers for the later on in the game might actually pay off. And when you're a solo, you've been playing solo since the start of the round, you probably do need to be taking a couple of risks if you're going to get a whole lot out of this game. So I don't mind it. Definitely keen to keep an eye on Repulse though, as we do jump back over to GW. They were in 4th place, if you remember, out of game 2, but things seem to have fallen off just a little bit for them, down into 6th now. So they had a 4th, and then a 15th. And they'll hope to be going back to the former placement, or perhaps even better in this one. But they're still within the discussion for a top placing in the JBL Quantum Cup, should they get a win here, or even in the next game.
I've got eyes on Looter and Sorrow right now as well. I feel like their points haven't done it as much. They got the win in game 1, and then they got a 6th and a 6th. That 6th place right now in these lobbies has been like 10 seconds is the difference between 2nd and 3rd sometimes at that point right now. It's crazy when you look at Fortnite how big of a difference those last few placements make as far as points, and how easy it is. You just come around a corner, you edit one different wall, you drop down one different layer, and that's the difference between a 6th place and a 2nd, or potentially a 1st. And that's where the points go big. So being only 6 points behind 1st with that placement, when again you look at Papi and Skits, though, a 5th and a 1st and a 7th. So very similar there for both those teams.
Well, it's particularly a good talking point, because you consider that Papi and Skits, they were 7th in game 3. Luda and Sorrow were 6th in game 3. So if those two are flipped around, Luda and Sorrow have another bunch of points to catch up on. I mean, there's just a bunch of talking points in that respect. But both of those two teams have been clearly the most consistent across the board. For Basil and Swell, 3rd, 5th, and 9th, that's not too bad. LZQM, Puck, 7th, 8th, and 2nd. So there's a few teams that are sort of keeping themselves in the placement points across the board, but evidently a couple that are going above and beyond. Swirl and Basil, interestingly enough, as we're talking about them, they actually stand right next to LZQM and W Puck. So this is 3rd and 4th place in quite close proximity. We definitely don't want to be seeing them get into an early engagement against one another. Otherwise, we might be seeing one drop off quite substantially in this game.
Sometimes quite exciting though, and that's how Battle Royales are so massive, Fortnite included, where if you're in one of the teams that's in the top 5 and you then fight another team in the top 5, it's just the potential, it's the net loss of those points the other team loses, not just what you gain to jump you above them, because we talked about how this placement format is very top heavy with that top 10, but again, the money only comes in at 5th, and even then, I think it was first place was what, 15,000, and second is 6,000, so that is such a big jump. You're not even playing for top 3. You are playing for first in this tournament through and through. So if you can take down another team around that top 5, that's the difference between thousands of dollars here.
I kind of like that, you know. It's it's like go hard or go home.
Yeah.
You got to be all in. Can't just be going, oh, you know, we're happy with second. And in most instances, especially in Fortnite, knowing the prize pools, you would probably be pretty happy with second. Although, not that you'd be too disappointed to be picking up $6 grand, I dare say, Aussie, and I certainly wouldn't be either. But hey, when there's 15 on the board,
that's what you want. When it comes to it, you talk about even the FNCS prize pool from last season. Most players, they were walking around. There was next to no one walking away with, again, you know, $7,500 is how much you're going to walk out with here. That is massive, and that's after weeks and weeks of qualifiers. This is just one night where these players have to put it all together. As we see Basil trying to put it all together right now, trying to get the beams off onto this team, and we've had a very calm game until now because the players have kind of been spread out. Now they're together, now they're on top of each other, and this is when players like Swirl are going to start getting their beams off and start looking for those eliminations because they can't just get the placements, they need their limbs to jump up there too. They're in third, but they know that they're almost 30 points behind first. They need to jump up there, not just with placements.
Zone goes down the hill as well, which is going to cause even more of a ruckus for all those teams that have to come down. Once we start moving, if we have to go back up, then it's also going to make life difficult. W Puck does get dropped. That's by Swirl, and you were talking about him needing to get some elims on the board, and there is one against the team that's right behind them on the placements as well. Big news for Basil and Swirl, especially if they can find LZQM, although he is just hunkered down, not interested in taking any fights anymore. We'll be happy to let everyone just go past him for the moment.
Third versus fourth, that's very big turning event right now. That's a big shot that they needed, and we see Volks and Sync set up on top of them again, showing they can win a game, but can they do it again? We talked in obviously the start there, we had a talk with Fluke as well about how it plays out with, you know, going in the lead, but momentum is a big factor in Fortnite. You go down early, you are sitting there and watching everyone else play for about 20 to 30 minutes, then you queue up into your next game. That's a lot of time to lose the momentum, lose your concentration, go cold, the mechanics aren't as strong next game, so players that are coming off hot after a victory like Sync and Volks can really back it up and have another big one. And if anyone can do it, it is going to be your World Cup qualifier, Volks. But there's other teams right now. Let's see who gets the high ground and who loses the high ground, because that's been the story of today. Certainly. I'm looking at those teams in the low and the mid ground, like we've seen Carry On do quite well once he drops down, not going for the high ground. I want to see Papi, Skits, Luda, Sorif learn from that, because Luda and Sorif did so well when they played the low ground in their first game, picked up the dub. Let's see it again now.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. There's one player I know that's not going to be getting the high ground. That's the one we're watching right now. LZQM, no rifts, no shocks, and definitely under the pump at the moment as well. 27 builds left. It's not going to matter. Out of the picture early on in the piece. That's the 4th place duo already out. No placement points at all. Jinx and Worthy are on the high ground.
Repulse just got an elimination in the feed, so Repulse made the long rotate. There he is down there in the bottom of your screen, got the elimination there. Here we go, Volks and Sync. They chose not to take high ground early last game, and it resulted in the win. They took it another zone after this. This is only first rotating. This is 6th zone. They took it in 7th zone into 8th, so let's see if they go for it here. Do they change their strategy? No, they go down. They've learned it. They've figured out what they need to do, as we see Carry On not going for the high ground, but geez, Swirl and Basil with the beam right now. That's your 3rd place team, and that's their 2nd elimination on the board. That is big to push them up there.
Yeah, starting to see that consistency shine through. Sync and Volks will be quite happy if they're going to be consistent here as well. Maybe a back-to-back victory royale for them. That would be perfect going into the final game of today, and certainly a big confidence builder. You see Papi out in no man's land is going to get himself back up onto the builds right next to Skit, so a nice rotation in from him, and they'll start to actually lead the pack in terms of running with the storm.
Yeah, Papi and Skits, they're doing very well. First place team, we have Worthy and Jinx on the high ground trying to beam it out. Can they hold it? Jarlin's going for it. Jarlin lands on Jinx's head. Last time this happened, Jinx went down to the player that landed on him. Can he fight back here right now? And this is a scary team. Worthy has Zora under control. Jinx has to control Jarlin. Jinx has controlled Jarlin. That is your 3 times FNCS champ, showing why, holding the high ground and being dominant as Repulse gets another elimination, doing everything here for his team as Skits takes down Jinx right now and Papi takes down Jarlin. So, do we have it? We do. We have Papi and Skits going up. Our first place team in the box. Volks goes down. Papi taking down his duo World Cup partner. Takes him out of this one. Basil and Swirl. This is your first and third place teams all going for high ground, battling for the victory. And whoever wins this high ground and potentially has this game could have the whole tournament. But there it is. I just saw Luda and Sorif only a couple layers down. Everyone's in this as Luda falls in the feed.
Absolute madness at the moment. Still got 11 duos alive. That's meaning we're not quite into the placement points just yet. Papi is okay. Cambo helping things out here. So let's have a look and see how this one does end up going down. Skits, can he get that res onto Papi? Doesn't look like that's going to be the case at all. So he'll be down, out of the picture. So it's on to Skits to get into those placements, to keep that point tally ticking across.
Skits needs to keep pushing this one. He's in first place right now. We've seen that Luda's gone down, but Sorif is in this. So it's going to be a story of solos right now. Sorif is still in this. Skits is still in this as Repulse now takes down Swirl. Repulse may be able to do this as a solo. We'll have to see. I told you he's one of the most aggressive players in any region. Showing here as a solo, he can put up more eliminations than I think any team right now in this endgame. Skits has the 1. Papi had the 2. But this one might even go to a heal off. This zone has now gone back through old builds, which means it survives even longer as Sync is now up there as well. This is a story of solos right now. So I don't know if any of these teams have it in them to be able to get the win, as I don't see... No, he's not in this. Fresh goes above. Fresh is on top of Sync right now. Sync's battling Fresh. He's up there at the moment. Everyone is solos right now. We have 5 teams, 7 players, so only 1 duo left in this. The rest are solos.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw, but Repulse down a little bit earlier on there as well. So he did, I think, manage to just get into the placements. And he got himself a couple of elims. That's kind of the pass score as a solo from the outset. So I think he's done well enough. I'll give him some credit for that one.
It's Jason Vortex, our 5th place team, is the only duo who also has the floppers right now. So they could have a big upset here. They were 48 points behind first coming into this one. They need to have a big game right now. Vortex going for the Metro Classic. The Shockwave on the roof trying to drop down. Can't find their way in. Pumpkin's going to go down here. Doesn't get the Siphon onto Vortex. Needed that as we see Alec dropping back into Storm. Going for the floppers right now. Alec, a player in 8th place coming into this one, has the 6 Chug Splashes. Doesn't need them. Gets the Victory Royale over Jason Vortex. There was a lot of teams in the top 5 there at the end, but none of them got into the victory.
Yeah, it really did feel like it got to a point there where that duo was always going to come out on top. You guys are touching on it. There was a lot of solos left in there, and if you have the player advantage, it's going to work out in your favor. You get a little bit more information, you've got more materials, you've got more stuff to play around with, and we saw that towards the end, Alec being able to get the victory for his team.
Yeah, definitely good stuff for Alec and Pumpkin, who, you know, they started pretty rough. They had a 12th place to start things off, but they did have a second in there, so they then had another rough game, but now we get them victory royale. So, you know, a bit of inconsistency in terms of the consistency as well, but at least being able to have 2 good games on the board. Remember what we were talking about, the team that won NA, I can't really comment so much for EU, I wasn't there, but the team that won NA had 3 good games, 2 bad games. Well, they're on the money for potentially 3 good games here, and if they do manage to do that, jump themselves up the top, it would be a great comeback from behind for Alec and Pumpkin if they could do so.
Yeah, we've seen a little bit more consistency from these teams as well, trying to get a little bit more of those placement points up higher there. Obviously, the duos aren't surviving towards the end, but as long as you're getting those placement points as a single, it's perfectly fine. Still points on the board, still ways for them to work towards the top here. And now as we get into our final game, boys, this is where it starts getting exciting.
This is where it starts getting exciting indeed, and because of this as well, it's playing out really slow in the mid game. Everyone's positioned and setting themselves up into that end game, but that's where things are really breaking down, and that low and mid ground is getting very volatile like we expected. That's where people are finding their eliminations. The high ground fight's important, but it's 1 elimination max normally. You go for high ground, do you take it, do you hold it, another team pushes you? The eliminations really are coming in the mid and low grounds.
It really feels like it's kind of towards the end there, it's a combination of the both, right? Making sure that you have somebody on the low ground to catch those people that do fall through, and making sure you have somebody in that mid ground to make sure you can push them out of those builds as well. And, you know, if you have your duo towards the end, you're able to clear out a lot of that stuff and take more control. And so maybe these teams towards this final match are going to try and stay a little bit more of that duo style instead of just, you know, going for these frags and maybe losing one a little earlier.
Certainly the same argument to be made for the high ground there. You know, if you've got one on high, I think we've seen a lot of success with the high mid split as opposed to the 2 players up on high, because they do tend to just get jumped on if they're both on high ground. One down, one up gives you the option to rotate from up down or down to up, depending on how you're feeling about the specific situation. Overall, at the moment, it really does feel like it's anyone's game.
Well, that's the thing. When you look at past seasons' metas as well, when you had the Shockwaves but you didn't have the Riftfish, what would happen was the players would have one player on high ground and they'd have someone go on what's called ultimate high. They'd be like the kind of Shockwave insurance up extra high so people from below can't Shockwave up. But the higher you go now, you put yourself at the risk of the Riftfish coming down on top of you. So that's why this meta is so crazy right now, because it's completely flipped how we've played these Fortnite for so long now. High ground isn't the play where other seasons it maybe hasn't been as strong, but right now it's just got too many weaknesses. It's too scary and volatile to try and hold on to, where the low and the mid feels a bit better, but at the same time, this battle for height is what's dictating this tournament. It's always one of the top teams up there, and do they get taken out?
Yeah, well, it's all kind of, you know, a play for information and stuff like that, right? But it all comes down to those loadouts and being able to use those properly as well. We've seen them not work out for some teams, being able to get pot-shotted out of the sky as well. But now, moving to this 5th and final match, this is where it starts really making sure that you need to make sure that every single one of these decisions that you do make is a good one.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I think, again, just to touch back on the point about the change in meta almost, that's, I think, what you want, especially in a game like Fortnite, where, like, the whole shtick, the whole thing is that it continues to change and evolve and that sort of thing. There are other esports that just don't want to change at all. They're a little bit more in line with something like a traditional sport where, like, when was the last time you saw something like soccer have a rule change that really made a big impact? But Fortnite, you got to think, like, how quickly can you adapt to all of these situations? And I tell you what, a team that's been adapting over the course of this has been Alec and Pumpkin. They've been doing pretty well, slowly but surely getting those points on the board. But the team that I've been most impressed with in the last 2 games, Sync and Volks, a 1st place, now a 4th.
Yeah.
That's actually a huge chunk of points being brought back over the course of just a couple of games, and they were almost, it felt like, out of the discussion. Now they're most definitely back into the discussion.
Well, I mean, a big discussion here is the small amount of points that we've got on offer. There's only 98 for the first slot here. Alec and Pumpkin, they don't get that triple digits to rocket themselves super far up into the standings, but they still do get a nice chunk of points. And now, as we have a look at the standings coming in towards our 5th and final match, Parpy and Skits still sitting at the top, only 3 points, Jordan.
It's crazy because we're talking about 3s all the time in the JBL Quantum Cup. 3 games, 3 casters, 3 days. Well, now it's 3 points the deficit.
It's 3 points, and again, I might throw another third. I was going to say our 5th place team going into that game, Jason Vortex, they came 3rd last game. So if you're talking about upward trajectories, that's 2 top 3s in a row, and I don't think any other team has put that up right now. We've got a few people getting around that top 5, but getting 3rd and then 2nd back-to-back right now, 227 points, 3 points behind Parpy and Skits, who are on a bit more of a downward trajectory. They had their win, and now 2 not-so-great games. It's going to be interesting to see whether they can keep that momentum going.
Yeah, another big thing coming out of these standings as well is the fact that Jinx and Worthy have pushed themselves in that 8th slot right now. They're only 39 points outside of the money here. They had a very bad start when it came to those first 2 matches, but now in 3 and 4, they're really starting to get more points on the board, and it does feel like they can get themselves into the money if they do have yet another good one. But, I mean, lads, this stretch all the way from 1 through to 10 is still going to be a race for those final 10 slots, right?
Yeah, that's the beauty of a tournament that's quite short, is that, you know, if you would have stretched this over the course of 10 or 20 games, you might already get to game, you know, let's say 8 or 9 and be like, okay, well, we kind of know who's going to come away with the victory. But because every single game of this tournament here at the Quantum Cup gives you 20% of your overall theoretical potential points, you lose out on 20% of your points, or you can gain 20% of your points. It's actually a big margin that you can overtake.
Yeah. And again, the eliminations, we talk about how heavy the placement is at the end, but again, you have that potential for a few games, but no one here really is dropping those massive elimination games, so it's really keeping it quite close. I think the team that has the most eliminations so far here combined is around 10 coming into that last game, so people are only averaging about 3 eliminations a game or less. So at the same time, you're looking for those big placements. It's going to really come down to who wins this last game. I genuinely think who wins this last game has a good chance of either winning the whole tournament or jumping up potentially thousands or tens of thousands of dollars in the prize money.
Yeah, it really does feel like that this tournament has come down to the final match for every single one of these regions. There is only 3 points separating 1st and 2nd here in the Asian region. So it's got time for us to go to a break ahead of match number 5 here for the JBL Quantum Cup.
JBL presents the sounds of victory. JBL Quantum Gaming headsets.
The first time you sit down, it is loud. There are fans screaming and chanting, drowning out the call-outs from your teammates. I mean, you are not in Kansas anymore. We're in the finals, trying to find the last player, finally take him out. People are screaming, but I can't hear a word you're saying. I felt like I'm underwater. All this self-doubt that I had just seemed like it was washed away by the tide. Listening to myself, I feel like it's a soundtrack in my head through every step of my career.
What's up, guys? It's your boy Yanis, and this is my JBL pregame ritual. Catch Z's so you don't catch L's. Crisp calm, make everything sound better. Knock knock. Pre-game hype is key. Set the vibes and get your game face on. Let's get it.
Hi everyone, it's Brooke AB and I'm super excited to be partnering with JBL this year as part of the launch for their JBL Quantum Gaming headsets. I've been using this pair of JBL Quantum ones since about April, and the active noise cancellation is super impressive, especially with Nadeshot next door yelling all day long. The JBL Quantum Cup is just the beginning for JBL, so keep an eye out for more, and good luck to all the amazing competitors from around the world.
Welcome back, everybody, here to the JBL Quantum Cup. Unfortunately for Jordan, his brain is starting to melt a little bit here because he is, unfortunately, had to deal with me for the entirety of today. So welcome back, everybody, here. We have the Asia region here for Fortnite. We've only got one match left, and there's only 3 points setting apart number 1 and number 2, and that is where all the money is at. Lads, welcome back here on the desk, Aussie Antics as well as Elfish Guy. Lads, 1 match to go in JBL Quantum Cup. So what it all comes down to, how are these teams going to try and get this one done?
They're going to try and get lots of elims, and they're going to try and finish first place, Fluke. I think that's probably the way that they're going to go.
Yeah, they're going to win.
They're going to try and win. They're going to try and win.
Yeah, I think our expert opinion, we've now watched 4 of these games. I think we found out the formula for what these teams need to do to piece it all together. They got to win.
They got to win. I mean, I've had a lot of analysts in my time here, and got to win seems to be the top answer from a lot of these guys here. But, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it is the JBL Quantum Cup, and that means JBL have their sick products on display for all you guys here. We do have the Quantum 1 headset, which is the flagship for these guys right now. Actually insane, super comfy, super good as well here. If you guys do want to check out their gear, do amazon.com/JBL to check out all the other gear, not just the Quantum ones. They've got the 800s, the 600s as well floating around there, so make sure you guys do check that out. But match number 5 is on the way. Yes, Jordan.
Could I have that?
No, that's...
I mean, I just want to hold it.
I mean,
can I just hold it?
Can I trust you holding it, Jordan?
I don't know, mate. You tell me.
Please don't.
We'll keep track of it. Yeah, that's between us.
Okay, we're going to have to try and get that one back off Jordan before the end here. But
Not gonna happen.
Only 1 match left. 3 points separates first and second. Who's feeling a lot more confident going into this final match? Are you feeling more confident if you're in that first slot? Or are you feeling more confident you've only got to chase 3 points, Jordan?
Mate, it's
a small amount of points.
It's a pretty difficult argument to make, isn't it? Because it's like, yeah, theoretically, you feel a little bit more confident in first, but like 3 points is so negligible that it's not really anything to speak to.
I think Vortex and Jace on the back of that upward trajectory. I think they're the only team so far that's got 2 top 3s. I reckon they're feeling the most confident as we jump into match number 5 now, our final match in the JBL Quantum Cup, and it's going in where we started, game number 4, Coral Castle, very empty castle right now. No one's knocking on the door, but we have to see the drop spots where they are, because this is where it's going to be interesting. 3 points negligible, but at the same time, if you go down early, we didn't see any teams really go down too early, only 1 before. We'll have to see now as we're tuning in to what is going to be a fantastic last game.
Chances of a hot drop?
Maybe, potentially, but again, where do they hot drop? That's the thing.
Yeah.
Not even just in this tournament, in this season. Last season, we had Stark Industries. That was known as the hot drop. You had everything you could ever want for. You just knocked on the door of Tony Stark's mansion and you took all the loot away with you. There isn't that on this map, literally whatsoever. There's not a single drop that I could tell you is stronger than any other drop, and everyone should be going there. Where Stark Industries was definitely that drop. Again, you see Steamy Stacks, the POI that's been fought over all night now has no one.
Yeah, it's interesting, I guess, how that sort of pans out. Let's have a look and see. Where is Papi and Skits?
Right now, Papi and Skits have just landed around Lazy Lake. They're looking pretty good right now.
Yeah.
That's where they've been most of the night. Everyone's pretty much going back to their roots right now. The one I did want to see on, where is Vortex and Jace right now? I can't see them too well. There they are. Vortex and Jace landing around what was the old Orchard area. Now it's kind of the Tomato Temple area. And they're the one that was rotating down near towards the Colossal Coliseum. So we'll have to see how we go right now, as we do have Swagger Souls and Toby again. All credit to them. I think they're still on 0 points across the night, but they're changing it up. They're trying the drop spots. They're trying out everything. They're really doing their best here. And this is a team that is known for playing a lot of different video games. I've watched them play a lot of different ones. Pumpkin, known for playing a lot of Fortnite, though, and showing why, with some really good aim. And this is Alex's team as well, so this could be a team that could be interesting if they drop on and kind of play spoiler.
Yeah, they definitely did good in the last game, didn't they? So I would have to imagine that they'll be looking for a few more points on the board, because they are doing a good job of catching up to the top spot. I can't remember exactly where they ended in the last game. Sorry, after the last game, I should say, like overall on the standings. But I think they're definitely in the discussion. So an extra 8 points, you know, we've seen how close things can get. I think an extra 8 points, considering the deficit from first to second is only 3, if they do actually make this engagement against Toby and Swagger
This
is like, that's 3 points.
It is 3 points, but it's the most healthy. We've now seen Toby and Swagger Souls right now as Pumpkin and Alex setting up to try and take them on. But right now, we have Swagger kind of putting up a good fight here against Pumpkin. Has the health advantage right now on overall health advantage. It is Toby and Swagger that are winning right now. Swagger's taking those shots, and at the same time, Toby gets beamed up here, though, by Alec. Alec comes from behind. I feel like that's kind of been the story of these fights right now. Swagger Souls gets in the close range engagement. Toby tries to back him up, and unfortunately, she gets beamed up in the back by Alec here, who's kind of going for this rooftop positioning, and Swagger Souls bunkered up down there right now. See where he goes. Let's see if he's got the helmet on. Can he take some of these shots, or is he going to be able to see the sight lines of these opponents pushing down, hiding under the stairs, and that won't trick them? These are some, oh, never mind, tricks me though. Now Swagger Souls behind the door. We see the Dino play, and unfortunately takes down Pumpkin in the process though, so almost played spoiler, and there's not a lot of loot here. They used a lot of the shield. They've taken the fight, so even though they've lost, and 8 points now swings to Alec and Pumpkin, they're down a lot of loot from that. This is not a drop spot that can foster two teams.
Yeah, look, I think you're going to take that, to be honest, as Alec and Pumpkin at this point. Points are super important. We just got the updated standings for ourselves again to take a look at here. They were 27. Am I doing the math correctly there? No. 17, I should say.
The math all night.
17. Nah, 17 points behind first place.
Second try.
Now, having picked up 2 eliminations, they're only 9 points behind.
There we go. Quick math. Fantastic.
Yeah.
We love to see it. Even after a long day here, again, this has been the Quantum Cup. It's not just spanning game titles. It is spanning region as well. I know Elfish has been here since NA as well. I've jumped in just for OC, my favorite region, and I can say that on the OC broadcast because I know that it's too late for a lot of NA's people to be watching. And in Asia, I'll say that's fair. The Asian players tonight they've really impressed me. They seriously have impressed me to a massive margin right here tonight. They've done very well. We still have one team inside the top 10, and I know that might not sound like a lot, but they were far outweighed by the ANZ competitors, and they are playing on OCE servers again. So here we go. We see Luda right now. They started so strong. They started so strong with the Game 1 win, and then things kind of haven't gone that way, and Steve-O's back in this right now, looking very healthy with Repulse. They've split up their drop, and they're getting a lot of fish, and again, even if they can't jump up, they're in 9th place right now, they're going to play spoiler. I talked about teams that are going to leave it all out there. Repulse is known for this. He's going to play aggressive. He's going to get on someone's wall, and now Steve-O, again, coming off the console track, controller player with the P90, very scary.
Jarlin and Zori going to get aggressive onto the GW gang. It was Hamupi and Lettuce that got 2 4th places in a row to start the day off. They haven't really been able to repeat that success in Game 3 and Game 4. And they're under the pressure here already.
Oh yeah, they have the, right now we have Jarlin and Zora, I think both have the peppers popped. You can see the steam coming out of the ears, and they're looking right now. They're seeing red, they've eaten red, they're trying to get inside the box. They want to do some red damage to these teams if they can get them down here. Jarl and Zora don't really have too much of an ability to jump up in the top 5. I don't know whether, again, mathematically they can. They're around there, but at the same time, they're going to need big point jump up. But either way, they can play spoiler here, though. Like, they can really eliminate some big teams and take them out. Again, the team they're pushing into, not too high up in the leaderboard as well, so this won't be a huge leaderboard shift. But I mean, I love the early game action.
Yeah, I got to say, I'm glad to see them playing like this, because the only way that they do actually jump into that top 5 is by playing like this and actually making it effective. Obviously, they have to execute on the playstyle. It's not all well and good to just run at people and then lose and then be like, oh, well, thought we were going to get top placing by that. But they do have to execute on that. They do have to convert it, and they have to get some frags early on in the piece. But, I mean, I've got to say, just based on the eye test right now, it seems like Jarlin and Zori have kind of unseated Lettuce a little bit. He's not feeling too comfortable. Shields are gone. They're starting to get some white tags, and they're starting to feel a bit more confident in this battle. Lettuce very nearly down now as well, and does get overwhelmed. So great start for Jarlin and Zori. 1 out of the picture, and they can complete the 2-on-1 very comfortably. That's 8 points. It's not a huge amount, but you compound that with another couple of elims in the mid game, couple of elims in the late game. That starts to build up quite substantially. If they get a win on the board, you can be looking at maybe 120 points, something like that. And given they're at 117, I'm going to say 1 being in that first place, probably just out of reach, but top 5 definitely possible.
Definitely possible right now. The way they played that fight was just really, really clinical. Took the angles right now. Jarlin got pressured down on low, but Zora was above, found those angles with the shotgun, just really kind of laid into them inside the box. As we see Raptor and Will, 2 players that have really, really struggled tonight that I wouldn't have expected, but all credit to them still like putting it out there on the line right now. They're coming in some 19th place. They do only have 4 points, the 1 elimination on the board. Seeing if they can do something differently here, as Basil and Swirl doing really well in 5th place. One of those teams that with a really big performance is still in the contention, because right now, genuinely for that first place, it is really only those teams that are in the top 5 that could probably jump up there and have that big game, unless something goes just insanely wrong right now for Papi, Skits, Jason, Vortex. But if you're just tuning in, this is our 5th game, this is our final game, but it's not about the first. We're talking about first because they're walking away with $15,000, but the $30,000 prize pool is split above the top 5, and that's what these players are fighting for right now. They really want to get into that top 5 and try and find something for their efforts tonight, because it's been a great tournament, and a lot of these players weren't invitees. A lot of the players in the top 5 right now were the ones who spent weeks qualifying, playing the qualifying matches to get here tonight, to show why they're here and get something for it.
Rotation coming in through the Coliseum. Cambo has scouted out a couple of opponents right in front of him and waits for his teammate to fire the shots first. Won't quite work out for them. They do crack a shield, I think, but overall, nothing to really get too excited about. No, that might have even been... No, it wasn't a third party. Excuse me. We're all good.
Have to be careful down here on the south side of this map, though, because they're rotating back out into zone. It looks like they're going to maybe try and find a vehicle. They do find the truck here, and the vehicles are interesting in Fortnite because some of them just have different strengths and weaknesses. You wouldn't think that. You have the faster, more supercar, which goes a lot faster on the roads, but is incredibly slow off-road, where the truck's kind of more versatile. It's not as good on the road, but it's quite good off-road as well. So good rotates from that part of the map, as Volks and Sync are quite deep in the storm here, but they do have the Rift Fish, so could maybe use that to hit the rotate, because in these lobbies, we haven't really seen, I want to say we haven't really seen the rifts be that important, but at the same time, endgame, they actually have been quite crucial for Volks and Sync making their high ground retakes. And they've got one each, so maybe going to choose to use one here. I'm not entirely sure, as Jinx and Worthy in your top left had a rough performance here tonight, but have been on a slow and steady increase on their points, jumping up there in the leaderboard, but really do have eyes again on Papi Skits, which you can see there on the south side of your map. They're just coming out of Lazy Lake right now. They're in the car. I see Swirl and Basil there in your 5th place. You see them there on the north, but I see a fight that should be breaking out here in the top left of your screen on the map. I'm not sure who that is going toe-to-toe there. It looks like a full duo engagement. That could be big, but again, looking at the names, I don't think...
Six and Sin, I think it is.
Oh, it's Fresh and Carry On. Okay, so again, teams that aren't too high up there on the leaderboard, but really wanting to leave everything out there and have a big last game.
Yeah, I mean, these two, 13th place for Six and Sin, 12th for Carry On and Fresh, so it probably won't matter too much as far as the leaderboard is concerned, but for the duo that does win this engagement, maybe it's enough to just kickstart a race for a top 5 placing. At the moment, it's not really here nor there. Six down quite low, and Fresh is trying to push that advantage, but Sin is trying to get in there and help out. Carry On was in that meanwhile, meting up, healing back on up, and gets back into the engagement as well. Pressure's definitely on to Sin now. That wall's been taken, and Carry On gets a little bit of damage snuck on through. Not enough for the Elim just yet.
Oh, here it comes, the classic, the Metro classic as it's coined, when Metro first figured out the shockwave onto the roof, sending you straight down into the opponent's box. Everyone else using shockwaves vertically to go up. Metro the one to think to go down, and Fresh does that as well. Opens up this fight, opens up the edit, and Fresh and Carry On capitalize on that one. Carry On getting both the eliminations in that fight, and that's 2 eliminations on the board. We're down to 15 teams, 30 players here in game number 5, the last game of our JBL Quantum Cup for Asia, and it's really playing out again. The Asia Cup's been the story of ANZ, but coming into it with a lot of advantages, just numbers advantages, and right now our top 5 is an ANZ affair. I believe mostly an Australia affair as well, but Papi and Alec as well. Top 3, both representing New Zealand, so we'll see. Zapt is set up here. Olive, we haven't seen too much from this team except for in the very first couple of games, so we'll have to see. Maybe kind of went off the pace a little bit and back here now, trying to do something big on this hill, and they're right next to another team, so they can play spoiler, and that is Basil and Swirl. So we talk about fights that aren't too important when it comes to 2 teams way down the leaderboard, but when you've got one team way up on the leaderboard and one team way down, those can be the most important fights because they can ruin everything.
Yeah, it was Basil and Swirl that got a fair bit of damage early on in our last round, and were able to, I think they got rid of W Puck. LZQM had to play out the rest of that one solo, and as a result, from 4th place, LZQM and W Puck dropped down into 7th. You can see how much of a difference one game can make. They certainly won't want to be on the receiving end of that. Olive will cop a snipe and has to heal back on up here. So that might be an early warning to just say, keep your head down, mate, because we're not interested in copping any shots from you. Up on the high ground, you do tend to get a few eyes looking at you. Speaking of LZQM and Puck, they're just over there as well, hanging out. I mean, obviously the circle's still quite large at this point, so there's not a whole lot to really touch on. Not a whole lot of action just yet, as we have come to expect from this lobby.
Worthy, again, you've got to look in this current season, the current meta, you've really got to look at the shotgun strength on that. Worthy has the legendary tac shotgun. That is arguably the strongest shotgun when it comes to these end games, because again, whatever your preference is, charge versus tac, the legendary tac does hit very hard. You have a lot more bullets to work with. You don't have to reload as often. You can put that pressure down end game. And it's worth noting as well, if you don't play Fortnite too much, or you do, and maybe you weren't aware, the main strength of the epic and legendary variants when it comes to the tac is the actual, not damage increase they do to players, the damage increase they do to builds. They end up doing more damage to builds than a pickaxe swing. So when it comes to taking walls with the tac shotgun, your chances increase massively once you get epic and legendary as Fresh, putting down the pressure on a Jarlin right now. So again, 2 teams that aren't too high up there, but 2 teams that look like they're laying everything out there on the line this last game. Both phenomenal fighters, and there's a lot of reputation, a lot of love lost here as well. These are both competitive veterans. Fresh been around since the very early days. Same with Zora and Jarlin, going way back to the first AO right now. Carry On kind of come into the scene more recently, so a little bit of a new gun here, trying to see what they can do in this fight as Carry On goes toe-to-toe, gets a shot back, but I think they block it, and very evenly matched so far.
Yeah, it certainly is. It's going to be quite cool to see the team come away with a victory out of this battle, kind of pushing that issue later on into the round as well, because both have started off with a duo Elim. They've got 8 points out of this game so far, theoretically expecting 16 points for the victor of this duo, so really ramping those points up as Carry On actually...
Oh, they trade. That's actually, you have not seen that until this new season, but Fresh comes in. I talked about it earlier in the show. The tac is just way too powerful in Fresh's hand. He really does hit the shots. But what I was going to say there, it wasn't until this current season of Fortnite you would ever see a trade. So what that means is Carry On shot Jarlin at the exact same time. Jarlin shot Carry On. They took each other out. Previously, that was impossible. I have watched and played thousands of hours of Fortnite, and I've never seen that happen, but in the current season it happens a lot more often, and that was the difference as it then came down to a battle between Zora and Fresh with the tac just never misses.
Yeah, 12th place for Carry On and Fresh coming into this game. They'll be up into 11th now, having picked up 16 points. They're up to 130 total. They also leapfrog the target right above them, Jarlin and Zora. So nice little storyline in there. But a bit of work to do to get into the top 5. We're talking about 189 points there for Basil and Swirl as they came into Game 5. They might get a few more out of this one. So Carry On and Fresh, look, they've started well. They've got good points on the board with those elims, but they need to be getting a lot more done. They need placement points out of this game if they want to make it into the top 5. But hey, fragging well generally translates into good placements in addition to that. So
Jason Vortex, though, our second place team, were looking very, very healthy when we tuned into them there. So they're only 3 points behind first, and their loadout is looking very, very solid. So when we get an eye on Papi and Skits, we'll have a better idea of exactly how it's going to go in that top 2, because right now, they really do have that big jump. Again, Alec Pumpkin, they're doing very well, only 14 points behind second, only 17 points behind first, so they can still do it as well, but really it's going to be the story of Jason Vortex, Papi, and Skits, because ultimately, it is their tournaments to lose right now. They're both up there. They've played very consistent Fortnite. It's them who are going to be able to make the big difference. But you see snipers, it's just, there's so much in Fortnite that can just turn an entire tournament instantly. A headshot snipe, falling off the build, getting shockwaved out. There's so many things that can play spoiler. You just have to keep your head and keep your cool right now, because $15,000 on the line just for first, $30,000 share to go between these teams. They really need to pick things up right here and play a last great game as Worthy is really putting out some good snipes and getting very close to playing spoiler as that is Papi and Skits. That's our first place team up on the hill in good positioning, but a headshot snipe would change that very quickly.
Yeah, certainly would, although they are very likely to be able to get that revive. No problems at all. We'll see the shot made, and Papi goes soaring down the mountain alongside Skits. They will set themselves up just on the side. A little bit of a mountain goat style being played here by Skits and Papi. Gone from one mountain to another.
They've got a good loadout. So far, our top 2 teams, Jason Vortex, Papi, and Skits, have phenomenal loadouts. We just saw 5 shockwaves in inventory, Papi. I saw bounce pads as well, so it doesn't matter where this zone goes. You combine that bounce with the low gravity effect with that shockwave, and you really do cover a big chunk of distances. Right now, we're getting an interesting zone. It could pull down towards the water, could pull towards the beach. I'd be very surprised, though. Zones do have the tendency, once they go towards the far deep water, to really pull back onto the map. So, as you can see, as I say that, it seems like the players are aware of that as well, as you see that very southwestern part of the zone start to get a lot more congested and set up on top of each other, as that's where they have a feeling the zone's going to come back to, as well as Jinx and Worthy in just such a great position on top of the antenna right now. This is an indestructible structure. You can't break it down from the bottom. It's not a building that you can pickaxe and farm out. There is no way you can knock down Jinx and Worthy right now. They have the high ground, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, you can tell that they're feeling confident about that as well. They're taking peeks. They're looking to put some damage into anyone that's rotating at the moment. Unfortunately, they haven't actually had much luck in that, because everyone's bunkered down, and some people aren't even in their sight line. Thinking of someone maybe like Papi and Skits, who are quite below the ridge, fresh and carry on. The same can be said probably for them. So it's mostly that group out to sort of the northern side of the map that are going to be the ones under pressure, the ones that we're actually looking at right now from Worthy and Jinx. Repulse and Stevo, probably the big name in that discussion, alongside W Puck and LZQM. They're the ones that are maybe in the discussion for a top placing. Jinx and Worthy.
It's so quiet. It's always this way before the end game, and this is where it's all going to break down. It's just that quiet. It's the calm before the storm, where everything's going to happen. The storm's creeping in, and here it goes. It's always when the half shows itself, where everything starts to break down. Who's going to go? Where are they going to move? Where do they need to get to? And how are they going to get there? Because half is the deciding factor in Fortnite. That's where you get that half zone inside the existing zone, and then half of it goes into the storm. See the water balloons coming out. It shows who's around you, and there it is. The zone does pull back towards the land like I was expecting, but instead of going towards the southwest, pulls towards the northwest right now, which goes in favor of a few of our teams that are looking really, really good right now. Jinx and Worthy, there's no way they play this, and there it is. The Shockwave comes out. Swirl and Basil, that's a top 5 team, but this was at the complete opposite end of where we saw our first place team, Papi and Skits. How do they make this rotate? Because it will mean everything for them, as Jason Vortex are now made it in. I think they're the 2 red triangles just making it into the zone now on the south side. So here it is, Papi and Skits, Shockwave, Bouncer. What are they going to do? Is that going to leave them high and dry? Because all it's going to take is someone with phenomenal aim to beam them up and take them out, and that's it. That's going to be their $15,000 lost, because they're in first place and they need to hold it. No, they're going to go for the Rift Fish. This is going to be scary. Are people going to look up, or are they going to let them go straight down? They do go straight down. Shots come out. Skits are getting beamed up. Has the 6 splashes, gets down, and like I said, you talk about back in the World Cup, they would have stayed in the sky for as long as possible. They instantly went down as fast as they possibly could. Skits has the meds here, so it's not a big deal, and that's Jason Vortex that's set up looking at them. That could be second place taking down first place. Would be massive, as Volks is trying to make his way in. Volks not doing too well. I guess 4th in the leaderboard, so still top 5 money. Could maybe potentially push in the top 1 with a good game, but it does not look like it's going to go too well here.
Certainly not. All of the top teams at the moment are putting pressure on one another,
Oh
it
my
feels like.
gosh.
Vortex, keep your eyes pinned on that bottom left and keep an eye on what happens here to Volks and Sync. They seem to have gotten out okay. That's a shock nade that gets them at least rotated closer into the circle, if not inside of it. Vortex and Jace, unfortunately not them being able to pick up either of those
down.
items.
It's your 4th place team going down right now. See if they can capitalize on Sync. If Sync goes down here as well, that's going to be a big chunk of money they're going to lose right now, because 4th place puts them secure in the money right now, but they could jump even below 5th, let alone jumping up, because right now we have Skits and Papi healthy in a great spot. Jason Vortex healthy in a great spot. Very close to each other right now. This could be the deciding factor right here. We have Jason Vortex, Skits and Papi 1st and 2nd on top of each other. All it's going to take is one shockwave, one edit, one shot, one wrong place, one wrong move, and that's tens of thousands of dollars in the difference.
Well, Worthy and Jinx are looking like they're in a pretty good spot here as well. I dare say they'll be in the running for a first out of this game, but does that give them enough points to come away with a win overall? I mean, they are 80 points behind number 1 going into this game. I mean, it's theoretically, it's mathematically doable. I wonder if that comeback from behind, though, for Jinx and Worthy is actually possible. They had such a rough start, 16th and 14th. Sync does get knocked down by Stevo, so
that's it. 4th place is out of there right now. And for those players that are around the top 5, they can jump up there. We just saw Luda and Sorif looking really good. Carry on and Fresh right down there, but having a great game. Looking to play aggressive right now. They have the shockwaves, and again, no one really going for the high ground. Papi gets an elimination. That's 4 more points. That is massive. That is going to be the difference potentially between 1st, 2nd, or maybe even 3rd right now. They need that elimination onto Cambo, and that's going to be a refresher as well, as Vortex and Jace are taking down the low ground. Jace gets elimination as well. So every time we see our 1st place team push forward, our 2nd place team is right behind them being like, hey, we're still coming up here. You got 4 points, I can get 4 points as they push through now.
not even just the 2nd place team. Alec and Pumpkin also in the mix, getting some frags. Worthy's there now as well. He's putting some work in. So all of the top teams that feel like have actually made it into this end game, have actually made it into a potential push for that 1st place finish.
This is going to be one of the most exciting ends you've seen to a tournament, because it is. All these players have made it to the end game. You very rarely have this many people up there who have something to say, who need to say something, as Swirl goes down now as well. 2 skits. Again, our 1st place team, it is just right now going tit for tat. One team gets 4 points forward, the other team catches up. They push forward, they push back. Right now, Papi and Skits need to have something go wrong if they're going to lose this, because right now they're in the driver's seat. Papi's looking pretty good, has the floppers as well, so even has the heal-off potential. Not that I think it'll go there, but they have everything. Shockwaves as well.
Let's be real though, these 4 points that they keep getting, these elims, they're nice, but they're small fry in the grand scheme of things.
Yep.
It's going to be the placement points that make or break your tournament. It's all well and good to get even 10 elims. That's going to be 40 points, but 1st place, 90 points.
Yep.
I think it's really just going to come down to who wins.
And Skits goes down here. No, the revive can't come out. Skits is out of that's your 1st place team, as Vortex falls as well, though. Jace takes someone down, so it's going to be the story. Jace versus Papi right now. Papi goes down. Papi's out. That has to be 1st place. You just touched on it. Unless Jace goes down right here, that has to be 1st place in this tournament. Jace needs to hold out, needs to hold on for something right now, because Alec and Pumpkin, they're knocking on the door right now. They're both still alive. They're both still in this. Alec wants to keep his hot streak coming off the back of Trio FNCS champion, wanting to do something here as Sorif takes down Fresh. What can Jace do here?
I mean, Sorif is even in the discussion as well. He's not too far behind. I'm not sure. Yeah, Luda is still up as well. So maybe all the way from 6th place, we could see them come away with a victory.
Alec just went down as well. Alec went down to Repulse right now. Jace could potentially go down here. Jace has no builds. Jace is out of this. Pumpkin goes down. Alec goes down. This is coming down to the wire. Who can actually do this right now? Luda and Sorif, your 6th place team, they're still up right now. Sorif goes down. Luda's doing something. These are thousands, tens of thousands of dollars eliminations you are seeing right now. It's Worthy and Jinx on the high ground, but I don't think it matters for them. I think it matters more right now what happens to Luda.
I guess it's too hard to call at the moment. LZQM goes
And
down.
Luda gets it. It's 2nd place. There it is. It goes down. Worthy and Jinx win, but I don't know if that matters too much in the grand scheme of things. Luta comes 2nd. He was in 6th place on 156 points. 1st was on 230. So is that enough? This is going to be the tightest leaderboard we have to have seen in the JBL Cup.
I got to be honest. I've been talking about my quick maths all day.
Ooh, okay.
That's too much for me.
That's too much?
I'm waiting for the standings.
Come on, Jordan. You know, this is what you need to do. You need to have those calculations going in your head because you guys touched on it. A lot of those duos towards the ends were all the ones that were vying for that top slot. And now it gets to a position where we've got to do the math. We've got to sit back. We've got to wait for that leaderboard to come forward. There is no clear winner just yet because, as we said, going into this match, there was only 3 points separating first and second, lads. So now, with the massive amount of points that's been on offer, I mean, what a final match for us to end on.
Alec and Pumpkin, I think, maybe, I don't know, but even then, we're talking about first, it's $30,000 up for grabs. We talk about the jump between first and second being massive. It still does start to taper off. Those were eliminations that meant thousands, tens of thousands of dollars, and if Alec and Pumpkin were able to do it, like I said, Alec coming off the back of being a trio FNCS champion, but Pumpkin not really having too much spotlight in too many occasions, so this is going to be huge. Jason Vortex are the same, Skits is the same. This was a phenomenal tournament to make names either way.
Yeah. And it's even top 5 as well for the money. So even, you know, just getting a few extra points does rocket you somewhere between 8th to, you know, somewhere like 3rd, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my gut feeling is that I don't think Papi, Skits, Jason, Vortex quite did enough.
The early game eliminations, we forgot that it was Alec and Pumpkin that got the 8 points on the drop at the start. That will be the difference between a placement today in the top 5, guaranteed 100%. Is the difference between first? I don't know.
And this is where we have to sit and wait for those standings to come up, lads. We've got all this math floating around. We've got all these ifs. We've got all these buts. But there is only one final standings for us to look forward to. But just going through this replay package here, there was a lot of frags heading in towards the end there. And then just being able to, you know, just kind of get to a point where all these final duos, we don't know who's going to come out on top because everyone just felt like they could take, you know, eliminations and position off everyone.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's almost like Christmas Eve right now, you know, waiting for your presents in the morning. I mean, it's not too far away from that, to be fair. But that's where we're at the moment. It's kind of that nervous anticipation, maybe. Am I going to get a good present? Am I going to get a bad present?
If I woke up to $15,000, I'd be pretty happy as well. This is a big Christmas present for sure right now, as these were the fights that mattered. Papi and Skits down here on the low ground, taking down Swirl. That was the 5th place team. So even though Papi and Skits maybe dropped out at first, that's a big difference to make sure they secure more of that prize money against them. It was really insane to see all these big teams. Again, Sorov just took down Basil. That was 6th taking down 5th. This was huge engagements at the end.
And it just comes down to a game of inches, right? Where, you know, you saw some of these players, Luda and Sorov, maybe if they got an extra elimination there, maybe if they stayed alive for a little bit longer, that's a few extra points in those placement points and can rocket themselves up. But this is the way that the cookie crumbled going towards the end of this 5th and final map. We did have Worthy and Jinx being able to get the victory here. They had a rough start for the JBL Quantum Cup, but they certainly came back in 3, 4, and 5.
Yeah, I did say going into that game, I mean, if Worthy and Jinx do pick up the win in this particular game, maybe they can just get up into first place. They were, I think, 80 behind going into it. The thing is, I'm just not sure if the eliminations were quite there to overtake some of the solid placings by those teams in sort of first, second, and third that they were trying to catch up to. That's the difficulty.
It is. We were talking about kind of, you need to get that, you get the points, but you got to have the net positive over your opponents, though. They have to go down early, and none of them did. We had every big name. That was so exciting because we really did only lose Sync and Volks early. So everyone else, I think we had our top 8 teams, or at least top 6 especially, all making it until just right at placement. So yeah, there's really no way to tell. Sometimes I'm sure with you guys at tournaments, you know, and you have to do we'll have to wait and see. This is going to be one of the tightest leaderboards I've ever seen.
Yeah, this is a legitimate situation where we are sitting here. We do not actually know who the champion is so far. And this top 5 is going to be insanely volatile for us to look at. And it does feel like this final map was the end-all and be-all. And we've seen that across a few of these regions so far. Yeah, you might not have that good start to the tournament, Jordan, but if you have 3 good maps, you can start rocketing up these leaderboards.
Well, that was very much the case for Jinx and Worthy. I think they had a 16th place and a 14th place, so missing out on placement points by a hefty distance as well in those first 2 games. But the final 3 games they had, they're very, very solid, getting into the placements in all of them, getting a win in the final game there as well. It's got to be a little bit crushing if they don't actually come away with the first here, or maybe even if they miss out on a top 5, which is still possible. Because they just had such a strong finish. It's just going to be like, oh, you know, if only we would have got a little bit more out of those first couple of games.
Well, that's why I've been talking about making names of new players as well. And again, I love Jinx and Worthy. They've had their spotlight, and they will continue to have their spotlight. There's a reason why Jinx is the only player in the world to have 3 FNCS championships, and it's because even within this tournament, you can have a rough start, and they would have been like, all right, it's practice. Let's figure this out. What's going wrong? What can we do? And then things started to get better and improve. So I'm sure they're going to be happy either way, just having performed better, because again, we were asking making more of them. But I really do want to see some of these other guys have their moment in the spotlight, because it's a big spotlight on them and it's a big prize pool. This is like, again, I don't know if you guys follow a lot of the Fortnite pros as well. The earnings in the bio is everything right now. When it comes to finding a team and staking a claim, earnings is everything, and this is a lot of earnings on the line.
Yeah, it's a nice little penny purse for a lot of these players as well. And, you know, we just talked about so many of these duos, and the biggest factor now, we're talking about basically 10 to 12 duos that could potentially be anywhere in this money. And right now, it's getting to a situation where a lot of these Asian duos, they're going to be sitting on the edge of their seats, much as like we are, just trying to figure out who this top 5 is going to be. Because it is only the 5 duos here at the top that will be getting the money, lads. But before we start getting into that, let's have a little bit more thoughts about this whole region as a whole. We've had 5 maps. It's been exciting across all of them. We thought, you know, maybe these first 2 maps might have been the kind of door shutting for, you know, a lot of these teams. But it seems like, you know, if you're able to finish strong, this kind of format can really help you out.
Yeah, definitely. It felt a little bit more like the NA kind of play style that we saw a little bit earlier on this morning than what we got to see from Europe, which is probably to be expected. You were sort of touching on that, particularly within the Asia region, some of those ping differences make the players more inclined to not go quite as aggressively. I think things did pick up towards the late stages, though. Like we saw in Game 3, it started to go a little bit quicker. Game 4 and 5, definitely the same as well. And there was, you know, to be fair, a discrepancy in some terms of skill level. So there was some teams that were preyed upon. If you spotted them early on in the game, you know, you push that advantage. You go, there's some 8 points that we can get. That's fair enough. I think that's very much a strategy that they should be employing if they've got the smarts to do so. But yeah, again, just to touch on the region as a whole, feels a lot more like NA to me.
Yeah, a lot more like NA. They played a lot more safe. They played a lot more placement heavy, and there just wasn't as many eliminations to get. Going into that last game, the team, like there was one team, Alec and Pumpkin, had 12 eliminations. That is our record eliminations in 4 games. That is pretty unheard of in OC, and I think it lends into the format. But one thing we can agree on is they all figured out the strategy towards the end, and again, across the 3 regions, 3 tournaments, height wasn't the play. We figured out with the meta right now, low and mid ground is where it's at, and that's what a lot of players played well. That's who figured out the meta right now. But it'll be interesting to see if Alec and Pumpkin jump up there. We only had one team in the top 4 without a win, and that was Jason Vortex. So if they can hold their way in there, I think you said that was a story on NA, right? No victory royale, but very consistent placements. Where in OCE, it's 3 of the top 4 teams all have that victory royale.
Well, lads, we've done enough waiting here. We have the results ready and raring to go for everybody at home. So let's throw them up on your screens. This will be the top 10. So the first of these are the ones outside of the money. So these are our teams now. Sync and Volks, they've dropped down. Repulse and Stevo dropped into 8th place as well. Basil and Swirl, as we said, in that 9th slot. And then Fresh and Crayon in 10th. So
Basil and Swirl were in 5th place, dropping down to 9th. That is gut-wrenching.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of those eliminations, a lot of those unfortunate decisions do come to bite you. But now, let's go see who is getting our first slot of the money. It's Poppy and Skits!
The first place team, and that shows how close this leaderboard was. No one would have picked that first place team going into the final game. Just gets the money.
No way.
Oh, that is tight. I mean, if this is how the 5th is going to go, I don't think any of us can pick this. So let's go and see who is in number 4 right now. Jason Vortex.
Second place. They flipped the whole top 5.
Backwards.
It seems like our entire leaderboard has flipped on its head. So $3,000 to those guys as well. Let's go see who is in 3rd slot. Jinx and Worthy. The duo that started out with 8 points in 2 maps, boys, and now they're finishing in 3rd.
That's a comeback. That is a legendary comeback. That again, like I think me and Joe were talking about, it'd be a tall ask, but if anyone's going to be able to do it, it's Jinx and Worthy.
And I mean, this is the reason why we highlighted this duo quite a lot, right? You know, it's kind of champions in their own right, and this goes to show the mental fortitude these guys have.
This means, though, Luda and Sorif, it's either Luda and Sorif or it is Alec and Pumpkin. And Luda and Sorif were outside. They were in 6th place. So even if they come 2nd right now, they will be incredibly happy with that ridiculous comeback. But who's it going to be?
Who's it going to be indeed? So drum roll, please, Jordan, here. I'm going to need a little bit of noise here. So let's see who our champion is for the JBL Quantum Cup of the Asia region. It looks like it is Luda and Sorif coming out on top with just 6 extra points over Alec and Pumpkin. So congratulations to the boys there, and that's a big victory for them.
That is a crazy breakdown. I mean, you just touched on the top points there. Obviously, 6 difference between Luda and Sorif, and a massive comeback. But I also want to just talk about 3rd, 4th, 256 points. So
you just noticed that?
That must have been an elim differential there as well. And 3 points, the deficit from that then to 5th. So between the top number 1 placing and getting 15 grand and 5th place, quick maths, 24 points. That is not a whole lot when you consider first place prize for each round in particular.
Just heard
90
in my
points.
ear as well that it was a elimination
Yeah.
differential
Yeah.
of 5 there between Jinx and Worthy. So
And then same thing, and that's all our top 3 teams all had a victory royale under their belt, and Luda and Sorif again, I have been known to I guess underestimate Luda in a lot of ways. Coming into the Australian Open the start of this year, I called him not to do incredibly well, and he did phenomenally. Came second, and now in this event comes first with Sorif, which is an entirely new team. And again, both incredibly well-known players, both respected as top-tier players in OCE, and that's going to be a big claim for them now as well. First place, that was such a big chunk of prize money.
especially with, across the entirety of this leaderboard that we were looking at, it just felt like there was anybody's game towards the entirety of it. And then we saw towards the end, Luda and Sorif just being able to get the victory there towards the end. But let's have a look to see how our final match did pan out here and see how many points they did end up here. 95 points was what they got here in that 5th and final map. They got a little bit of extra over Alec and Pumpkin. So maybe if Alec and Pumpkin were able to get an extra elimination, maybe if they're able to just stay alive for a little bit longer, that could have been the difference between them going between 1st and 2nd.
Yeah, very much a big difference could have been made in that respect. I mean, we've been talking about it. The difference between a 1st and a 2nd is a 15-point differential there. So even that, obviously neither of those teams got 1st and 2nd, but you know what I mean? Like, that's the difference it can make.
They had 4 games where they made placements. Only 1 game they didn't. So their placements was 1st, 6th, 12th, and 2nd. So again, only 1 game where they fell outside the placement points. So not surprising when you look at it that way. But again, just such a big comeback. It was because they got that 12th place in game number 4 that I guess they dropped them down, and maybe we just didn't think they were going to have that big jump up. But the 2nd place was clearly there because most often they fell inside the top 5 or just outside it.
Exactly, and we've seen that across a lot of these regions. Is consistency is key, right? Just being able to constantly making sure that you're getting in those placement points, because that is where the bulk of your points will be coming from. Yeah, these eliminations can supplement that quite nicely, but if you're not getting in towards that top 10, you're not making a big amount of points, you're not being able to take down those big boys that are sitting towards the top, especially the ones with the victory royales under the belts.
I mean, I think that's a good point and a perfect way to put it. The eliminations are supplementary points to what you're able to get out of the placements. I mean, even looking back at it now, Alec and Pumpkin, they came 2nd. They actually had the most elims.
Yeah, they
but
did.
They just weren't able to get those placement points quite as consistently as what Luda and Sorif were able to do. And so 6 points the gap. I mean, get another 2 elims, I suppose, would be the way you'd look at that one. But let's be real.
A lot. 10 more eliminations than even 4th place.
Yeah.
So when you look at it that way, they really did rack up the eliminations. They had 6 extra eliminations on 1st place, and they're 6 points behind, though, like a decent amount. It was still at least 2 more eliminations they needed to get. So crazy to think.
And that's where it comes down to all those extra placements. Maybe you go into map number 2, you get an extra 2 placements over these other guys, and that's an extra 10, 15, 20 points that gets put onto your total rather than theirs. And that's where it feels like you need to make sure that you're having these consistent results, and especially in a format where it is so placement heavy, you need to make sure that you're hitting those top 10s. And then, 1 to 2 maps, if you don't have a good placement, if you don't get some good points, you can really start to fall behind the 8 ball.
Yeah, definitely. And, that's something that we talk about all the time in any battle royale, not just Fortnite. It's going to be a case of consistency is key. You obviously need to have the skill. You need to have the mental fortitude as well, more importantly. Like, if you go into that 4th game, you come out 12th place, you think, oh, no, we've thrown it away. And then you just tilt off the face of the planet going into game 5. That can be your tournament done. But hey, take a 2nd place in game number 5. What a difference that ends up making, and you come away in 1st place.
We talked about it, right? We talked about, do you want to be in the lead at the start? Do you want to bring it back at the end? It was a story of getting momentum towards the end, really jumping back up in there. A lot of the people who made our money, I mean, Jinx and Worthy, our 3rd place, really did come out of nowhere, jumped up at the very end. Luda and Sorif saved one of their best games, their 2nd best game for last as well. It really was a tale of that last game because that's when all the big teams were interacting. So if you don't make it to the end, not only do you not get your own points, but that's where they were playing spoiler. We saw pretty much all the top 5 teams verse each other at the very end. If you eliminate them, it's not just a swing of how many points you gained off them, it's how many they lose off not getting them off you. So it really was about finishing strong.
Yeah, and another thing with this format, because it is only 5 matches as well, it felt like, if you had 3 of those good pop-up maps, which we saw from Jinx and Worthy, you're still able to get into those high placements when it comes to the prize pool, right? Because all you need to do is get, maybe a victory royale, maybe a 2nd place with a few eliminations on top, and then you've taken over people who weren't even in the top 10.
Yeah, definitely. Look, I'll tell you what, there are many things that you can talk about when it comes to placement points and rankings, etc., etc. But I suppose the main takeaway is that Luda and Sorif just did it all better than everyone else. That is the one thing that you have to say. It's like, end of the day, one team might have got more elims, one team might have got some placement points here and there, looked a bit better at the start of the day, but consistency is key, and they just did that better than everyone else across the board.
It's also interesting to mention as well, Luda has always been known as a very solid solo player. That's what he did AO. He's done that in a lot of solo titles. Hasn't done it too much in a team mode title. He hasn't really had that kind of big pop-off that he's now had tonight to get a really good chunk of the money. At the same time, though, compare that to Sora, very, very good in team game modes. Doesn't perform as well in solos, so maybe the linking of the two has really led to this incredible duo, and it's kind of unfortunate to see we're now going to shift into trios for all of the competitive season next year, because I would have liked to see some of these duos play out more as well, because it was a lot of newly formed duos that did quite well tonight. Papi and Skits never played together before as far as I'm aware. Jason Vortex have, Jinx and Worthy have, but Alec and Pumpkin haven't, and Luda and Sorov haven't. So it really was a story of new duos.
Do you think this really helps them going in towards that trio kind of season, Ozzy?
Yeah, it could affect things with how they play as well. It's quite hard because, again, it's not surprising to see. You do have Jinx, Worthy, and Alec who are still playing together. That's your third and second place. Pumpkin's kind of left in there as well. Me and Jordan were talking about earlier, the kind of third wheel effect. It does get quite hard, but this could change teams right now. We've got quite a while. Trios FNCS doesn't start till February. This could change things. Like Luda and Sorov, hey man, we played really, really well. Let's kind of like make sure we keep this going as well. Could shift up the teams a little bit. So yeah, I think it does. And again, in duos, it is so close to trios. You just got to find that extra person to link in with you. Obviously, you can see the recipe for success that Jinx and Worthy have whenever they play together. In any game mode, they dominate. You can add another good player to that, and of course, it's still going to work.
All right, lads, we're trying to get our winners interview ready and raring to go here. So let's change gears a little bit. How do we feel about the JBL Quantum Cup so far? We've gone through all the 3 regions for Fortnite. We've seen a few different playstyles, especially with the different format as well. How do we think that it's played out all so far?
Yeah, I'm happy with it. I mean, of course, we're done with Fortnite now for the rest of the JBL Quantum Cup, but I was happy. I liked watching NA. I got to say, I probably enjoyed watching Asia even more. No bias from the casters down under. But yeah, it's very nice to sort of jump back into Fortnite. Everyone would know I don't cover a whole lot of Fortnite, but I do like to stay up to date, keep an eye on things every now and then. It's one of those games that I like to just jump into for a bit of fun, and yeah, I had a bit of fun today. So, got to say, good stuff from Fortnite. Definitely looking forward to PUBG tomorrow, though. You know, that's my bread and butter. So I'll be hosting that one as well, and I'm quite eager to catch up with how things have been going over in Asia there as well. You know, we follow suit. We go from Asia Fortnite, go straight into another Battle Royale, Asia PUBG, and I suppose Valorant as well. You know, it's definitely not a game that I cover, but that's a big one at the moment. You know? So everyone's quite keen to jump on a bit of Valorant these days, and we actually have some like top tier Valorant. Like if you're talking about best in the world, North America at the moment is really quite up there.
I mean, 100 Thieves after that big victory in First Strike, and those boys are playing in the JBL Quantum Cup. So I mean, if you want to see some Valorant, if you want to see some top tier North American Valorant, that is where you want to go.
I feel like that's almost been unfortunate not for them. I mean, it could be fortunate they could do it back to back, but I feel like they just won such a big title, and they don't get to even keep their crown for a couple of weeks now because it could be taken. They have to defend it so quickly, and some people might love that. As a viewer, you love it as well, but as the team, you think like, man, like, I don't want a tournament this close because now I can lose again.
You say that though, but there is also 50 grand on the line. So
very true. Maybe they won't complain.
might get incentivized and just say, oh, you know what? There's a bit of money involved here as well. Maybe we're not too disappointed about having to play off for that.
Very true.
All right. Well, it does feel like that Valorant is going to be the hottest new one here on the block. But ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, that is it for us here in the JBL Quantum Cup. Unfortunately, we did not get our winners interview, but we'll have to figure it out a little bit later on. Thank you, everybody, here for joining us in the Asia region of Fortnite. Thank you to Elfish Guy and Aussie Antics for taking us through all the action of today. We do still have PUBG as well as Valorant left here for the JBL Quantum Cup, so make sure you guys are there for the next couple of days. So stay safe, and we'll see you then.